The young man devoured the fried meat with gusto, his sharp teeth tearing into the succulent flesh as steam rose from the piping hot meal. He savored the taste, confirming to himself that fried thunder dragon meat was indeed the best, and mused about the good souvenir he had secured for the villagers. High above the vast landscape, a majestic eagle soared through the clear sky, its wings spread wide against the distant clouds. As the bird continued its silent patrol, below, a small, intricate device lay hidden amidst the dense foliage, while the eagle's shadow briefly crossed the canopy of the forest. Further along the winding path, a sturdy horse-drawn cart made its way through the wilderness, passing by more of the peculiar, hidden devices scattered among the undergrowth. The journey led to the cultivated village of Joln, nestled within the western Ural kingdom, a peaceful settlement marked by windmills and fertile fields as the year 1013 of the holy calendar progressed into June. Within the village, life unfolded with simple rhythms. Children played joyfully in the fields alongside grazing sheep, while other villagers gathered water from the well, tending to their daily chores under the watchful eye of the windmills. An elderly man, known to all as Gramps, let out a wide, toothy yawn, a sign of the day's slow pace and perhaps a touch of boredom. Just as Gramps pondered his hunger, a familiar voice called out, and Kakyu arrived at the village entrance, cheerfully waving from his horse-drawn cart. Gramps, startled and delighted, exclaimed his name. Another villager, a goat man, attempted to collect an entrance fee, but Kakyu, with a confident smile, dismissed the notion, reminding him that he was already a part of their village. With a knowing grin, Kakyu declared that rules were like promises to him, and he always kept his promises, his words carrying the weight of unwavering conviction. Sizzling over an open flame, thick cuts of meat cooked to perfection, their rich aroma filling the air. He had prepared a grand feast, and the villagers devoured the succulent meat with unbridled enthusiasm. Alma, in particular, ate with wide-eyed joy, while Jewis and Arnaud, though equally ravenous, seemed overwhelmed by the sheer quantity and richness. As the celebration continued, he generously served more, declaring it his treat and inviting everyone to eat as much as they desired. The pregnant woman, Jewis, and Arnaud praised the deliciousness, but a muscular man and another villager questioned the origin and quality, asking if he was truly giving away such high-grade meat. He simply laughed, revealing he had hunted a thunder dragon, a claim met with disbelief and accusations of lying from the skeptical villagers, who insisted no one could hunt such a legendary beast. The concerned man pointed at him, warning Alma that swindlers often had slanted eyes, grinning mouths, and funny hairstyles, implying Kakyu was one such trickster. Alma, however, fiercely defended him, declaring that her Kakyu would never lie, causing him to smile softly and acknowledge her as his only ally. The villagers laughed at the exchange, while the pregnant woman, holding a mug, suggested to Jewis and Arnaud that Kakyu was a good catch, rich enough to purchase such high-quality meat in large quantities, implying he was a desirable partner. He chuckled at the villagers' playful attempts to marry him off, stating that such matters would be decided by majority vote. Even Gramps, clearly inebriated, joined in, offering his granddaughter to Kakyu, prompting the pregnant woman to playfully scold him for drinking too much and Kakyu to ask if they weren't going to ask for his consent. The raucous laughter and celebration continued late into the night, the sounds echoing under the full moon. He observed the joyous scene, a subtle, knowing smile playing on his lips. The next morning, Alma excitedly asked if he would stay, to which he agreed, accepting her thanks. Meanwhile, the muscular man carried another large cut of meat, ensuring the feast would continue. Jewis, however, was clearly suffering the consequences of the previous night's revelry, clutching his head in pain. The pregnant woman, concerned, urged him to be in bed. He approached the pregnant woman, asking about the baby's well-being. She smiled, noting the baby was getting energetic, attributing it to the meat he had brought, and revealed the birth was expected in about a month. Alma, beaming, listened intently. He watched the pregnant woman, support_11, and Alma, child_01, with a gentle smile. The woman expressed her certainty that the new baby would be happy, to which he simply agreed. He mused that the birth was next month and resolved to visit again after his upcoming trip. Later, exhausted, he collapsed onto his bed, letting out a weary sigh. He reflected on his current peaceful existence, marveling that he never thought he would live such a normal life, considering it a true miracle. His thoughts drifted to a distant past, a long time ago, when he had lost his life in Japan, lying bloodied on cold pavement. Due to his misdeeds, he was plunged into hell and reincarnated as a demon, a winged figure with horns, overlooking a desolate, ruined cityscape. His existence in hell was truly horrific, marked by a blood-stained crescent moon hanging over a barren, twisted landscape. He faced constant peril, nearly perishing countless times at the hands of various entities and higher-ranked demons who sought to destroy him. His life was far from normal, perpetually threatened by the ongoing, bitter conflict between Satan and Zeus, which fueled constant wars and devastation across hell. Even amidst such desperate struggles, he persevered for 2 grueling years, managing to acquire the wisdom and power essential for his survival in hell. His newfound power drew the attention of the supreme deities themselves. Satan, hell's supreme deity, declared he would end his life, while Zeus, heaven's supreme deity, vowed to punish the shitty brat. He He realized, with a grimace, that escape was impossible. With no means of escape, he was caught between the two enraged deities as Satan unleashed dark, swirling energy orbs, and Zeus struck with a powerful, lightning-infused punch, both attacks converging on him simultaneously. He had been certain of his demise, engulfed in a cataclysmic explosion that tore through the city. The sheer force of it had been overwhelming, a blinding flash followed by utter devastation. Yet, against all odds, he found himself alive, reflecting on the 2 arduous years that had passed since that moment. When consciousness finally returned, he awoke in a world entirely alien to his own, transformed into a demon. His new form, complete with horns and dark wings, was a stark contrast to his previous human existence. It took him some time to grasp the reality of his situation. Over the next 3 years, he diligently learned the language and culture of this new world, disguising himself as a human and traveling extensively as a merchant, all while feigning amnesia to conceal his true origins. Now, resting comfortably in his bed, he mused that his current life felt like a dream, almost too good to be true. He considered himself truly blessed. He quickly dismissed the fleeting doubt, declaring himself incredibly fortunate. His 2 years of hellish experience had been a reward, transforming him into an ultra-strong individual in this world. He no longer feared for his life, enjoying good food and comfortable sleep daily, viewing this new existence as his ultimate bonus stage. With a wide, almost maniacal grin, he laughed heartily, proclaiming that this peaceful, powerful new life was exactly what he had longed for, a just reward for the suffering inflicted by Satan. It would be a crime not to revel in it. Moments later, Alma, a young child, approached him shyly, offering him water at her mother's request. He graciously accepted, admitting he was parched. Alma then eagerly presented him with a pair of handmade leather gloves, explaining that her father had taught her how to make them. She had noticed he didn't wear gloves, and new traveling merchants often suffered from rope burn on their hands. He tried on the gloves, marveling at their perfect fit and comfort. He praised Alma, noting how tough they must have been to make and appreciating that she had even dyed them vermilion. Alma beamed with pride at his words, and he, in turn, offered a heartfelt thank you, promising to treasure her thoughtful gift. As the evening drew to a close, Alma bid Kaki good night, playfully declaring that her efforts were for her future husband. He responded with a soft good night, observing her embarrassed yet determined expression as she departed. He then found himself contemplating his own nature, realizing he could not marry a human like Alma. As a demon, his skin was too resilient for the rope burns common to merchants, a stark reminder of his non-human existence. Meanwhile, Alma, oblivious to his internal conflict, joyfully bounded down the stairs. His thoughts drifted to the concept of family, picturing Alma nestled contentedly between her parents, a scene that highlighted the warmth and connection he felt, yet also the inherent differences that separated him from their world. Lying in his bed, Kakyu continued to grapple with the implications of his demonic existence. He understood that he could not seriously consider starting a family with humans, for demons did not age, and he would inevitably outlive even his own children. The next morning, the muscular man, Alma's father, invited Kakyu to go fishing once he finished eating. Kakyu, now wearing the handmade gloves Alma had given him, happily consumed his meal, while Alma sat beside him, radiating joy at the sight of him using her gift. Later, as they fished, Alma's father pointedly warned Kakyu that he would not give his daughter to him, implying a suspicion of Kakyu's intentions. Kakyu, understanding the underlying accusation, quickly retorted that he was not a pervert. The conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. Kakyu vehemently declared that he had no desire to become Alma's father's son, while the older man, equally enraged, demanded to know if Kakyu was implying Alma was not charming enough. After their outburst, a more reflective mood settled between them. Kakyu pondered what Alma could possibly see in him, to which her father suggested it was likely because he had saved her life, though he found the thought annoying. Alma's father then revealed a deeper truth about his daughter. He explained that while she always appeared energetic around others, making it difficult to notice, Alma had a weak constitution when she was born and was mostly bedridden at home. Doctors had even predicted she wouldn't live past 10 years of age. Alma's mother joined the conversation, adding that around a year and a half ago, when Kakyu returned from his first trip, Alma began eating the meat and spices he brought back. Since then, as they could now see, her health had dramatically improved, transforming her into the vibrant child she was today. He listened as Alma's mother, Jewess, expressed profound gratitude, recalling his arrival in the village when he was an unknown with an incomprehensible language. Now, she and everyone else in the village were thankful for his presence. He mused on her gratitude, but then Alma's father, Arnaud, vehemently declared that Kakyu had done nothing but unnecessary things. Kakyu, meanwhile, noticed a small bite on his hand. Moments later, as Arnaud fished, he told Kakyu to choose between fishing or talking, emphasizing that the main topic was a draft notice. Arnaud proudly pulled a large fish from the water, announcing that a draft notice had arrived from Central Command and that he had decided to join the army. Kakyu expressed his surprise, but Arnaud clarified that it was not a sudden decision, as he was already a reserve soldier. He further explained that there had been a recent increase in demon activity within the Euro Kingdom. Arnaud then made a solemn request, asking Kakyu to care for Alma and Ars should anything happen to him. Kakyu, still processing the news, admitted he had been unaware of the demon activity because he always teleported when traveling, missing local updates. Juis, Alma's mother, interjected, reassuring Kakyu that the next baby would be a male, and that ours was the name of the child growing within her. Kakyu looked at Arno, questioning if he was truly certain about entrusting such a responsibility to him. Arno affirmed his trust, explaining it was a necessary precaution, as his own father had been devoured by a demon, and one could never predict what might happen. His gloved hands gripped the fishing rod, a moment of quiet contemplation passing over him. As they sat together, overlooking the village, Kakyu finally responded to Arno's request, stating that he would not make any promises. He prepared to depart from the village, his cart laden, as a familiar stone wall marked the boundary of his temporary home. As he finalized his business, receiving a payment of 30,000 riel, Alma, her eyes wide with concern, asked when he would return. He vaguely replied, suggesting the end of the next month, promising to visit her brother. Moments later, he knelt before Alma, offering her a small, unexpected gift. She gasped in surprise, realizing he was giving her a dragon scale necklace as a token of gratitude for the glove she had made. With a final, heartfelt, "Take care, Alma," he turned to the villagers, who waved him off with shouts of thanks and farewell. He cast one last glance back, seeing Alma and Arno beaming with joy, their happiness a stark contrast to the journey that lay ahead. With a determined resolve, he guided his cart away from the village, leaving behind the familiar faces and embarking on his merchant's path. His travels took him through bustling markets where he traded with various merchants, and to desolate ruins where he paused in quiet contemplation. He also found time for camaraderie, sharing drinks and meals with fellow travelers. His journey continued, the road stretching before him as he pressed onward with his cart. By July, he arrived at the royal capital Wyverna in the Gazeria Dragon Kingdom. There, a guild official presented him with a rose insignia and a document, confirming his promotion to an intermediate-level merchant. This new status would allow him to conduct business with nobles, a significant step forward in his mercantile career. With his new capabilities, he immediately sought out new goods. A merchant offered him a black item, and he, with a glint in his eye, declared he would buy it for 1 gold coin. He listened as the female merchant warned him about the holy knights currently on an expedition in the area, advising him to be careful. She then inquired if he hailed from Ural, to which he confirmed, adding with a smile that he would boast about his new intermediate merchant status upon his return. She expressed surprise at his rapid advancement, noting he had only just begun his merchant career. Continuing her explanation, she detailed how the Holy Knights were permitted to undertake special expeditions every few years to neighboring countries, ostensibly to eradicate hidden demons. She further elaborated that the Holy Knights of the Church possessed the ability to detect demonic signs through blessings from Goddess Sama. However, she added, according to rumors, their actions were not always as righteous as they seemed. His expression darkened, and he clenched his fist, a surge of anger rising within him. He realized the truth. The Holy Knights were exploiting their divine blessings, falsely accusing innocent villagers of being demons, and then plundering their possessions. They preyed on ordinary people who lacked the ability to discern true demonic presence. Unaware of his internal turmoil, the female merchant simply advised him to be careful on his journey home. As he walked through the bustling streets, his mind still reeling from the revelation, a sudden, powerful sensation washed over him. He felt a distinct presence, a surge of magical energy, and a chilling realization dawned. A mana purge was occurring nearby. Kakyu felt a profound sense of unease, a premonition of trouble, yet he acknowledged the necessity of using teleportation magic. He was pressed for time, despite his reluctance to employ such powerful abilities in a public area. Moments later, the teleportation concluded, depositing him in a dense, overgrown forest, far from any public gaze. Nearby, a simple horse-drawn cart stood amidst the foliage, seemingly abandoned, adding to the unsettling quiet of the woods. He emerged from the tall grass, his gloved hand pushing aside the dense vegetation, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. He quickly moved through the terrain, running across a small rise before tumbling down into a thicket of trees, his haste evident. Regaining his footing, he looked out over a vast, open field where plumes of dark smoke rose ominously in the distance, painting a grim picture against the sky. His eyes widened in alarm, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple as the gravity of the situation settled upon him. His expression a mask of shock. He stared at the ground, a small, indistinct creature near his feet, as he considered the implications of the smoke, realizing with a jolt that it could only mean a fire. His brow furrowed, a deep frown creasing his face as he processed the unsettling sight, his mind racing with possibilities. He attempted to reassure himself that nothing serious was happening, urging himself to remain calm, even as he broke into a desperate sprint towards the distant smoke, driven by an undeniable urgency. He continued his desperate sprint, his mind racing. Smoke could rise from chimneys when people cooked, he reasoned, but it was not the right season for burning dead grass in the fields. The scale of the distant fire suggested something far more sinister. As he pushed himself harder, the villagers, including Alma and Arnaud, called out to him, their voices filled with concern. He acknowledged them, his expression grim, knowing he had to act if there was truly a fire. Moments later, he arrived at the source of the smoke, only to find his worst fears realized. The village was engulfed in flames, structures reduced to rubble, and a chilling silence hung over the devastation. Everything is okay, he tried to reassure himself, but the scene before him screamed otherwise. He stumbled through the burning ruins, the heat searing his skin, his breath catching in his throat. Amidst the smoldering debris, he discovered the lifeless body of a woman, her long hair splayed across the charred ground. The sight of the deceased woman, coupled with the overwhelming destruction, sent a wave of horror through him. His eyes widened, his mouth agape in a silent scream as the full weight of the tragedy crashed down. He fell to his knees, surrounded by the fallen. Alma lay bleeding. Arnaud was gravely wounded. Jewess was barely clinging to life, and even Gramps, the elder, was sprawled amidst the wreckage, all victims of the brutal assault. A guttural cry of anguish tore from his throat. He desperately reached out to Alma, then to Arnaud, Jewess, and Gramps, his voice a choked whisper as he called their names, pleading for a response from the dying villagers. Alma, barely conscious and tears streaming down her face, looked up at him. He knelt beside her, the first drops of rain beginning to fall, mixing with the smoke and ash. He implored her, asking what had happened and who had committed such an atrocity. As he pressed for answers, his grief and rage reached a breaking point. His left eye began to transform, a complex, intricate pattern emerging within its iris, tears streaming down his face as he cried out for her to tell him the truth. In that moment of profound despair, two distinct ocular abilities manifested within him. The soul viewer, allowing him to perceive the essence of souls, and the devil's eye, a power yet unknown in its full scope, but clearly born from the depths of his anguish. His mind flashed back to a time when villagers, desperate and pleading, begged a group of holy knights to halt their advance, insisting they knew no demons. Among the armored figures, a stern commander on horseback listened impassively. The commander, however, dismissed their pleas, accusing them of lying and declaring that undeniable traces of an evil presence permeated the village. He further asserted that the dragon meat they possessed proved their demonic ties, as no one could defeat a dragon without being a demon themselves. He pressed a villager, his spear tipped dangerously close, demanding to know who had provided the meat. The commander was convinced they were covering for someone, challenging them to reveal the truth if they wished to prove their innocence. Declaring them servants of demons, the commander gave the order to kill them all. Amidst the ensuing chaos and slaughter, a younger Kaku watched, drenched and horrified, realizing with a chilling dread that it had happened again. They had covered for him. He reflected on the world's unreasonableness, questioning why innocent people had to die. Standing before a hanging body, Kaku, now older and in a suit, lamented his repeated inability to save anyone, a familiar despair washing over him. His face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury, his eyes burning with an intense, almost demonic glow. The word bastards ripped from his throat, followed by a guttural, fucking as his rage reached its peak. In that moment of profound despair and rage, Kaku's unique ocular abilities fully manifested. The soul searcher in Devil's Eye awakened, radiating a powerful, swirling energy that pulsed around him, ready to unleash their true potential. His newly awakened powers extended outward, manifesting as glowing, ethereal traces that spread across the ground, mapping the unseen paths and energies of the world around him. The luminous trails continued their rapid expansion, stretching across fields and over rugged terrain, revealing a vast network of interconnected energies that only Kaku could now perceive. Finally, with a blinding flash of light, the full extent of his power erupted, signaling a profound transformation and the unleashing of his true capabilities. He unleashed a powerful, swirling attack, his eyes wide with intense focus as a brilliant light erupted from his outstretched hand. Around him, other figures were caught in the chaotic vortex of his unleashed power. As his power surged, the narrative shifted, revealing holy knights on a grand balcony observing a falling star streaking across the night sky. Simultaneously, a younger Kaku, in different attire, also watched a similar star descend, a sense of wonder or foreboding in his gaze. The falling star, or perhaps a consequence of the earlier events, culminated in a massive explosion that rocked the landscape. The holy knights, including their commander, reacted with profound shock and alarm, questioning the nature of the devastating blast. The devastation was immense, leaving him standing alone amidst the ruins of a ravaged land, a mushroom cloud looming ominously in the distance. He reflected on the past 2 years, acknowledging the profound loss he had endured. His thoughts drifted to the horrors of his past, a time defined by endless wars, relentless starvation, and the omnipresent shadow of death. He recalled being utterly dominated in a hellish realm, his body broken and defeated. In that brutal existence, he had been deceived, betrayed, plundered, and forced to consume the flesh and souls of others, until his very soul had become that of a demon's. Yet, when he first arrived at this particular village, something began to stir within him. Initially, a sinister intent had gripped him. He had planned to eliminate all the villagers, intending only to extract information from them. He mused that if they hadn't offered him anything useful, their lives would have been forfeit. However, their unexpected kindness began to disarm his resolve. Over time, he found himself integrated into their simple lives, working in the fields, sharing meals, and participating in their daily routines. He learned to harvest wheat, build snowmen, and even tend to their livestock, experiencing a warmth and camaraderie he had long forgotten. 2 years passed in this peaceful existence. He finally tasted good food again, and everything about this new life, so warm and genuine, felt irreplaceable, a stark contrast to the mockery of his past. But the tranquility was shattered as a voice addressed him, calling him Satan-sama, and questioning if he would allow even this newfound peace of mind to be taken from him. His demonic features, once suppressed, resurfaced, hinting at a profound internal conflict. He felt a chilling resolve settle within him, a dark acceptance that if he were to lose everything he had ever gained, then he no longer cared for anything. He might as well abandon all need and desire. The shadowy presence, his inner demon, embraced him, its voice a guttural command to destroy everything. It urged him to unleash the chaos within. He struggled against the encroaching darkness, a pained gasp escaping his lips as the demon taunted him, demanding if he remembered his true nature. It called out to him, addressing him by name, Kakyu. His transformation was complete. Kakyu, now a monstrous, horned beast, roared in agony and power, his demonic form fully manifest as the young girl, Alma, lay unconscious on the ground nearby. The young girl stirred, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion, murmuring Kakyu's name in a soft, questioning tone. He then appeared in his human form, a somber expression on his face as he acknowledged his true, demonic nature. He knew it was wrong, yet felt powerless to stop it. She clenched her fists, her brow furrowed in frustration and determination, as if challenging his resignation. She questioned if he was telling her to simply get a grip. He knelt before her, taking her hand, a profound sadness in his voice as he confessed to having lost everything. He offered a heartfelt apology. He looked away, his expression hardening with a fierce resolve as he declared that Alma and the others were his only family. He turned back to Alma, his gaze meeting hers as she reached out to him, a silent plea or offering of comfort passing between them. He leaned into Alma's comforting embrace, his eyes wide with a deep, unsettling fear. She held him close, her voice a soft murmur as she urged him to listen carefully. A monstrous, horned beast, its eyes glowing with primal fury, let out a guttural roar. The black liquid of his demonic transformation still clung to his face as he stared in horror at the hulking, winged demon, a chilling manifestation of his own inner turmoil. Elsewhere, a pair of gloved hands reached out, trembling slightly, towards a simple wooden chest. With a soft click, the hands carefully lifted the lid, revealing the darkness within. Moments later, a baby, adorned with a distinctive pendant, cried out, its small hands flailing in distress. As the pendant gleamed, he, still stained by the black ichor, questioned when the baby was due to be born. Overwhelmed with emotion, he wept openly as he cradled the infant. Alma, standing nearby, reassured him that the next child would surely be male, and then, with a gentle smile, asked if he was truly willing to entrust this baby to her, to which he firmly affirmed his desire. In a desolate, ruined landscape, he knelt amidst the debris, his voice filled with anguish as he cried out the name, Ars. He, the demon Kakyu, embraced the infant Ars, declaring his intention to raise him as his own son and vowing to make him the happiest person in the world. He then offered his very soul, a glowing, thorny mass, as part of this profound commitment. Later, holding Ars close, he silently apologized to Arno for a promise he couldn't make before, vowing to make a new one now. Years passed, and a young Ars, now a child, sat alone, reflecting on Kakyu's words that he would live a happy life. In a desolate, ruined landscape, Kakyu stood, holding the baby Ars aloft, his voice echoing with an absolute promise. Far away, a gloved hand moved a chess piece, a voice remarking on the fool who would use his own soul to make a contract, questioning the nature of such a demon. In the Earth's Hell realm, Zeus and Satan discussed the lesser demon Kakyu, who had been stranded in another world because of Zeus. Satan noted Kakyu's power, comparable to the highest-ranking demons, while Zeus expressed disappointment that Kakyu hadn't died in 2 years, despite his high hopes. Zeus then threatened to burn down hell and destroy all of Satan's familiars if Kakyu caused harm in someone else's world, though Satan mockingly pointed out that Zeus had already destroyed them. Satan, with a sinister grin, pointed, urging Zeus to observe the shitty geezer and the human he had chosen. Zeus, his expression grim, simply muttered about the profound irony of the situation. Kakyu held the infant Ars close, a playful, almost mischievous grin on his face, yet his thoughts were consumed by the child in his arms. As he walked through a desolate graveyard, the weight of his promise lingered. What kind of path would a demon and a human child truly walk together? The grim reality was that this very child, Ars, was destined to kill him in the future. Within the vast, imposing halls of the demon emperor's palace, a cloaked figure knelt before the throne. The air was thick with anticipation as the emperor, seated high above, questioned if the impossible had truly come to pass. The cloaked figure, its face obscured by a mask, confirmed the event with a simple, deferential, "Yes, Your Majesty." Another subordinate, who had been tracking the movements of the knights, had actually witnessed the cataclysmic event firsthand, leaving no room for doubt. The sheer scale of the explosion, resembling a mushroom cloud, spoke of immense power. The demon emperor, Zel Melkinos Lucifer, absorbed this information, his expression grim. He concluded that the caster responsible for such a feat must possess power equal to, or even greater than, his own. As the gravity of the situation settled, one of the cloaked figures sharply silenced another who had gasped in disbelief, reminding them of the demon emperor's presence. Zel Melkinos Lucifer, his brow furrowed in thought, cursed the Ika for acting so rashly in pursuit of merit, despite being one of the 4 heavenly kings. He then issued a direct order. The subordinates of all other lords were not to interfere, as the direct subordinates of the insect lord, skilled in investigation and research, had already formed a unit and were on site. A female demon, holding a fan, admonished Hades to watch his language and address the emperor properly in public. Hades, however, scoffed, questioning the emperor's apparent weakness and offering to investigate the matter himself. The demon emperor merely smiled, contemplating the implications. Since the unknown entity had attacked the knights, it suggested they were not his enemies. For now, he would observe. He noted that they had hidden themselves so effectively that even the heaven realm couldn't spot them, and after causing a major commotion, they had immediately erased their footprints to avoid being tracked. With a determined glint in his eye, Zel Melkinos Lucifer declared that, regardless of their current elusiveness, they would ultimately fall into his hands one day. Far away, in the human realm's Kalamira church nation, a joyous procession unfolded. Villagers cheered for Saint Summa, a young woman holding a baby named Ars, who was said to be blessed by the goddess. They expressed relief that the princess was giving them blessings today, especially after the terrifying events in Ural, hoping that Saint Sama would find a hero for them, as legend foretold. His birth was a joyous occasion, celebrated by the masses. The Church Nation Knights captain, Sword Saint Zede Kruger, acknowledged the widespread congratulations for the successor's arrival. The Pope, Arlius de Calamira, echoed the sentiment, expressing that as a follower of the goddess and a protector of the people, a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He affirmed that the Saint Sama, who presented the child, also brought hope to the people. Yet, the Sword Saint, Zede Kruger, observed that the birth of a saint often indicated impending political strife. He believed the aristocratic faction would eventually realize this, though it was not the time for such concerns. The Pope, however, perceived a deeper threat, sensing that danger was rapidly approaching the human realm. But the Saint Sama, cradling the infant Ars, offered reassurance to his eminence, confirming that all would be well. As the procession continued, the Pope expressed his conviction that the goddess would bless them, and that this child, Ars, would surely guide the hero. The infant, in turn, smiled brightly, seemingly acknowledging the words. Meanwhile, far from the grand procession, a peculiar scene unfolded in Joln village, where 3 goats, with surprisingly human-like expressions, seemed to be communicating. He, a young man named Kakyu, appeared exasperated, surrounded by the talking goats, who seemed to be greeting him. Indeed, milking these peculiar creatures had become his daily ritual, a necessity for the infant Ars. It had been a month and a half since he adopted Ars, and he had even teleported the goats from Joln village to ensure a steady supply of milk. Despite the unusual circumstances of his upbringing, the infant Ars thrived, perfectly healthy and full of joyful energy, reaching out with a reassuring smile. The infant Ars proved to be exceptionally energetic, constantly moving and laughing. His guardian, Kakyu, found himself exasperated, calling out to him for his incessant activity. Kakyu wondered if babies truly moved so much at only 2 months old. Despite his frustration, he gently tried to calm the squirming child, suggesting he must be hungry. Kakyu, now with Ars strapped to his back, began the meticulous process of preparing milk. He reflected that a month and a half of fatherhood had trained him to make milk without issue. First, he boiled water, then sterilized the homemade baby milk with magic, and finally cooled it to human body temperature. He offered the bottle to Ars, but the infant immediately rejected it, spitting out the milk with a disgusted expression. A nearby goat, observing the scene, calmly explained that goat milk would naturally taste different, and such reactions were to be expected, depending on the day. Undeterred, Kakyu resolved to refine the taste. He decided that at times like this, he would add nut jam and sugar cubes to the milk. However, even with the added sweeteners, Ars reacted with a shocked and disgusted expression, spitting out the concoction once more. Kakyu slumped against the wall in despair, while Ars lay in his crib, still covered in the rejected milk. He sighed, knowing he had to change Ars's clothes, which were now completely soiled. Kakyu tried to maintain his composure, reminding himself not to get depressed over such things, even as he struggled to change the still-moving infant. Kakyu admitted to himself that he had not anticipated raising a child would be so difficult. Seated on a grand throne, with Ars resting on his lap and a goat lounging beside him, Kakyu mused that he had thought he could handle this challenge smartly. He had, after all, fought in hell for 2,000 years and mastered thousands of magic spells. Yet, the reality of childcare proved to be a harsh and humbling experience. He found himself utterly unprepared for the nuances of childcare. He pondered spells to soothe a crying infant, to elicit laughter, or even to simply clean clothes, but realized he knew none of them. A profound understanding dawned on him. mothers were truly indispensable figures. As he gazed upon the sleeping Rs, a tiny drool escaping the infant's lips, Kaku's heart swelled. He couldn't help but think of him as an absolute angel. He then watched Jewess, Arnaud, and a pregnant woman walking together, pondering if they, too, felt the immense weight and joy of raising a child. Despite the arduous journey of raising Rs, which at times felt reminiscent of his time in hell, he found that merely looking at the infant's peaceful sleeping face was enough to restore his own vitality. He wished he could share this profound experience with others. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open, and he furiously admonished himself not to fall asleep. With Rs now resting, he declared it was time to tackle the household chores. He moved with incredible speed, first tending to the livestock, then swiftly cutting wood, and finally washing clothes with a powerful splash. His tireless efforts continued as he diligently worked the land, engaging in the demanding task of farming. After completing his extensive list of chores, he stood amidst the fields, a deep sigh escaping his lips as crows cawed overhead, marking the end of his strenuous labor. Wiping the sweat from his brow, he revealed that he and Rs had moved out of the village, noting the oppressive heat of their new location. A map of the world illustrated their journey, showing a vast distance of approximately 3,000 kilometers from the Ural Kingdom, where the village was located, across the Rege Sea and Lurius Sea, to the southern continent of Elvrant. They had settled in a forest within the central area of this new land. He further explained that the reason for their relocation was his past action of killing holy knights, which made pursuit by the Church Nation a distinct possibility. Although he doubted they could detect his identity through magic, he moved as a precautionary measure. Moreover, raising a child demanded time and stability, which was impossible while being hunted. Rs, hearing this, let out a small surprise sound. With his explanations complete, he offered to introduce his new home, a simple yet sturdy stone dwelling nestled amidst the foliage. He had finally settled into his new home, a renovated ancient elf fortress, a place he had discovered and kept hidden during his long wanderings before Joln village. The fortress, perched on a cliff, offered natural protection, and though it was located in a tropical forest just below the equator, the semi-underground rooms maintained a stable and comfortable temperature. Kaku had personally renovated the interior with magic, adding furniture and amenities, and even ensured an indoor well for water supply. Rs was there, safe, and a small field and barn completed their secluded haven. Despite their remote location deep within the forest, he knew that individuals with keen senses, such as the Holy Knights, could still detect traces of magic. Therefore, as a precaution, he erected a powerful barrier around the fortress, designed to completely conceal any magical residue, allowing them to enter and exit freely without detection. He reflected on his past, recalling a time when his previous homes were often reduced to rubble the day after he built them, a period he grimly referred to as being in hell. He mused that his current dwelling was somewhat dilapidated, but if he continued to expand it steadily, he might one day build a true castle. He quickly dismissed the thought, however, realizing that such an endeavor would compromise its purpose as a hidden sanctuary. With a contented smile, he affirmed his commitment to his new dwelling, declaring it his dream home, one he had yearned for over 2 millennia. He vowed to treasure it above all else. Suddenly, a colossal explosion erupted from the fortress, sending debris and shockwaves across the landscape. He screamed in horror, witnessing the destruction of his cherished home. Amidst the chaos, he rushed to Rs, who sat unharmed amidst the rubble, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. He cried out, asking if the baby was all right, expressing immense relief that Rs was safe. Holding Rs close, he surveyed the damage, noting a gaping hole in the roof. He wondered aloud if it had been a bolt of lightning, despite the clear sky, or perhaps a demon beast, struggling to comprehend the sudden destruction. As he pondered the mystery, Rs began to drool, a small stream trickling from his mouth. He looked down at the baby, a bewildered expression on his face, wondering what could possibly be happening. Suddenly, Rs let out a powerful sneeze, which manifested as a massive burst of magical energy, engulfing the baby and Kaku in a cloud of force. The true cause of the destruction was revealed. The lingering magical residue from Rs's sneeze shimmered in the air, a testament to the immense, uncontrolled power he possessed. The baby, Rs, lay sleeping, a faint magical aura emanating from him. It was clear he had been born with the ability to use magic, a fact punctuated by his powerful, uncontrolled sneezes. He pondered the anomaly, knowing that most people in Joln village possessed no magical abilities. A single, startling conclusion formed in his mind: the dragon meat. He recalled how he had always shared his favorite dragon meat with everyone in the village, including Jewess, during the period when Rs was conceived and born. If the potent magic within the dragon meat Jewess consumed had influenced the fetus during its early developmental stages, it meant Rs was born with dragon-type magic coursing through his human body. This revelation brought a wave of concern. He realized it would be incredibly difficult for Rs to live a normal life in human society with such power. He wondered if Rs's unusually rapid growth was also a consequence of this unique inheritance. A profound sense of guilt washed over him. He felt responsible for burdening the child with such a terrible, powerful legacy. Despite the overwhelming challenge, he knew there was only one person who could truly protect and guide Rs. With a determined expression, he knelt and activated his earth transmute magic, conjuring several small, chibi-like replicas of himself from the ground. These mini Kakyu dolls were constructs he could freely control. While such minor tricks were useless in the brutal realm of hell, he believed they would prove invaluable in his current situation, making his new life considerably easier. He immediately put his new helpers to work. One mini Kakyu assisted him in changing Ars's diaper, while he directed another, guiding its movements with precise instructions, ensuring it performed its task correctly. As he continued to direct the constructs, a frustrated expression crossed his face. He realized they weren't autonomous. They were merely remote-controlled extensions of his will, effectively doubling his mental effort. He concluded he needed more practice to master their control. Despite the unexpected challenge, he remained resolute. He reminded himself that he had always intended to raise Ars alone, and this new hurdle would not deter him. Looking down at Ars, he declared with fierce determination that he would raise him well. He urged the infant to observe his father's unwavering resolve. Compared to the constant, brutal warfare and rivalries he had endured as a warlord in hell, raising a single child, even one with immense magical power, would be an easy task. 2 weeks had passed, and he was utterly spent, his eyes heavy with exhaustion as he cradled the wailing infant, Ars, through another sleepless night. His mind raced, cataloging the endless demands. He needed to hunt or work to replenish dwindling food supplies, and the house, in disrepair, desperately needed his magical touch. Yet there was no time. Every 2 hours, day and night, he was consumed by the cycle of feeding, changing, soothing Ars's cries, and retrieving him from his latest escape, all while trying to manage the fields and livestock. He observed the infant's peculiar abilities, noting that Ars was far from a normal child. When he cried, thunder rumbled. A simple bedwetting could unleash a powerful water cannon, and a laugh might conjure a small tornado or even an explosion. This was not the hell he had once known, but a new, unpredictable chaos. Utterly drained, he yearned for even an hour of sleep, but he refused to surrender his resolve. He stood over Ars's crib, the baby sleeping soundly, and silently vowed not to lose his spirit. Despite the overwhelming fatigue that threatened to consume him, he clenched his fist, reaffirming his unwavering commitment. He would raise this child, no matter the cost. His mind drifted back to a different time, a memory of his youth. He stood before his father, arms outstretched in frustration, asking how many times this conversation had to happen. His father, stern and resolute, simply stated that it was work and he had no choice. His father explained that he was doing this for his son's future, urging him to study instead of pursuing a part-time job. But the younger man countered, insisting he could earn his own money and would stay at his current school, defiantly asking if his father was sure he wouldn't pay the rent. He declared that his father shouldn't decide his future for him. Overwhelmed with emotion, the younger man cried out, his voice raw with frustration, declaring that he had never asked for any of this. As the younger man stormed out, his father stood alone in a room, facing a solemn altar adorned with offerings and a framed photograph. The photograph on the altar depicted a younger version of himself, smiling brightly between his father and a kind-faced woman, his mother. He whispered her name, a poignant echo from the past. He stirred, his eyes slowly opening to the dim light, a soft murmur escaping his lips. As he slowly opened his eyes, rubbing them, he saw grotesque goblin figures surrounding him, prompting him to question if he was still caught in a dream. Suddenly, one of the goblins lunged with a crude knife, and he reacted with wide-eyed terror, the dream quickly turning into a nightmare. He jolted fully awake, leaping from his bed, the reality of the goblin infiltration sinking in. Frantically, he called out for Ars, demanding to know his whereabouts. A horrifying realization dawned on him. Ars had been kidnapped, right from under his nose. His face contorted in shock and disbelief, his hand clamping over his mouth. Overwhelmed by a surge of fury, he activated his formidable devil eye and burst out of the house, determined to pursue the abductors. His path, the soul seeker, stretched before him, a dark and ominous trail leading into the unknown. He sprinted forward, his footfalls heavy and urgent, kicking up debris as he accelerated into a desperate chase. As he ran, he berated himself, questioning the point of his carefully erected barriers and his own exhaustion that had allowed the goblins to infiltrate unnoticed. His internal monologue turned bitter, reflecting on his father and the immense burden of raising Ars alone, fueling his desperate pursuit with a mix of anger and self-reproach. He desperately pleaded, his thoughts consumed by the safety of the child. Please, Ars, his fervent wish echoed in the chaotic burst of his power. Please be safe. Moments later, Kakyu burst into a jungle clearing, his eyes locking onto Ars, who was held by a mysterious dark elf woman. A tied-up merchant sat nearby, while a goblin fled into the dense foliage. Ars, he roared. The dark elf, adorned with a slave collar and shackles, held Ars close, her expression unreadable as she turned her gaze away. Kakyu's face contorted in shock and confusion, his eyes wide with disbelief at the sight before him. He wondered internally about the dark elf, questioning her identity and the reason for a slave of her kind being in such a remote location. The elderly merchant, now untied, also pondered her presence. As Kakyu stared, Ars, recognizing him, joyfully reached out his tiny hands and exclaimed, "Dada!" Kakyu's surprise was evident. Kakyu attempted to speak with the elderly merchant, asking if he had saved the baby. But the merchant, realizing Kakyu was from overseas, apologized, explaining he couldn't understand his language. Kakyu cursed the communication barrier. The merchant then turned to the dark elf, whom he called Urza-san, and requested she return the child to his father. He expressed his relief at finding Kakyu, recounting how they had encountered goblins carrying the baby on their journey to the holy city. Kakyu reached out to Ars, apologizing for the frightening ordeal. However, the dark elf, holding Ars, hesitated, her gaze falling to the shackles on her wrists, a silent conflict playing across her features. She, the dark elf woman, still cradling the child Ars, looked directly at Kakyu and questioned him again, asking if he was truly the child's father. Kakyu, taken aback by her persistence, asked if she knew their current location. The merchant quickly interjected, explaining that they were deep within the Vokle Great Forest, an unexplored jungle rumored to be home to a fire dragon, a place most people dared not approach. The merchant continued, observing that the old road they stood upon was far from any main thoroughfare. He mused that it was only natural for people to suspect a lightly dressed foreigner, especially one with a child, of being a kidnapper. The dark elf woman's gaze sharpened, her eyes fixed on Kakyu as she reiterated her question, demanding once more if he was truly the child's father. Ars remained nestled securely in her arms. Kakyu looked down, a pensive expression on his face, as he internally grappled with the question of whether he was truly a proper father figure to Ars, admitting to himself that he had been trying to avoid thinking about it. The merchant, observing Kakyu's silence, declared that while he might not know all the intricate details, there was one undeniable truth he could state with certainty. The dark elf woman, still holding Ars, looked at Kakyu with a somber expression. She apologized, stating she could not divulge the specifics, but implied a deep personal connection to Ars. Kakyu looked up, his eyes now burning with fierce resolve, as he declared with unwavering conviction that Ars was the most precious person in the entire world to him. A radiant aura seemed to emanate from his chest, emphasizing his profound sentiment. Kakyu then addressed the dark elf, asking her not to call him his son's savior, acknowledging that he couldn't be angry if she doubted him, and admitting he had overstepped his bounds. He thanked her and bid her farewell, turning to leave. The dark elf looked on, then closed her eyes, apologizing for asking such a question. As Kakyu walked away, the dark elf woman looked after him, a soft expression on her face, and quietly thanked him for saving her son. Her shackled hand, a stark symbol of her bondage, gently held the tiny hand of Ars, a silent gesture of connection. She then spoke, her voice devoid of expectation, stating that there was no need for Kakyu to worry about her, for she was merely a slave. Kakyu, holding Ars, listened intently. As Kakyu walked away, pulling a cart behind him, she remained behind the bars of her cage, her gaze fixed on his retreating form, a silent farewell. Kakyu, now alone with Ars in the dense jungle, reflected on her earlier question about Ars's paternity. He admitted to himself that he had noticed the depth of her feelings, but had chosen to ignore them. He continued his internal monologue, refuting the idea that his actions were for his own benefit. Instead, he insisted he was raising Ars for Ars's sake, because the child could not live a normal life and had only him. He confessed the true source of his hesitation, a profound fear of allowing more people to become important to him or Ars, a terror of the unbearable pain that would come with losing them, as he envisioned a future surrounded by loved ones. This realization struck him with the force of a blow. He had drawn Ars into his solitary existence, and this was nothing more than his own selfishness. He questioned his own conduct, wondering if a true father would act as he had, denying Ars the experiences of friendship, dreams, and love, even though he knew the pain such a life would entail. With a renewed sense of purpose, he clenched his gloved hand, resolving to protect those who became important to them. He declared that this time, he would not lose them. He lifted Ars high above his head, a wide, determined smile gracing his face, ready to fulfill the promise he had made that day and truly become Ars's father. He held the child close, his gaze intense as he asked Ars what he truly desired from him. The child, in turn, simply uttered his own name. This simple exchange solidified a new beginning, as Kakyu, Ars, and the dark elf woman formed a nascent family, their faces alight with genuine happiness, a picture of contentment. He observed the scene, a quiet understanding dawning in his eyes. He saw the truth in their joy, acknowledging the path ahead. With renewed vigor, he lifted Ars high, the child's laughter echoing through the air. He declared his unwavering commitment, promising to do his absolute best for them both. As they journeyed through a dense, tropical landscape, the dark elf woman suggested they search for something specific for Ars. He gently corrected her, emphasizing that whatever they sought, it would be for all of them. He then clarified their true quest. They were searching for a mother, someone who would become an integral part of their burgeoning family. A group of daring adventurers celebrated their triumph, having successfully stolen precious eggs from a formidable dragon. The deed was done in the Heavenly Waterfall Canyon, a treacherous region within the great forest of the Elvent Federal Kingdom. As they made their escape through the dense forest, one of the humanoids cautioned the others not to get overly excited, reminding them that their survival was not yet assured. Another, a beastman, expressed disbelief at their success. The cloaked figure reassured the group, confirming that they were protected by a barrier designed to erase their presence and magical aura. Despite this, the light-haired humanoid, panting from exertion, worried aloud if the dragon was still pursuing them. Their leader, the cloaked figure, dismissed the concern, explaining that they had sacrificed 8 combat slaves and 4 S-rank demon apes to sink the fire dragon into the waterfall basin. He was confident that even such a powerful creature would not emerge unscathed from that ordeal. He then reminded the light-haired humanoid about the agreed-upon share of the spoils, a 3-to-1 ratio, and instructed him to negotiate with their boss for his portion. The group believed these stolen eggs would more than compensate for their losses. The adventurers continued their arduous journey through the dense undergrowth, their footsteps rustling through the leaves as they pressed onward. Suddenly, a chilling realization struck them. The waterfall basin, where they had supposedly defeated the dragon, was now completely empty. The water had evaporated, and the dragon was nowhere to be seen. The cloaked figure, in a panic, urged the others to hide, while the light-haired humanoid could only stare in disbelief. From the depths of the empty basin, the dragon's head slowly emerged, twitching. It was alive, and its eyes, though obscured by the steam, seemed to scan its surroundings. The massive creature then took flight, soaring into the sky and heading west. The light-haired humanoid, relieved, noted that it hadn't noticed them, a testament to their barrier's effectiveness. The cloaked figure wondered aloud where it was going, while the beastman simply declared them safe. As the dragon continued its westward flight, the beastman mused that if it was heading towards a town, that settlement would surely disappear. He then let out a guttural laugh, utterly indifferent to the potential devastation. The dragon, previously thought defeated, was now an enraged calamity, its fury a palpable threat. A young man, Kakyu, held baby R's close, the child looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes, oblivious to the looming danger. He found himself amidst a bustling market, a stark contrast to his usual solitude. Kakyu, holding R's in a sling, felt a surge of nervousness after being away from crowds for so long. Yet he offered a polite greeting to everyone around him. His internal thoughts revealed their location. Pomola, a port town situated along the Elbit River. It was the nearest city to his hideout in the forest, approximately 80 kilometers directly north. He observed the town's strategic importance, noting that overseas merchants communicated in various languages, facilitating trade. The slow-flowing rivers made it easy to travel upstream. Its proximity to the country's main highway further solidified its status as a vital commercial hub. He noted that Pomola also harbored a large black market, thriving on the trade of slaves. Across the Elbut River lay the Vauclay Great Forest, the undisputed territory of the Fire Dragon, a place humans dared not approach due to its dangerous inhabitants. He pondered the true reason for his and Ars's presence in this bustling, yet dangerous, port town. He then revealed his intention, to purchase a slave to assist him in caring for Ars. He stood in the slave market, observing the various individuals offered for sale, including a dark elf woman. He reflected on the recent kidnapping incident, which had occurred just a few days prior, right before his eyes. That traumatic event had forced him to abandon his policy of raising Ars entirely by himself, leading him to seek a new family member to share the responsibility. He considered the implications of seeking a family member, wondering if it meant he was in essence spouse hunting. The thought conjured an image of himself in a wedding suit, standing beside a bride. He concluded that he desperately needed a caretaker to alleviate the overwhelming burden of childcare, acknowledging the inherent contradiction in his methods. After all, there were no kindergartens in this world to assist him. He found himself the subject of curious stares from the townsfolk, who commented on his fine clothes and the baby he carried, labeling him a potential mark. Kakyu, observing their reactions, realized they perceived him as a wealthy, naive individual. He pondered if it was truly so uncommon to see a man with an infant. He continued his search through the bustling slave market, a place far tougher to navigate than he had anticipated. Amidst the crates and crowds, he witnessed a slave attempting to escape, only to be quickly recaptured. The line of available slaves, including a scarred man and an elf with pointed ears, offered little hope. He found no suitable human resources among them, none that met his specific, demanding criteria. He needed someone capable of handling Ars's unpredictable magic outbursts, a person he could trust implicitly, someone safe and not a criminal whose freedom had been revoked. Such an individual, he realized, would be incredibly difficult to find. His thoughts drifted to the ideal qualities, someone he could trust, a strong person, and one who was well-educated. He pictured the dark elf woman, a formidable beast man, and a scholarly man with glasses, all figures he had encountered or imagined. He cursed his luck, lamenting that he had missed out on a truly talented person like the dark elf woman, Urza-san. He knew regrets would not help him now, but the thought still stung. He forced himself to regain composure, knowing he needed to strategize his next move. He overheard merchants discussing something with certainty, but he dismissed it, believing that if a truly important figure were present, the commotion would be far greater. Other merchants, however, were abuzz with the news. Seabass of keen insight was coming to town for an unannounced visit, possibly for a major business negotiation. They saw it as an unmissable opportunity. Kakyu, catching snippets of the conversation, wondered if they could be referring to Louis Sebasta. Louis Sebasta, the president of the vast Sebasta company, was a legendary figure. In just one generation, he had become the greatest merchant on the continent, a super big shot who supplied the Liu rank royal family and dealt in an immense variety of goods, from food to gold, and even slaves. Kakyu, holding ours, exclaimed that this was indeed good news. Even he, a former wood merchant from across the sea, knew of Sebasta's reputation. He believed that if such a famous merchant was in town, he would surely have the perfect person Kakyu needed. His immediate goal was clear: to find Sebasta of keen insight and become acquainted with him. Meanwhile, across the Elbit River, an abandoned house stood on the opposite bank of Pomola, shrouded in overgrown foliage. Within its crumbling walls, a young woman with light hair, adorned with a metal collar and shackles, sat in quiet despair. At that time, her gaze was distant, her eyes reflecting a profound weariness beneath the heavy collar that bound her. Back in Pomola, Kakyu cradled ours, his thoughts consumed by a lingering question. Why had he been able to trust that man, despite his usual skepticism? His internal reflection was interrupted as a cloaked subordinate approached the shackled woman, Urza-sen, informing her that the ship was ready. Kakyu, observing from a distance, mused that he had thought he lost the ability to trust what people say. Her eyes, however, remained impassive, betraying no emotion as she processed the news. A large, beast-like figure then confirmed her understanding, standing over her as she knelt, seemingly accepting her fate. Meanwhile, the renowned merchant Louis Sebasta offered a knowing smile, his expression one of calm confidence. His pleasant demeanor was abruptly shattered as an enraged villager lunged forward, shouting a furious accusation and striking him, while Kakyu, still holding ours, watched the sudden chaos unfold. He, still cradling ours, found himself confronted by an enraged villager who vehemently accused him of burning down his store. Kakyu, attempting to placate the man, apologized profusely, explaining that his son had merely sneezed, accidentally causing the fire. He stood defensively in the bustling marketplace, amidst hanging laundry and the close-knit architecture of the town, bracing himself for the escalating confrontation. The angry villager, now joined by others, declared they had finally cornered him and would turn him over to the town guards. He attempted to de-escalate the situation, suggesting they discuss compensation peacefully, but internally, he cursed his predicament. The enraged villager dismissed Kakyu's offer with a shout, declaring he would never trust someone with the face of a swindler, remarking that it had been a while since he heard such an excuse. Still holding ours, he reflected on his limited options in such a crowded area, realizing he could not carelessly use his powers like high jumps or teleportation without drawing more attention or causing harm. Suddenly, the man with pointed ears urged Kakyu to run to the ship, while another villager pointed to the sky, exclaiming about something in the town. A massive, winged dragon descended from above, its presence causing a powerful gust of wind that tore through the marketplace, scattering debris and interrupting the ongoing conflict. The dragon unleashed a torrent of fire, narrowly missing Kakyu, who instinctively shielded ours with his body, his expression shifting from concern to fierce protectiveness. He glared at the attacking beast, shouting in fury, demanding to know what would have happened if the attack had hit ours, acknowledging how close the strike was. He found himself in a precarious situation, having drawn too much attention, and his immediate instinct was to flee. Yet, a part of him recognized the strange convenience of the unfolding chaos, even as he pondered the inexplicable presence of a fire dragon. Amidst the burning village, with cries for help echoing through the flames, he clutched ours tightly, his expression a mix of shock and concern as the inferno raged around them. His eyes, sharp and conflicted, betrayed a deep internal struggle as he pondered whether he should truly abandon the scene and simply run away. Meanwhile, the fire dragon continued its relentless assault, now targeting the ships attempting to escape by sea, engulfing them in plumes of black smoke and fire. On one of the fleeing vessels, the dark elf woman urged her companions to turn back to shore, while the elderly man beside her exclaimed in disbelief at the sight of a fire dragon. Her attention then shifted, noticing that the slave children were struggling to keep up with the escape. Without hesitation, she declared her intent to save them and bravely leaped from the ship, plunging into the churning waters below as the burning shore loomed in the distance. Observing her selfless act, Kakyu, still cradling ours, found his internal conflict intensifying. He weighed the consequences. Defeating the dragon would undoubtedly reveal his existence to the church, yet fighting it would also expose him to countless onlookers, a risk he was reluctant to take. His thoughts raced, questioning if he truly cared about ours. He should simply leave this perilous place. He wrestled with the idea of exposing ours to the danger of the holy nights just to save strangers, repeatedly asserting to himself that his reluctance was not wrong, that he shouldn't be wrong. Despite his internal justifications, a profound sense of unease gnawed at him, his fist clenching in a silent testament to the unresolved conflict within. Above the chaos, the fire dragon let out a thunderous roar, its massive form dominating the sky, a terrifying force of destruction unleashed upon the world. The dragon continued its rampage, its massive form tearing through the city. Below, the dark elf woman, still shackled, moved with surprising agility, attempting to free the enslaved children. Kakyu, holding ours close, watched the unfolding chaos, his expression a mix of concern and determination. As the dragon unleashed a torrent of fire, she deftly dodged the flames, her movements fluid despite the heavy chains binding her. Meanwhile, Kakyu, still hidden, observed the destruction, his gaze fixed on the struggling dark elf. She pressed her attack, leaping towards the colossal beast, a small blade glinting in her hand. With a desperate cry, she plunged it into the dragon's armored hide, but the blow seemed to barely faze the creature. The dragon recoiled slightly from the unexpected attack, its massive tail sweeping through the air, forcing her to retreat with a swift, agile leap. Undeterred, she continued her assault, her small blade a blur as she aimed for another vulnerable spot on the dragon's leg. The beast roared in frustration, its breath beginning to gather for another fiery attack. With incredible speed, she managed to land another strike, her blade finding purchase in the dragon's scales. The creature bellowed, momentarily distracted by the persistent elf. The dragon, enraged by the continuous harassment, unleashed a powerful gust of wind and fire from its wings, creating a devastating vortex that tore through the surrounding buildings. Its destructive power was immense, leveling structures and sending debris flying. Amidst the chaos, the dark elf woman, though battered, continued her struggle, while Kakyu, still protecting ours, watched with growing urgency. She stumbled, her body bruised and exhausted, but her resolve remained unbroken. The dragon, sensing her weakening, let out a guttural roar, preparing for a final, decisive strike. She looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of pain and fierce resolve, her breath catching in her throat. He stood amidst the chaos, clutching Alma tightly, as the burning town unfolded before him. The massive fire dragon continued its rampage, and in the distance, the dark elf woman fought valiantly against it. He recognized her, a memory stirring within him. She was the elf from that time, her profile etched with a familiar determination. She confronted the colossal beast, observing its wounds and realizing humans must have caused its fury. Despite the overwhelming odds and her slim chance of victory, she resolved to buy precious time for the fleeing villagers. As her eyes darkened, she whispered the word, "Dust." Kakyu watched, startled, as she unleashed a blinding spell, then invoked Strama, a body-strengthening magic that enveloped her in a fiery aura. Empowered, she launched a furious assault, a blur of blow, jump, crush, and slash against the dragon. Yet, Kakyu noted with growing concern that her attacks barely scratched the beast. She continued her desperate struggle, screaming in exertion and pain as the dragon battered her, sending her flying through the air. Kakyu, still holding Alma, understood her desperate tactic. She was exhausting herself, trying to buy time for others to escape. The dragon's relentless assault continued, and she was violently thrown into a pile of rubble. Kakyu gasped, shielding Alma as debris exploded around them. He instinctively covered Alma, protecting her from the flying fragments of stone and wood, his body a shield against the destruction. The dark elf woman lay broken amidst the ruins, coughing weakly, her body battered and defeated as the monstrous dragon loomed over her. The dark elf woman, battered and bleeding, could only utter a desperate, choked sound as the massive fire dragon loomed over her, its fiery breath a searing promise of oblivion. Her defeat left the villagers in utter panic, scattering in all directions as the massive fire dragon unleashed another devastating breath, its flames engulfing the area. Amidst the chaos, Kakyu held Alma close, observing the unfolding disaster with a calm, yet intense gaze. Moments later, Kakyu appeared beside her, catching her as she fell, offering a casual greeting and a surprising acknowledgement of gratitude for her actions the other day. She stared up at him, bewildered and covered in blood, while he, with a chilling smile, declared that he could not allow the savior of his son to perish before him. Still holding Alma, he apologized for being pressed for time and stated he had a question for her, leaving her to wonder how he had arrived so swiftly and what he intended. As the dragon continued its rampage in the background, he asked if she could use the blinding spell she had employed earlier to affect everyone in the town, including the rampaging beast. She looked at him, confused by his request, questioning his intentions, but he simply reiterated his demand, his gaze unwavering. "Can you do it?" After a brief pause, she agreed, stating she could if it was only for a short period of time, as the sounds of the dragon's destruction continued to echo through the ravaged village. With her agreement, Kakyu handed Alma to the dark elf woman, instructing her to hold the child, and then turned, announcing his intention to exterminate a dragon before striding away with an unsettling confidence. The dark elf woman, now holding Alma, could only stare after him, repeating his audacious words in disbelief. Exterminating a dragon. Kakyu shares a light moment with Alma, a small laugh escaping him as she looks up with a questioning gaze. He then found himself reflecting on a recurring phenomenon, a sudden, inexplicable awareness of certain words or events, like the word ROB or the arrival of dusk. He wondered why he could always sense these things. This unique perception extended to people, allowing him to instinctively know when someone was speaking the truth. Back in the present, Kakyu confronted the fire dragon, shouting for its attention. He challenged the beast, asking if it could perceive its surroundings through sound and magic auras, given the blinding spell now active. The massive fire dragon responded with a guttural growl, its head lowered in a menacing posture. With incredible speed, Kakyu moved, dodging the dragon's ferocious lunge, flames erupting around him as he evaded its gaping maw. He then channeled his power, a brilliant burst of energy igniting from his outstretched hand, aimed directly at the colossal beast. His attack struck true, impacting the dragon with explosive force, sending shockwaves through the air. Unseen by him, a cloaked, horned figure observed the fierce battle from a distance. Meanwhile, the dark elf woman, still cradling Alma, reacted with a gasp of terror as the blinding spell intensified around them, the chaos of the battle reaching even their obscured location. After the intense confrontation, Kakyu approached the kneeling dark elf woman, calling her by the name Urza-san. He informed her that he had a favor to ask. She looked up as Kakyu knelt before her, gently taking her hands. He smiled warmly, explaining that he needed her strength, and asked her to join him. He assured her that he would protect both her and Alma, emphasizing that he could not achieve his goals alone. Her gaze then shifted, drawn by the commotion behind them. She saw the massive, lifeless form of the fire dragon, its body sprawled across the ground, surrounded by a few stunned onlookers. Her initial shock gave way to a thoughtful, almost awestruck expression as the full weight of Kakyu's power settled upon her. A few months prior, within the inner sanctum of Lurent's royal castle, the demon emperor Zel-Melkino's Lucifer addressed Urza of the Dusk, a loyal intelligence operative of the royal family. He informed her that he had a classified mission for her. He continued, explaining that a secret meeting was scheduled for that night at the Old Knight's quarters. It involved an exchange of a forbidden magic tool between a Dark Guild's merchant and a noble, an item that could threaten the safety of the citizens. He then instructed Urza, who was observing from a high vantage point, to assassinate the merchant before the exchange could take place. He stressed the importance of this act for the future of the magic country, and she, with wide, shocked eyes, acknowledged his command. Her mask shattered, falling away in pieces, revealing her true face beneath. She plummeted from the rooftop, landing with a soft clang as her mask pieces scattered around her. As she lay there, blood trickling from her mouth, she looked up at the demon emperor, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and confusion, questioning why this was happening. She recoiled, sweat beading on her face, denying the reality of the situation and the voice she heard, finding it impossible to believe. Meanwhile, the demon emperor, now injured and bleeding from his mouth, addressed someone unseen as Your Majesty, while Urza looked on in utter disbelief. He then revealed a sinister smile, holding the mask he had previously worn, hinting at a deeper deception. Far from the demon emperor's sinister machinations, a different drama unfolded within the royal court of Lurence. There, the royal intelligence operative, Urza, knelt bound before a seated figure, as a man in a turban declared her fate. Due to the crime of high treason, Urza of the Dusk would be enslaved. Despite the grave pronouncement, she vehemently protested, attempting to explain that the merchant in question was from a dark guild and that His Highness Eliot himself had given her a classified mission concerning him. The first prince of Lurence, Eliot Lurence, dismissed her claims as nonsense, covering his face in apparent distress and ordering her removal. Her pleas for investigation were met with force as guards seized her, but she continued to struggle, warning that the entire situation was a conspiracy and that the royal family would be in danger if they failed to investigate further. Meanwhile, a noble nearby watched with a sinister smile. From the sidelines, a younger prince, his face etched with concern, called out to his elder brother, Eliot, imploring him to investigate the unfolding events. Soon after, Urza found herself confined within a cold prison cell, her fate uncertain. Guards outside discussed why she hadn't been executed, speculating that the royal family feared retribution from the Shadow Clan, Harenoito, if she were killed. They also mentioned that His Majesty was in a coma, a fact that, despite the circumstances, was considered fortunate, as he was still alive. Within her cell, she grappled with the bitter truth of her situation, realizing she had been meticulously framed. She pondered the implications of being enslaved after being incarcerated for high treason, wondering who would even consider buying her, especially with the added burden of a troublesome job for Sebastano. Her despair deepened as she was led away with other captives, her mind replaying the betrayal. She questioned the purpose of being set up, lamenting that she had trusted, respected, and been loyal to the very person who had orchestrated her downfall. A gentle touch briefly offered a moment of solace, but the heavy chains on her wrists served as a stark reminder of her new reality, binding her hands and her face. The weight of her past actions pressed down upon her, as she recalled the tragic moment she had taken the life of the elderly merchant, a man whom she had respected and loved like a father. The memory brought a fresh wave of anguish, her face contorted in a silent scream of regret. The clatter of her chains echoed her internal turmoil as she believed her actions to be utterly unforgivable. Still shackled within her cell, she watched as the elderly merchant approached, his keys clinking loudly as he prepared to open her prison. He informed her they were bound for Elverint, an elven country, where he believed someone might be interested in purchasing her. As their journey continued, the merchant explained their route would bypass inspections by taking the old Vauclay road via Nagraja, and he would be relying on her should any magic beasts appear. She, cradling the baby R's, could only ponder what she needed to do to atone for her past actions, even as goblins began to emerge from the surrounding wilderness. Still holding R's, she wondered aloud what she could possibly do to atone, a question that seemed to echo the sentiment of a young man who had just saved them from the goblins. He, holding a defeated goblin by its arm, declared his own desire to atone. He then turned to her, offering a sincere word of thanks. His gaze remained fixed, a quiet determination etched upon his features. She, however, dismissed his gratitude, stating simply that she was merely a slave and there was no need for such words. Ignoring her protest, he knelt before her, his expression earnest, and with R's looking on, he asked if she would please become the child's mother. Her eyes widened, blood smeared across her face, as the unexpected proposal left her utterly stunned. The shock of his words resonated deeply within her, leaving her speechless and overwhelmed. Still shackled and holding the baby R's, Urza found herself in the midst of the burning Pomola port town, a scene of chaos and destruction. Kakyu knelt before her, having just made an unexpected and startling proposal. Her face flushed with a mix of shock and embarrassment. She could only stare at Kakyu, who, equally flustered, averted his gaze, a faint FSSSD escaping him. He internally chastised himself, realizing his words had sounded less like a genuine offer and more like the manipulative plea of a marriage scammer. What am I saying? He thought, his face contorted in a grimace of self-reproach. As Kakyu continued to stammer, trying to clarify his intentions, an elderly merchant, Louis Sebasta, approached Urza, calling out her name. Behind them, the colossal corpse of a dragon lay sprawled, a testament to the recent battle. The merchant, noticing the awkward tension, politely inquired if he was disturbing them. Kakyu, still holding Urza's hand, looked even more mortified. Soon after, the group found themselves aboard a small boat, sailing away from the smoke-filled horizon of Pomola port town. The elderly merchant, now more at ease, continued his conversation with Kakyu. He expressed his profound surprise at the sight of the dragon's corpse, asking Kakyu if Urza had been responsible for its demise. Kakyu, still somewhat flustered, began to explain. He launched into a convoluted and exaggerated account, claiming that everything had gone dark, he couldn't see anything, and then suddenly, the dragon was in pieces. He speculated it might have been a meteor, concluding with a nervous laugh, while Urza listened with a skeptical expression. Upon reaching shore, the merchant, Louis Sebasta, identified a group of children as illegal slaves, noting their lack of the magic marks typically found on legitimate slaves. Among them, a small fox-eared child cried out, longing for home, as Urza, still holding R's, looked on with concern. Urza gently embraced the crying fox-eared child, reassuring her that it was safe now and she could be at ease. Kakyu watched the scene, a quiet observer of the rescued children. Still bearing the marks of her enslavement, Urza listened as the elderly merchant declared his intention to send his subordinates to escort the rescued children to the church in the holy city. She looked towards Kakyu, questioning his next move, even as he seemed to dismiss her concern. The merchant then turned to Kakyu, offering to sell Urza to him. He readily agreed, but insisted on confirming something with her first, a gesture that hinted at a deeper purpose beyond a simple transaction. With the baby R's cradled in his arms, Kakyu formally reintroduced himself to Urza and the merchant, revealing he was a mid-level merchant from the Ural Kingdom, a land far to the north beyond the Luria Sea. He then reiterated his earlier, startling proposal, stating plainly that he wished for her to become his wife and, by extension, the mother of the child he held. Kakyu explained his conviction, telling her that after witnessing her selfless actions, he was certain she possessed a quality he lacked, a trustworthiness that drew him to her. Meanwhile, Urza harbored an internal worry, wondering if her presence might inadvertently endanger ours, especially if it meant being pursued by holy knights. He then made a crucial offer. He wanted her answer not as a slave, but as his equal. If she accepted, he would annul her slave contract, granting her true freedom. Urza, her expression etched with a mix of hope and anguish, looked up, asking if he truly wished for her to lend her strength to raise the child happily. She remained silent for a long moment, her gaze cast downward, lost in thought. The elderly merchant, observing her internal struggle, let out a soft, intrigued sound. Finally, with a deep bow, she delivered her answer to Kakyu. She would have to refuse his offer. She explained her decision, revealing that she was a criminal who had committed a grave crime, one that normally carried the death penalty. To be freed from slavery without atoning for her past was unacceptable to her, and she felt utterly unqualified to become a mother. Urza had just refused his proposal, and the elderly merchant, with a sigh, expressed regret that Kakyu's unreasonable request had been rejected. Kakyu, holding ours close, offered a cheerful, if somewhat strained, thanks for the answer, while Urza and another child looked on. The merchant, preparing for his departure from the docks, offered Kakyu his assistance, though Kakyu was already making his way toward a small boat in the distance. Kakyu, however, declined the merchant's offer to help tend to Urza's wounds, asserting that an injured person would only impede his progress. Instead, he instructed Urza to rest in a nearby hovel, accepting a box of medical supplies from the merchant. As the merchant finally departed, he leaned in to whisper words of good luck to Kakyu, who acknowledged him with a quiet, appreciative thanks. Inside the hovel, Urza watched Ars sleep peacefully in her lap, her expression serene, as Kakyu carefully and methodically wrapped bandages around her injured leg. Still kneeling before her, Kakyu informed Urza that he would attend to her other leg next, his focus unwavering. His gaze sharpened, revealing the intricate patterns of his devil eye, as he decided to conduct a thorough check of her condition while he had the opportunity. Through his unique vision, Kakyu perceived the depths of Urza's soul, noting a profound sense of disappointment, suspicion, anger, and guilt that far surpassed any other emotion. Her soul was in distress, likely betrayed by someone she had trusted deeply. This, he realized, must be the true reason for her refusal. The problem had deep roots. He observed Urza's remarkable composure, speculating that her ability to remain completely calm, doing her best to keep those around her at ease, stemmed either from her nature as a long-lived dark elf or from an innate maternal instinct she had possessed since birth. He contrasted this with how ordinary people would typically become depressed and resort to self-destructive behavior in her situation. With a fierce determination, Kakyu declared his profound need for her deep affection, his eyes burning with resolve. He finished tending to her wounds, declaring the task complete. She offered her thanks, but he insisted that he should be the one expressing gratitude for her care of Ars. As she cradled the sleeping Ars, a profound sense of understanding settled over her. She realized she could trust his words and asked him to continue watching over the child for a while longer. She continued to reflect, recalling how he had entrusted his son to her, a gesture that had resonated deeply. She felt his trust then, and she felt it even now. Her thoughts drifted to past encounters, to individuals she had known, but none had ever shown her such profound trust. She had never experienced such a connection with anyone else. He then challenged her directly, stating that she wouldn't trust others because people inevitably betray. Her eyes widened, a flicker of deep-seated pain and fear crossing her face. Despite her distress, he offered a gentle smile, telling her that he disagreed with her earlier assessment of not being qualified to be a mother. He acknowledged that her hands were supposedly stained with sins, and he didn't know the full extent of her crimes. Yet he emphasized that she had saved countless lives, a statement that left her visibly shocked as fragmented memories of her past actions and the people involved flashed through her mind. He concluded, stating that whatever she thought of herself, to him, her actions and sacrifices were everything. As she held Ars, Urza reflected on his words, acknowledging that even after her mistakes, she had continued to risk her life to do what was right. She understood that he needed her power for both himself and Ars, recalling her past battles against monstrous creatures. Kakyu then posed a crucial question, asking what she considered her atonement to be, given that she was constantly being punished. He revealed that slavery was often a pretext for indefinite detention, forcing individuals into lifelong hard labor or framing them as accomplices, with different marks signifying crimes equivalent to the death penalty, normal offenses, or death. He continued to press Urza, his gaze unwavering as he questioned if her current path truly represented the atonement she desired. Her jaw tightened, a silent struggle evident on her face as his words resonated deeply within her. She burst out, demanding to know if he expected her to live happily with him, declaring such a life unforgivable and stating she would choose punishment over it. She then questioned what else she was supposed to do, asking if she should abandon her efforts to atone, believing there was no way she could ever truly make amends for her sins. Her despair intensified, tears streaming down her face as she cried out that someone as strong as him could never understand her feelings. Meanwhile, Kakyu gently comforted Ars, who was also crying, assuring the child that everything would be all right. Kakyu, now sitting beside her, admitted that while he was indeed strong, he could not look after Ars as well as she could, and he was particularly inept at changing diapers. Urza, looking downcast, confessed that she had been distracted for a moment, and her son had been kidnapped, a painful admission of her past failure to protect him. Ars, nestled in Kakyu's arms, seemed to understand, thinking to himself that merely being powerful or honest was not enough to live well, concluding that they should help each other. With renewed determination, Urza looked up at Kakyu, pleading for his help in raising her child, and stating that she would, in turn, help him atone. Kakyu then challenged her, asking what she believed she should do to atone, suggesting the answer would come from the justice she held within. He then gestured towards a bustling orphanage filled with children, including Ars, implying that this was the manifestation of the justice he spoke of. Urza looked at him with surprise, asking if he, a highness, truly intended to manage an orphanage himself. He confirmed that this was indeed his chosen path of atonement. He reflected on the long history of his reign, spanning 1,000 years, during which his people were forced into many unwanted wars. He acknowledged the tragic consequence, countless children losing their parents, despite children being a country's future. He continued, addressing Urza directly, warning her that a time might come when she, too, would have to make difficult, morally compromising decisions for the sake of the country. He urged her not to forget this harsh reality. Urza, holding Ars, looked at the baby with tears in her eyes, understanding that her power and actions were for the future of the children. She acknowledged this as her justice. She then considered what she must do to atone for her crime, realizing it involved carrying on His Majesty's will and creating a future where children could laugh. Kakyu, standing before her and Ars, agreed that their interests were aligned, He suggested they begin their shared path of atonement by ensuring Ars laughed happily. As he extended his gloved hand, Kaku's expression was resolute, his gaze firm. Urza reached out, her bandaged hand meeting his in a firm grasp, a silent agreement passing between them. He looked at her intently, declaring that he would never betray her. She held Ars close, her gaze fixed on Kaku, and challenged him, asking what he would do to prove his sincerity. He responded, stating he would prove it to her. Amidst the turbulent waves, a fleet of ships burned, their masts spewing thick, black smoke into the sky. A winged creature, a dragon, soared away from the chaos, leaving destruction in its wake. This interlude began on one of the surviving vessels. On board, a subordinate urgently called out to the older man. Addressing him as president, he calmly affirmed his presence, instructing the subordinate to steer the ship. The subordinate, however, vehemently argued that they needed to hurry back to shore, questioning if the president intended to disregard their previous instructions and proceed to Pomola, following that woman's orders. The subordinate's anger flared as he denounced the woman as abnormal, demanding to know why the president would take her side. He accused him of risking everything by crossing the border on his own, reminding him that she was nothing more than a slave. Despite the subordinate's impassioned outburst, the president remained composed, stating that caring for even a mere slave was their fundamental creed. The subordinate looked taken aback by this declaration. As the subordinate turned to walk away, the president offered a gentle smile, revealing that a certain person had gone to great lengths specifically to ask him to treat her with respect. Moments later, the president peered through a spyglass, observing the dragon now heading inland. He noted that this development meant they would finally be able to dock. The subordinate, standing nearby, watched with a worried expression, swallowing hard. With a renewed sense of purpose, the president declared their immediate objective, to save the children. His subordinate, now fully committed, responded with a sharp, affirmative salute. A profound shock rippled through the elderly man, his eyes wide with disbelief and his brow furrowed in distress. The air itself seemed to crackle with an unseen force, a thunderclap that heralded a new, unsettling reality. His distress was mirrored across the town square, where a massive, serpentine dragon lay dead, its body a grotesque sprawl amidst shattered stone. Villagers gathered, their faces a mixture of horror and confusion, murmuring in disbelief at the sudden, inexplicable demise of such a formidable creature. He recounted his experience, explaining that he had heard a tremendous sound, an impact like lightning, and then everything had gone dark. When he finally followed the commotion, the dragon was already lifeless, a silent testament to an unknown power. As the elderly man spoke, the younger figure, Kaku, pondered the implications of the dragon's demise. He questioned whether it was a natural disaster or if any human could possibly be capable of such a monumental feat. The elderly man, recognizing an opportunity amidst the chaos, declared his need to act quickly. He saw this as his chance to recoup the expenses of rebuilding his burned-down store. Meanwhile, other villagers, driven by desperation, began to swarm the dragon's corpse, eager to claim its valuable scales, each reportedly worth at least 10 gold coins. Suddenly, Kaku, standing atop the fallen beast, raised his voice in a sharp command, ordering everyone to halt. His unexpected intervention momentarily froze the eager crowd, who turned to him with confused expressions, questioning his authority. Before Kaku could elaborate, a swift, unseen strike sent blood splattering, knocking him back. The elderly man watched in horror, his face contorted in shock at the sudden, brutal attack. From the shadows, a towering, lion-like beast-man emerged, his powerful form radiating an undeniable aura of authority. He introduced himself with a booming voice, declaring his name to be Vridra, the Lion King. The elderly man and Kaku stared in stunned silence as Vridra continued, his voice echoing across the square. He proclaimed that from this moment onwards, the city would become his territory, marking the return of the Lion King. He then issued a direct command to the terrified villagers: obey him, and he would grant them a place to live and a job. A sudden, disorienting teleportation left the dark elf woman, Urza, screaming in shock, clutching the child Alma tightly as they plummeted through the air. Kaku, however, hung upside down with a wide grin, casually explaining that it was merely his teleportation magic. She retorted, exasperated, that she was not concerned with the magic itself, but with the chaotic circumstances of their arrival. Moments later, Kaku landed them safely, gesturing grandly towards a sprawling, walled settlement. He declared it their sweet home, while Urza, still visibly shaken and holding Alma, questioned why they had appeared in the sky. He apologized for the error, admitting he had screwed up the teleportation, but quickly reassured her that they could fly, dismissing her lingering concern. A few hours prior, an abandoned house in Pomola, Urza had questioned Kaku on how he intended to ensure her loyalty, asking how he could trust that she wouldn't betray him. He simply stated that it was not complicated, hinting at a straightforward solution. He then revealed his plan, stating with a sly smile that they would use a slave contract. Urza looked on with a surprised expression, while Alma, nestled in her arms, made a soft, shushing sound. A hand, presumably Kaku's, carefully held a small, cylindrical tool, poised to initiate the contractual process. Inside the abandoned house, an elderly merchant, Louis Sebasta, began to explain the intricacies of slave contracts to Kakyu and Urza. He clarified that these were a type of seal magic designed to conditionally enforce a master-servant relationship, urging Kakyu to listen carefully. Sebasta continued, detailing how masters could use the seal to bind their slaves and strip them of their freedom, emphasizing that the conditions must be properly entered at the time of the contract. He then directly asked Kakyu if he was truly willing to become a slave himself. Kakyu, with a chillingly wide, sharp-toothed grin, enthusiastically affirmed his readiness, declaring, "Yeah, of course." Still grinning, Kakyu explained his unique proposition to a bewildered Urza. "From now on, we are both each other's master, and at the same time, each other's slave." Urza, holding Alma, looked utterly confused, asking what he was trying to achieve with such a contradictory arrangement. Urza's eyes widened in shock as the implications of Kakyu's mutual slave contract dawned on her. She gasped, realizing that if they both entered such an agreement, neither would be able to betray the other. Kakyu quickly corrected her, insisting she had misunderstood and that he hadn't intended for it to sound like a manipulative scheme. The elderly merchant, Sebasta, however, chuckled with understanding, praising Kakyu's ingenuity and remarking that it was almost like a marriage. He then instructed them to proceed with the ritual, asking them to stamp their blood on each other's seals. Kakyu, without hesitation, pricked his finger, ready to finalize the unusual agreement. He sat quietly, his expression unreadable, as Urza gently tended to him, her hands resting on his shoulders in a gesture of care. After the contract was sealed, he led her outside, revealing an old fort he had renovated, explaining it would serve as their hidden base. She followed, acknowledging his words. Inside, however, the base was a chaotic mess of boxes, books, and various items strewn across every surface. Urza, observing the disarray, remarked that it was a bit messy, to which he sheepishly agreed. Her attention then shifted to a spot emanating black magic power, and he casually explained they were bones and skins collected from dragons and suspicious beasts, harmless but accumulated over time. He then turned his attention to Ars, cradling the baby and warmly declaring, "We're home, Ars." Urza watched him, a look of disbelief on her face, silently questioning his true nature. Her thoughts raced, recalling his incredible feats, his ability to use teleportation and flying magic without incantation, and his effortless defeat of a dragon. He had to be a legendary hero or a demon general. Nothing else made sense. Yet his current demeanor, with a sharp, almost swindler-like grin, contradicted her assessment. She couldn't reconcile his immense power with his claim of being a mid-level merchant from the north. With a sudden shift, he announced that since they were home, it was time to review the conditions of their contract. He reiterated his plea for her to help him atone by raising his child, Ars. He reminded her that her way of atonement was to help orphans, and therefore, his condition was for her to become Ars's mother. Urza, taken aback, could only utter a surprised sound as he declared the condition okay. He then assigned her the task of cleaning up the room, while he would take care of the field and livestock before sunset. She simply acknowledged his command. The morning sun cast its brilliant rays over a lush, verdant landscape, signaling the start of a new day. She had diligently completed her assigned task. The once chaotic fort now stood remarkably clean and organized, a testament to her efforts. As she held a flickering candle, she observed Kakyu, still deeply asleep. Later, Urza watched Kakyu with a mix of awe and confusion as he effortlessly pushed a wheelbarrow overflowing with hay. He was truly amazing, she mused, wondering if he could even control golems to perform such tasks. She continued to ponder his enigmatic nature. If she kept dwelling on the mystery of someone as powerful as him hiding, it would never end. He was doing his best to earn her trust, even going as far as becoming her slave. Yet she knew he harbored a dark past. Despite her lingering anxiety, she knew deep down that her trust in him was complete. The unease she felt was not directed at him, but rather stemmed from something else entirely. Her gaze fell upon the baby's crib, and a profound question echoed in her mind. Was she truly suitable to become a mother? Her hands, one bandaged and the other bearing old scars, served as stark reminders of a life far removed from nurturing. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Kakyu entered, a relieved smile on his face. He declared his gladness at having made it back in time, only to pause, noticing someone collapsed on the floor. A sharp clang of metal against metal pierced the air as two blades met in a fierce, sudden clash. The sound triggered a vivid memory for Urza, transporting her back to her earliest recollections. She saw herself as a young girl, training intensely with her real brother amidst a field of blooming flowers. In her village, all men became warriors, and even talented women joined their ranks. However, during their training, a strict law dictated that women who did not fight were separated. Her own mother, she recalled, was no exception to this rule. Her flashback continued, revealing a younger Urza training alongside her friends and a talented brother. She felt a constant pressure to excel, knowing that if she didn't do her best, she would be left behind. Her father, a strict teacher and the village chief, oversaw their rigorous training. The memory shifted to a more abstract, emotional space, a feeling of profound absence. It was as if she had no mother, trapped within her own small world. It focused on a woman's face, a gentle hand reaching out to touch her cheek, yet the internal thought persisted. This figure, this mother, simply didn't exist in her life. Her eyes, now open, reflected a deep sadness, still lost in the lingering echoes of her past. Back in the present, Kakyu slept soundly beside her bed, utterly exhausted. He had been watching over her, and 4 drip attached to her arm, as the rain continued to fall outside the window. He stirred, slowly waking, his eyes heavy with sleep. Urza, now awake, called out to him softly, her voice weak. He looked up, startled, realizing she was conscious. She asked how long she had been asleep, her voice still weak. Kakyu, overwhelmed with relief, burst into tears, exclaiming his joy that she had finally awakened after 2.5 days. He apologized for not letting her rest after their fight, acknowledging her injuries were an inevitable consequence. She, in turn, apologized, wishing she could use healing magic. Kakyu, still bandaging his arm, scolded her, reminding her she had been bedridden for 2 whole days with a slight fever and insisted she remain still. He looked at her, confused, as she asked if there was magic he couldn't use. She winked, a confident smirk playing on her lips, confirming that indeed, there was magic she couldn't use. Still recovering, she observed Kakyu, who, with a thoughtful expression, pondered the possibilities if he could master all forms of magic. He then gave her a small, enchanted doll, explaining it would allow her to call him if she needed anything, before announcing it was time for milk and depart. The doll, a miniature Kakyu, was imbued with a spell for long-distance communication, a convenient feature. He had also prepared a vegetable soup, preserved by magic to remain warm, for her to eat upon waking, all while wondering why she, despite her abilities, could not use healing magic. He departed, cautioning her to consume both the soup and water slowly to avoid discomfort. She watched him leave, a faint sound of a baby's cry echoing in the distance. The room remained quiet, revealing a simple bed, a table with a mortar and pestle, and a set of armor hanging on the wall, suggesting a temporary, makeshift recovery space. As she lay there, a memory surfaced, a time when she had nursed a child, Ars, gently telling him to stay still. She recalled being bedridden then, just as she was now, after sustaining severe injuries during her training. Upon awakening from those past injuries, she had seen her mother beside her, caring for her. She didn't remember their conversation, but she felt her mother had apologized, likely for rebelling against her father, as her mother's cheek was bruised. That moment, though the conversation wasn't special, simply having her mother beside her was the happiest point in her childhood. She was sure that was how a mother was, believing that if she just tried her best to be a parent, the feeling would come across, even if she was an unknown monster, even if the child did something wrong. Back in the present, Urza, still bandaged and recovering, looked up with a determined yet hopeful expression, thinking that she could do this after all perhaps. Still recovering from her ordeal, she lay weakly, connected to an intravenous drip. Despite her fragile state, her gaze fixed on a steaming cup of soup nearby, a small beacon of warmth and sustenance. She struggled, her body protesting with every movement, but a determined resolve flickered in her eyes. With a grunt of effort, she managed to reach out and grasp the cup, pulling it closer. Her eyes, still showing traces of exhaustion, reflected a quiet triumph as she brought the warm liquid to her lips, finding a moment of peace amidst her recovery. Sometime later, Urza, now dressed in a maid uniform, stood beside Kakyu, who held their baby, Ars. Kakyu greeted her warmly, but his expression quickly shifted to exasperation as he pointed out the perpetually messy room and Ars's habit of not wearing a diaper. Suddenly, Ars, still without a diaper, propelled himself through the air with uncontrolled magic, causing Kakyu to shout in alarm, desperately trying to intervene. The chaos culminated in yet another gaping hole in the wall, leaving Kakyu and Urza staring in wide-eyed disbelief at the destruction their infant child had wrought. Overwhelmed by the repeated destruction, Urza internally conceded that there was something seriously wrong with Ars, and the road ahead for them as parents seemed incredibly tough. Kakyu, with a serious expression, confirmed the start of their first family meeting. The topic at hand was young Master Ars's magical rampaging, a problem that Ars himself seemed blissfully unaware of, giggling happily in his crib. Meanwhile, outside the home, Urza diligently swept the grounds, her movements fluid and practiced as she maintained the household. The next morning, Kakyu stirred in his bed, groaning softly as he was reminded of his duties. "Dear," a voice called, urging him to wake up, reminding him he needed to care for the stable. He was then unceremoniously pulled from his bed by Urza, who, with a firm grip on his blanket, sent him tumbling to the floor. While Urza efficiently handled various household chores, from washing clothes to sweeping, Kakyu found himself struggling with even the simplest tasks, often stumbling or making a mess. Indeed, his daily life had changed dramatically since Urza recovered from her fever 2 days prior. Thanks to her assistance, his training with the mini Kakyus progressed smoothly, allowing him to get used to controlling them, though he could only manage 2 at a time. By dividing the chores, he now found he had more free time, even enlisting the help of the goats. However, a new concern arose. Young Ars, wide-eyed and energetic, exclaimed from his crib. Kakyu, reflecting on Urza's capabilities, realized he had found an amazing helper, praising her vast knowledge and ability to do everything. Yet, Urza interrupted his thoughts, stating her purpose. She had come to take the goat milk. He then presented the goat milk to Ars, cheerfully announcing it was time for his meal. Ars eagerly drank the milk, finding it good. But his expression quickly soured, and he recoiled, clearly finding the taste bad. Ars's continued fussiness and attachment to Urza left Kakyu feeling overshadowed. Determined to prove his reliability, he vowed to prepare breakfast, conjuring a magnificent horned boar steak with a flourish of magic, proudly presenting it for all to enjoy. Following his culinary efforts, Urza tasted the steak, her eyes widening as she declared it utterly delicious. Kakyu, pleased, mused that his years of hard work, even with subpar ingredients, had finally paid off. However, his satisfaction quickly turned to dismay as he took a bite himself, recoiling in shock. The dish was overwhelmingly sweet, a cliched blunder of mistaking sugar for salt. He wondered how Urza could have found it delicious. Seeing his distress, Urza, with a gentle smile, explained that each family possessed its own unique palate. Kakyu, realizing the depth of her understanding, felt a surge of gratitude for her subtle intervention, acknowledging that he almost used the kitchen for his own selfish desires. The following morning, Kakyu announced his plans to test magic in a field, while Urza inquired about his daily schedule. He silently questioned his chances against her overwhelming competence. Nearby, Ars began to fuss in his crib, prompting Kakyu's father to offer his assistance. As his father approached, Ars's cries intensified, and a burst of magical energy erupted from him, sending Kakyu's father tumbling backward. Kakyu's mother remarked on the baby's boundless energy. Witnessing the chaos, Kakyu suggested they hold a family meeting. During the ensuing discussion, Urza, her expression grave, clarified that her concern extended beyond Ars's mere energy. Kakyu, his brow furrowed, reminded her that Ars was born with a unique, special nature. Meanwhile, Ars, observing from his crib, innocently questioned why the young master only used magic when caring for him. His words hung in the air, and Kakyu's expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization, his mind racing to connect the dots. The truth struck him with the force of a physical blow, and he let out a primal scream of understanding and frustration. Urza, her gaze unwavering, confirmed his unspoken fear, stating her belief that Kakyu himself was the direct cause of Ars's magical rampage. He listened as Urza explained her theory. Perhaps he believed that using magic would make Ars happy, or perhaps Ars's previous outbursts were not accidental rampages but intentional acts to entertain him. She pointed out that even during his magical fits, Kakyu never scolded him, always smiled. Overwhelmed by the implications, he collapsed, declaring himself a failure as a parent and wishing to be crushed like a caterpillar. Urza confirmed his dawning realization, stating that indeed, half of the troubles they had faced until now were because of him. Despite the harsh truth, Urza, cradling Ars, offered a gentle reassurance. She declared that it was all right, and now that they understood the reason for Ars's behavior, they would be able to suppress his outbursts. They simply needed to do their best. He looked at her, a silent question in his eyes, as she smiled warmly. She told him that he had made her realize this, and as long as he continued to do his best as a parent, she was certain his feelings would reach Ars. His mind reeled, a torrent of self-doubt consuming him. He questioned his own worth, wondering if he was nothing more than trash. The irony struck him. Urza, who had once doubted her own suitability as a mother, was now performing far better than he was. Urza, still holding Ars, gently asked the baby if her guess was correct, that he was trying to make Kakyu happy. She concluded that Kakyu must truly love him. Hearing this, Kakyu, in a desperate frenzy, reached out, pleading with Ars to confirm that he was right. Overwhelmed by Kakyu's intense emotions and desperate plea, Ars let out a powerful, uncontrolled magical outburst, a wave of energy radiating from him. Urza watched as the magical energy coalesced into a small, smoking orb, while Kakyu was sent hurtling backward by the force of the blast. Several days later, a noticeable change had occurred. When Kakyu altered his approach, treating Ars as Urza had suggested, the baby stopped having magical outbursts. Urza's assessment had proven correct, and Ars now lay happily in his crib. Yet, despite the positive outcome, Kakyu stood alone in a field, appearing dazed and questioning his own necessity within the family. A voice, presumably Urza's, sharply interrupted his thoughts, demanding to know what he was thinking. He toiled in the wheat field, reflecting on the potential profit it would bring and the temporary relief from food worries. He reassured himself, believing he was the sole individual capable of tending to both the livestock and the fields, a skill he had diligently acquired in Jom village. A deep sense of responsibility settled upon him. They needed him. The wheat field, however, was soon subjected to a relentless downpour, the heavy rain lashing against the crops and the surrounding walls of the settlement. Moments later, he stood in utter despair, exclaiming that the wheat field had been annihilated. A goat-like maid explained that the northern region's climate, characterized by distinct rainy and dry seasons, was simply unsuitable for growing wheat. She regretfully informed him that the staple foods here were potatoes and rice, crops that would not grow in this particular area. He was utterly shocked by this devastating revelation. He collapsed, tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by a profound sense of failure. He lamented that everything he attempted seemed to backfire, that he hadn't even bothered to conduct proper research and questioned his very purpose. A bitter realization also struck him. Ars was attached solely to Urza. His jealousy intensified, twisting his features into a dark, almost demonic grin as tears of frustration continued to fall. He cursed aloud, repeating his bitter thought. Ars was attached solely to Urza. Suddenly, she appeared before him, startling him so profoundly that he flinched back, clutching his head in surprise. She sternly admonished him, telling him to compose himself and reminding him that he was not acting maturely despite having lived for 2 millennia. She questioned if he had forgotten the very reason he made a contract with her, emphasizing that he had his own crucial role to fulfill. He, looking away, apologized and informed her that he would be away from home for a few days. Urza, concerned, asked where he intended to go. He explained that with the field ruined, he needed to acquire legal tender. His plan was to apply to open a business and gather information to find potential buyers, vowing not to fail again. Later, at the Merchant Guild in the holy city of Astraja, within the Elverant Federal Kingdom, he presented a letter of introduction from the esteemed merchant Sibasama, along with a certificate and signature from the Northern Guild. The guild official, astonished by the authenticity of the documents, confirmed that he could indeed register. He reflected on the swiftness of the process, having been prepared to wait a full week for the review, and acknowledged that having connections was truly the best advantage. He was glad he had asked Sibasama for help. With his registration complete, he considered making new connections while in the city. Meanwhile, elsewhere, 2 Lurance merchants, Ryurin and Shurin, discussed the severe challenges to trade. Ryurin lamented that in their country, the Elbit River frequently flooded during the rainy season, leading to the closure of roads and ferries. Shurin explained that at such times, Lurance merchants typically boarded a boat from Pomola upstream and took a detour along the Fokel Great Forest, but her tone implied a new complication with this traditional route. She continued to explain the dire situation. A dragon had appeared in Pomola, and the victor, Vridra, had sealed all roads to the city, making travel seriously annoying. Adding to the woes, fellow Dark Guilds were fighting over the dragon's corpse, further complicating matters. She further elaborated that during the rainy season, aquatic magic beasts would also make their way inland, and with all the knights and hunters busy, there was no one available to handle them. This left the only remaining route full of dangerous magic beasts. Her male companion then questioned if they should consider sea routes or request a subjugation force. The next day, their concerns were abruptly addressed when a severed leg, unmistakably from a magic beast, suddenly appeared before them, causing both merchants to gasp in disbelief. As they stared in disbelief, Kakyu approached, prompting the female merchant to exclaim that he had been there just yesterday, and it was practically impossible for him to have traveled so far. She accused him of acting ignorant, questioning if he had exterminated the beasts himself. Kakyu, with a knowing smirk, explained that he knew strong mercenaries and had asked them to clear the magic beasts before his arrival, and the results had just come in that day. The male merchant confirmed that it was indeed a magic beast's leg from those parts. He harbored a secret, a smirk playing on his lips as he thought to himself that a lie could be a means to an end. Of course, there had been no mercenaries. He had hunted the beasts himself. Their confusion persisted as the female merchant stated, quite plainly, that they had no money. Her companion, wiping his brow, asked why Kakyu was telling them this, wondering if he was going to ask for money for the information. He then laid out his true intentions, proposing an exchange. In return for his actions, they would tell him the market prices and sales channels for their products, and also introduce him to their business partners. He asked for their thoughts on this proposition. Later, Kakyu considered the implications of his successful negotiation. The 2 merchants, siblings who dealt in salt, had agreed to introduce him to a shipping company they did business with the following day. His success brought him immense satisfaction, and he laughed triumphantly, declaring that he was definitely not useless and deserved praise and worship. Meanwhile, a small, portable golem resembling Urza, which functioned like a phone, congratulated him on his significant achievement in just 2 days. He then addressed the portable golem, informing her that he would be busy tomorrow and might not be able to answer her calls. He lay in bed, letting out a sigh of relief, while the portable mini Urza on his nightstand offered a blessing, wishing him fortune from the goddess and asking him to take care of Ars. Looking over at Ars sleeping peacefully beside him, he resolved to prove himself a reliable father, a silent promise to the child. The next day, Kakyu found himself amidst a bustling business meeting with the Elverant shipping merchant Silga and other Lurance merchants. Silga, a tall, confident man, expressed his delight, eager to continue their dealings and praising Kakyu's remarkable ability to secure goods, especially the materials and meat from magic beasts, which was invaluable during the rainy season. Kakyu, though slightly flustered, accepted the praise, honored by the recognition. Suddenly, the portable mini Urza began to ring, startling him. He grimaced, wondering why it was calling when he had explicitly stated he would be unavailable. Silga, noticing his distraction, inquired if he was all right. He quickly reassured them, insisting he was fine and urging them to continue their discussion. He internally vowed not to let this venture end in failure, reflecting on his past shortcomings at home. He was determined to prove his worth, shaking hands with another merchant as a symbol of his commitment. As the meeting concluded, Silga chuckled, remarking on Kakyu's low tolerance for alcohol, which he had consumed like water. Kakyu, despite the teasing, expressed his sincere gratitude to everyone, acknowledging it had been a fulfilling meeting. Later, back in his bed, he stretched, feeling the exhaustion but also a sense of accomplishment. He mused that today had been a great harvest, and he would surely be praised upon his return home. Then, a thought struck him. The golem had been ringing all day. He decided to ask her what had happened and relay the day's results. He picked up the portable mini Urza. With a frantic expression, immediately declared that they were in trouble concerning young Master Ars. His eyes widened in alarm, a sudden wave of concern washing over him. He burst through the door, his eyes immediately falling upon Ars, who was suspended in the air, surrounded by a swirling magical aura. "Are you okay, Ars?" he called out, a sense of urgency in his voice as rain lashed down outside. He recoiled, a wave of intense heat emanating from the child. "What is this heat?" he exclaimed, his face contorted in alarm. Just then, Urza rushed into the room, her voice filled with concern as she cried out, "Dear!" Meanwhile, Ars lay in bed, drenched in sweat, his small body burning with fever. Urza explained that he had contracted a fever at noon, but his condition had rapidly worsened, burning up intensely just half an hour ago. She continued, expressing her bewilderment, stating she had never encountered such a fever before. Ars showed no rash, and his breathing remained normal, defying any conventional diagnosis. Kakyu, his eyes wide with shock, realized this was the urgent trouble he had been summoned for. He desperately wondered what could be causing such an inexplicable illness. He wrestled with his thoughts, a torrent of self-reproach. He questioned if Ars could be cured with magic, wishing he possessed healing magic. He pondered if it was a dragon attribute causing the illness, but ultimately despaired, realizing he couldn't create medicine or even call a doctor without understanding the root cause. Determined to act, he announced his intention to collect herbs known to help with fevers, promising to find anything useful. Urza, however, quickly intervened, grabbing his arm. She warned him that it was too dangerous to go out in the heavy rain, especially past midnight. She explained that he lacked knowledge of the local plants and that she, with her elven sight, could see perfectly well at night. She insisted that she should be the one to go instead. Kakyu watched her leave, then slumped into a chair, overwhelmed by a profound sense of uselessness. Despite his despair, he returned to Ars's side. The feverish baby, still weak, reached out a tiny hand, which Kakyu gently took, a silent plea passing between them. His internal turmoil raged. "I can't do anything," he thought, his face etched with anguish. He questioned himself, wondering if he was even comforting Ars, despite being such a useless father. He could only offer a heartfelt apology to Ars, his voice heavy with regret. From the doorway, Urza watched him, her expression a mix of concern and understanding, as Kakyu grappled with his profound sense of helplessness. He looked up, surprised to see Urza-san returning much earlier than expected. He questioned her about the herbs she was meant to collect, but she explained that she had found something else at the forest's entrance instead. She then presented a strange, rapidly growing plant, identifying it as the Devil's Walking Stick, a magical tree known for its ability to quickly absorb large amounts of magic power. Without hesitation, she began to apply it to Ars. The plant immediately responded, its branches and roots rapidly expanding to envelop Ars, covered in glowing berries as it drew magic from him. He watched, bewildered, as Urza-san expressed profound relief, confirming that her plan had worked exactly as she intended. Long ago, an elder had explained that babies of races possessing powerful magic, such as elves, would rarely experience a condition where their bodies could not keep up with their growing magical power, causing it to spiral out of control. Now, with Ars still entangled in the magical plant, Urza confirmed that the Devil's Walking Stick had absorbed his rampant magic, and his fever should soon subside. He finally understood the true nature of Ars's condition, a magic rampage. Urza sighed with profound relief, expressing her gratitude for the success of her efforts. Meanwhile, he felt a wave of self-reproach, realizing he had been so consumed by his own failures that he had neglected to notice the suffering around him. He reflected on his attempts to compensate for his shortcomings through work, acknowledging that he had made a contract with Urza precisely because he couldn't manage alone. Yet, despite this, he had still been overcome by jealousy and, in the end, had neglected Ars. Urza, cradling Ars, gently told him that while he was away, the young master had cried incessantly, especially once his fever began, and she had struggled to cope with it alone. He looked at Ars, still wrapped in the magical plant, and a profound realization dawned on him. Having Urza, there was the most calming thing possible for the baby. Urza met his gaze with a gentle smile, adding softly that his presence was also calming for her. Overwhelmed by her words and the depth of her support, tears streamed down his face. He silently offered his gratitude, the words echoing in his mind as he looked towards the distant walls. The decision had been made to regularly use the Devil's Walking Stick to absorb Ars's magic power, acknowledging that his occasional magic outbursts must have been preventing a full magic rampage, though it was bound to happen eventually. He was urged not to suppress his feelings and to share his opinions, with the understanding that they would each do their best in their respective areas of expertise, and he would handle the housework. Moments later, Urza, with a bright smile, presented him with a dish, urging him to take a bite. She proudly announced that she had made breakfast today. He stared at the monstrous concoction, a mixture of sautéed hoof of goat and paw of bear with undercooked mushroom sauce, his expression one of utter horror. Urza, oblivious, insisted it would be fine, reminding him it was her cooking and that despite its weird appearance, it would taste good. He could only manage a week, bon appetit. The consequences of Urza's cooking were immediate and severe. He lay on the floor, transformed into a grotesque, blob-like creature, clearly in immense pain, while Urza, still cheerful, remarked that she knew it was delicious, but he shouldn't just mash his face into the food like that. The elderly merchant, his face a mask of disbelief, recoiled at the audacious request. He exclaimed, questioning if someone truly wished to become a slave, as a path leading to a distant building stretched behind him. He clarified that without a legitimate reason, such an act would be illegal. Kakyu, however, asserted that he possessed his own compelling reasons for this unusual request. With a sudden, unsettling grin, his teeth sharp and predatory, he proposed an alternative solution. Kakyu then unveiled his true intention. He would borrow money from the merchant and, in doing so, become a debt slave himself, thereby legally acquiring Urza-san. The merchant, considering the terms, mentioned his acceptance of Euro currency. Urza-san, holding the baby R's, watched the exchange with a bewildered expression. Urza-san reacted with a gasp of surprise, the full implication of Kakyu's plan dawning on her. She realized he intended to buy her, making himself a slave in the process, and wondered aloud about his apparent lack of funds. Kakyu, sensing her distress, reassured Urza-san, telling her not to worry. He then produced a magic bag, a remarkable artifact described as a large-capacity storage bag enchanted with space expansion magic. From the depths of the magic bag, Kakyu dramatically revealed a colossal pile of magic beast materials, offering them all to the astonished merchant. Urza-san, partially visible, looked on in disbelief, silently wondering if such a transaction, involving so many valuable items, might be illegal if discovered. Urza-san remained silent, processing the unfolding events. The merchant, now ecstatic, declared the materials more than sufficient, boasting of his connections to strong mercenaries who would eagerly purchase them. Urza-san then turned to Kakyu, questioning his convoluted method of becoming her equal. Kakyu met her gaze with a confident smile, explaining that this elaborate scheme was his chosen way to convey his trust in her. The merchant continued to marvel at the magic bag, impressed by the sheer quantity of valuable goods Kakyu possessed. Meanwhile, Urza-san, holding R's, blushed deeply, overwhelmed and embarrassed by Kakyu's declaration and the lengths he had gone to for her. Later, now dressed in a maid's uniform, Urza-san confronted Kakyu with a serious expression, stating that she had something important to complain about, indicating a shift in time to today. The previous confrontation seemed to have passed as she lay asleep in a bed, the moonlight casting long shadows over a distant, ruined wall. He stood nearby, a bag in hand, a look of deep concern etched on his face. Her eyes fluttered open, and she murmured a question about teleportation, to which he simply affirmed. Moments later, the reason for his distress became clear. He offered a frantic apology, while she, now fully awake and visibly angered, demanded to know why they consistently materialized in midair. She then explained the intricacies of teleportation, clarifying that without preset coordinate markers, she could only arrive at a rough location within an area. She illustrated the severe risks. A failed teleportation could result in them appearing buried underground or submerged underwater. Therefore, she continued, she always chose to teleport into the sky, a deliberate measure to prevent such catastrophic accidents. Recalling her earlier explanation, he questioned her, asking why she hadn't bothered to set any coordinate markers in the first place. He pressed the point, his expression still one of confusion, reiterating his query about her failure to establish any markers. She finally admitted, with a sigh of exasperation, that setting markers was simply too much trouble. However, seeing his persistent confusion, she relented, firmly instructing him to set one immediately. He, understanding the necessity, promptly agreed. At a bustling bar, Kakyu reflected on his responsibilities, feeling that protecting his child, R's, gave his own existence meaning. His mother, working behind the counter, smiled, remarking that he was truly becoming a proper father. His mother then suggested he should also strive to be a good husband. His father, however, interjected with a teasing question, asking if Kakyu had already kissed Urza. Kakyu, flustered, quickly dismissed it, claiming their arrangement was merely a contract. He attempted to clarify, insisting he was a demon, not a human or an elf, and that the contract was strictly business. His father, undeterred, continued to mock him for never having kissed a woman despite his age, even offering to demonstrate. Kakyu, panicking, desperately tried to stop him. Suddenly, a figure appeared, leaning in to kiss Kakyu directly on the mouth. It was Urza-san, her unexpected action leaving both Kakyu and his father utterly stunned. She then pulled back, her expression a mix of confusion and embarrassment, as if she herself was unsure of what had just transpired. He stood there, stunned and blushing, while she, equally flustered, offered a sheepish explanation. It was already morning, and she was just trying to wake him up. The scene then shifted to a sprawling estate within the Vauclay Great Forest, part of the Elviant Federal Kingdom, in July of Holy Calendar 1014. Lush crops grew in the foreground, hinting at a productive and established settlement. There, Kakyu was tending to a newborn baby goat, which nestled close to a larger goat. His young son, Ars, peeked around a corner, his eyes wide with curiosity at the new arrival. The boy, full of energy, pointed at the baby goat and loudly asked who it was. Kakyu, seeing him, gently chided him for coming out alone, warning that his mother would scold him. He then gently held the tiny goat, explaining to Ars that it had been born that very morning and needed to be treated with care. Ars, beaming with pride, declared himself the new big brother. He gazed with wide-eyed wonder at the small cake before him, a single candle flickering brightly. Beside him, Kakyu and Urza beamed, celebrating what they had decided was his first birthday. Kakyu explained that since they did not know his true birth date, they had chosen this day to mark 1 year since they began raising him. Urza clapped enthusiastically, and Kakyu added that they both had presents for him. As promised, they presented their gifts. Urza offered a stack of books, including guidebooks for 2 major languages and a historical compendium, while Kakyu proudly held up an encyclopedia of magical creatures. Kakyu looked at Urza, who radiated a proud glow, clearly pleased with her choice of educational gifts. He questioned her decision, exclaiming that it was too early for such rigorous study, as Ars was still only 1 year old. She countered, explaining that in her village, gifted babies began their education as soon as they could stand. As Ars listened, confused by their escalating argument, Urza criticized Kakyu for making assumptions based on his own dislike of studying, insisting that age and race were irrelevant to what Ars might be interested in. Kakyu, in turn, accused her of being too strict, reminding her of her own struggles learning the Lurian language and her tendency to leave things untidy. Overwhelmed by their bickering, Ars burst into tears, crying out that fighting was bad. Immediately, Kakyu and Urza ceased their argument, quickly reassuring him that they were not fighting. Ars's tears vanished, replaced by a relieved smile, a sight that made Kakyu laugh with amusement while Urza covered her face in embarrassment. Kakyu, reflecting on his earlier narrow-mindedness, apologized to Ars. He then encouraged the boy, telling him he wouldn't know if he liked something until he tried it, and pointed to a magnificent dragon depicted in the encyclopedia. As Ars happily played with a small toy, Kakyu and Urza sat in quiet contemplation. Kakyu admitted his fault, realizing he didn't truly know what would make a child happy and that his words had been unnecessary. Urza, equally remorseful, acknowledged her own shortcomings. His curiosity piqued by the creatures in his new encyclopedia, Ars, with a wide, joyful grin, declared his intention for bug catching. Urza, bewildered, questioned if it was for food, but Kakyu clarified that it was purely for entertainment, a new hobby inspired by the book. Following his newfound interest, the trio ventured into the lush, dense forest, Ars leading the way with his net, eager to discover the wonders within. As they ventured deeper, Ars quickly spotted a small creature and, with a triumphant cry, managed to capture it. Kakyu, watching from a short distance, gently reminded him not to stray too far. Observing his son's enthusiasm, Urza turned to Kakyu, asking if such activities were common. He confirmed that it was typical for boys, though he admitted he didn't recall engaging in bug-catching himself as a child. The conversation shifted, and Kakyu, with a slight blush, inquired if Urza had ever been kissed. She responded with a wistful smile, expressing a desire to have witnessed him as a child. Their intimate moment was abruptly interrupted as a bat suddenly swooped overhead. Urza, startled, cried out and instinctively clung to Kakyu, seeking refuge in his embrace. Still reeling from the sudden fright, Kakyu and Urza found themselves in a close embrace, both blushing deeply from the unexpected proximity and the lingering tension of the moment. Their awkward moment was broken by Ars, who, oblivious to their flustered state, shouted excitedly and pointed towards something in the distance, drawing their attention away from each other. With wide, innocent eyes and an open mouth, Ars pointed emphatically, exclaiming a new, unfamiliar word, "Bo-bo." Confused by his son's strange utterance, Kakyu and Urza exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of what Bo-bo could possibly mean or what Ars was pointing at with such fervor. A small, juvenile fire dragon rested in the tall grass, its scales showing signs of wear, a low sound escaping its throat. He and Urza stared in disbelief at the creature. Urza gasped, recognizing it as a juvenile fire dragon, while he simply uttered a sound of shock. As Ars, still fixated, began to approach the dragon, Kakyu quickly intervened, pulling him back and warning him not to get closer. Urza, observing, realized Ars was referring to the dragon as his Bo-bo, his big brother. Kakyu, still holding Ars, sternly cautioned Urza to calm down, reminding her that the creature was just a youngling. He then emphasized the danger, asking what they would do if Ars were bitten and fell ill, and warning that the parents might be nearby, recalling a past incident in Pomola. Despite the warnings, Ars leaned in close to the juvenile dragon, murmuring Borurup, as the creature seemed to respond with a low growl. Suddenly, the juvenile fire dragon let out a sharp cry and thrashed, startling Ars, who began to wail. Urza reacted with alarm, while Kakyu tried to calm the distressed child. The next day, Ars continued to cry until he finally fell asleep, cradled by Kakyu. Urza watched them, noting how Ars would often gaze towards the forest with a concerned expression. The following morning, Kakyu burst out of his room in a panic, exclaiming that he had completely overslept. Urza, startled by his sudden noise, questioned his haste. He explained that a major auction was taking place in Pomola that day, and he needed to arrive early, though he was unsure if the item he sought would even be available. As he prepared to leave, Kakyu let out a cry of dismay, discovering a significant tear in the glove he had received from Alma. He frantically tried to mend the torn glove, lamenting that he couldn't wear it in its current state, especially since he wore it every day. Urza, observing his distress, told him to leave it, promising to clean it up when he returned home. The aftermath of his hurried departure left a chaotic scene. Ars, the young child, innocently played amidst the disarray, even attempting to put a questionable object into his mouth. Urza, observing the mess, sighed in exasperation, lamenting that she could not simply ignore such a state, especially with a child present. She then discovered a torn glove, recognizing it as the very pair Kakyu treasured. A wave of annoyance washed over her as she realized this was why he had left it behind. She often reminded him to keep his belongings tidy. Her thoughts turned to Kakyu, a mischievous smile playing on her lips as she decided she would teach him a small lesson for his carelessness. Meanwhile, at the bustling port town Pomolo auction hall, the atmosphere crackled with excitement. An auctioneer called out bids, reaching 40 million for an unseen item. Amidst the clamor, Kakyu and Urza pushed through the dense crowd, with someone calling out Kakyu's name, urging him forward. As they navigated the throng, Kakyu and Urza overheard snippets of conversation. Merchants discussed a bounty placed on a guild executive and the prevalence of illegal slave trade since Vridra took control. One merchant, Ryurin, questioned if such a job was truly for mercenaries like Kakyu. Suddenly, Kakyu's ears perked up, having heard his own name mentioned. The whispers intensified around them, with merchants discussing Kakyu's supposed strong mercenaries. They spoke of how these mercenaries worked faster than hunters and adventurers, yet no one had ever seen them. He chuckled, realizing his fabricated stories about having powerful mercenaries had become a popular topic of gossip. Urza, ever pragmatic, suggested it was an excellent opportunity for merchants to expand their business, urging him to make the most of it. Soon, the auctioneer's voice boomed, presenting the next item, a 20-year-old wine from the Calamira Church Nation, produced by Doris Shade. The bidding began at 20,000, quickly escalating as hands shot up across the hall. Without hesitation, he raised his hand, shouting a bid of 200,000, a staggering 10 times the initial price. His sudden, aggressive move startled Urza and even surprised Louis Sebasta, who had been actively bidding. He then explained his reasoning with a smile, stating that the wine was for his deeply religious wife, whom he had met almost a year ago. His consideration for his wife surprised Urza, who noted it as he explained his wife's frequent desire to visit the sacred land, the Church Nation, and her wish to taste the wine from there. He dismissed his efforts as nothing special, yet the elderly merchant, acknowledging him as an admirable husband, offered him a small bag as a token of daily gratitude. Kakyu, now alone by the bustling port, reflected on the merchant's words, particularly the dismissive, nothing special. His gaze then fell upon a truly stunning ring. Realizing the merchant had also given him a couple's ring, he pondered his complex feelings for Urza, acknowledging that he had indeed fallen for her over the past year. He recalled past conversations where others questioned his affection for her, advising him that all that remained was to become a good husband. His thoughts then shifted to his own existence, a profound realization that he was a demon, his physical body merely a vessel for magical energy, and his very life residing within his soul. He was fundamentally different from all other normal creatures. He continued his internal monologue, explaining that demons could not naturally procreate. Instead, they increased their numbers by forming contracts with the souls of the deceased, transforming them into demons, just as he himself had been made a demon by Satan. Despite his demonic nature, he observed Urza's feelings, realizing he didn't even need to delve into her soul to perceive them. He wondered if his own burgeoning feelings for her were merely an illusion, a lingering remnant from his time as a human. He held the stunning ring, questioning if he truly possessed the qualifications to offer it to her. He recalled a past interaction where Alma had insisted he take the ring, declaring it was for her future husband, and the merchant had agreed it had nothing to do with him. Now, Kakyu felt things were different. Meanwhile, back at home, Urza watched Alma crying by a window, distressed by the heavy rain pouring outside. Urza welcomed Kakyu home, assuring Alma that her father's teleportation magic made rain no obstacle for him. Kakyu, however, was preoccupied, asking where his belongings were, before turning to comfort the still crying Alma. He found himself confronted by Urza, who presented him with a repaired glove, stating it was now properly stored. With a playful smirk, she added that she had disposed of other items, claiming he didn't need them. He hoped she would learn from this experience, though he mused internally that she was sharp and would likely figure out his intentions immediately. Moments later, his composure shattered as he furiously grabbed Urza, demanding to know what she had done. He had explicitly told her to leave things as they were. His anger flared further as he questioned if she truly understood how much he treasured that glove, while Urza looked up at him, startled by his outburst. She met his gaze, her expression serious, and asserted that there was no way she wouldn't be able to tell the difference between his belongings. Still gripping her arm, he pressed her, asking if she had known it was important and thrown it away regardless. Urza, her eyes wide, could only utter a small sound of surprise. Meanwhile, Alma, looking distraught, explained that she shouldn't have left something so precious lying around. He added that it was impossible to distinguish it from trash, especially since it was damaged. Urza, turning her attention to Kakyu, asked if discarding damaged items as offerings to a goddess was a custom in his hometown, implying a ritualistic disposal by dark elves. Kakyu, a sinister smile spreading across his face, simply muttered in confusion. He then turned and walked away, leaving Urza reaching out, her hand suspended in the air as if trying to stop him. As he departed, his face was etched with a complex mix of anger and internal conflict, while Urza stood frozen, her eyes wide with distress and a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. He stood in silence, his back to Urza as she walked away, leaving him and Alma in the tense aftermath of their argument. Alma looked up at him, her small figure a silent question. Kneeling before the child, he gently placed a hand on her head, murmuring an apology and requesting time to himself. Alma's wide, tearful eyes reflected her confusion and distress. Outside, the weather mirrored the internal turmoil, with rain lashing against the building, a stark backdrop to the unfolding drama. Inside, he sat slumped on a couch, a bottle of wine on the table beside him, his posture conveying deep dejection. Meanwhile, Urza pondered the situation, convinced she would know if she had truly discarded the treasured gloves. Kakyu, however, was consumed by his own thoughts, lamenting how long he had searched for them, only to find nothing. He continued to drink directly from the bottle, then poured more into a glass, muttering curses under his breath. His mind replayed the recent confrontation, wondering what Urza had been trying to communicate before his outburst. Overwhelmed by guilt, he buried his face in his hands, tears streaming down his face as he repeatedly apologized to Alma. In the distance, Urza could be seen opening a door, perhaps searching for the child. Moments later, Urza's voice echoed, calling out to him, asking if he had seen Alma. He remained motionless, his head bowed, unable to respond. His face, still etched with sorrow and regret, showed the depth of his internal struggle. Unbeknownst to them, Alma had wandered far from the house, now standing alone and bewildered amidst the dense, unfamiliar forest. The heavy rain continued to fall, obscuring the dense forest where Alma had wandered, making the search even more challenging. Meanwhile, Kakyu and Urza pressed deeper into the downpour, searching for the lost child. He admitted that while the rain made it difficult, he could still perceive traces of her soul. Urza questioned if Alma truly ventured so far, to which Kakyu, his expression softening, apologized for his earlier harshness, acknowledging his fault in ridiculing her hometown's customs and for striking her. As they continued their search, Urza discovered Alma nestled safely within a massive tree hollow, sleeping peacefully beside a small dragon. Kakyu joined her, and she wondered if this was the same dragon youngling they had encountered previously. He confirmed it was, noting that the dragon had come to protect Alma. Observing the tender scene, Urza turned to Kakyu, asking if he could still bring himself to scold Alma after witnessing such a sight. He responded that it would be entirely improper to do so. He then looked at Urza, who averted her gaze, and softly addressed her. Moments later, Kakyu held up his glove, now mended. Urza's voice, filled with surprise, questioned if he truly hadn't discarded it, and if she had indeed managed to repair it. He affirmed both, acknowledging her efforts. He then confessed that he had merely intended to tease her, causing her to look away, her expression unreadable. She countered, stating that while she had witnessed his less refined and even pathetic aspects since they began living together, she had never imagined him capable of such genuine anger. She added that there were moments when he seemed to peer directly into her thoughts. He internally acknowledged his fault, believing his excessive use of the devils had led to this. He realized he had grown dependent on her, and his dismay at her words had caused him to lash out. He reflected that she understood him better than he understood himself, and he had believed she would never utter anything that could wound him so deeply. Out loud, he apologized for his inability to reciprocate her faith. In turn, Urza bowed deeply, reiterating her apology for her actions. He reflected on his past perception of Urza, admitting that his attention had been drawn to her otherworldly side, causing him to put her on a pedestal and essentially worship her. His internal thoughts acknowledged that this idealization stemmed from his own disorganization. He continued, expressing a profound relief now that he understood she was also a human being. Urza, meeting his gaze, affirmed his sentiment, finding her own sense of relief in this shared realization. Meanwhile, Urza reflected on her own past, acknowledging that things were different now, even if her feelings had once been an illusion. She recalled how she had previously refused to acknowledge such opportunities, escaping from them and losing those chances forever. With a renewed resolve, Kakyu knelt before Urza, declaring that he no longer wished to run from his true feelings. He presented a small, open box containing a ring to her, softly calling her name. Urza reached out, her expression a mixture of surprise and anticipation. Their hands met, and he clarified that this gesture was not about a mere contract, but something far more profound in the truest sense. Kakyu looked at her with earnest eyes, his voice clear as he asked, "Marry me?" Her eyes widened in surprise, then softened into a gentle, heartfelt smile. Her hand, now adorned with the ring, clasped Kakyu's, and she responded with a joyful yes. Their makeshift marriage had, in that moment, become a true one. Under the soft glow of the moon, A small child, Ars, slept soundly beside a miniature fire dragon. A woman watched over them, a quiet question lingering in her mind. Was this truly her son? The woman, Urza, explained to Kakyu that Ars was the son of her late friend. He confirmed this, acknowledging the truth of her words. Urza then questioned Kakyu about the reason for his exceptional magical abilities, wondering if it was linked to his lost memories. He admitted he had no knowledge of why he lost them, but recounted how he had boldly fled to this place after attacking what he thought were mere bandits, doing so just in case. His thoughts drifted to his past, a series of fragmented memories. He recalled proposing to his wife, telling her everything, including the fact that he was a demon from another world and that the bandits he had attacked were, in truth, holy knights. He remembered not wanting to upset her with these revelations. Urza then confirmed that her own sin was an assassination attempt on the king of Lawrence, a revelation that visibly shocked Kakyu. Urza continued to share her past with Kakyu, detailing her time as an intelligence operative, the betrayal she suffered at the hands of the first prince, and the story of her hometown. Kakyu reminded her that he had already stated his belief in the Urza he had seen when they made their contract, expressing only surprise, not disappointment. She looked away, her voice soft as she asked if he was truly disappointed in her. Urza's expression shifted from a slight, wistful smile to a more serious, questioning gaze, as if awaiting his true feelings. Kakyu reached out, taking her hand, and quietly affirmed that he felt the same way, conveying his acceptance and understanding. Ars and the fire dragon continued to sleep peacefully by the fireplace. The narrative then shifted, revealing the passage of time. It was the year 1015 of the holy calendar, March, approximately 1 year and 8 months since they had begun raising Ars, a period marked by growth and shared secrets within the walls of their home. A small, winged dragon, still young, let out a playful cry, its mouth open in a wide, toothy grin. Beside it, a young boy, Ars, extended his hands with an excited shout, calling out to his new companion, Boris. Since the Great Rain, 3 significant changes had occurred. One of them was Ars, now joyfully riding upon Boris's back, soaring through the air with a delighted cry. Indeed, Ars had found a new friend for the first time. The small dragon affectionately licked his face, eliciting peals of laughter from the boy. The second change was the dragon's official integration into their family. Ars had named him Boris, a combination of Bo and his own name, and following the boy's wishes, Boris was now a cherished member of their household. The third significant development was Ars's burgeoning magical talent. He demonstrated the ability to use healing magic, tending to a wound on Boris's wing. Urza, observing this, realized that his various magical attributes, perhaps even stemming from the dragon meat he consumed, were manifesting as a rare and divine blessing. She proudly declared Ars a prodigy. Later, Kakyu addressed Urza, shifting the conversation to their next course of action. He revealed his intention to obtain nobility, explaining that their current status as small merchants with criminal records was insufficient to safely raise Ars. Urza, surprised by the ambition, questioned the difficulty of such a path and how he intended to achieve it. He elaborated, stating that their criminal records would lead to severe consequences if exposed, making a decent status imperative. This, he declared, was his first reason. He then added a second, more personal motivation. He desired enough power to crush the individual who had orchestrated Urza's past setup, his eyes burning with fierce determination. Urza was taken aback, exclaiming that his plan was reckless, especially since their opponent was Lawrence. She questioned if he truly believed the first prince was behind her setup, reminding him that as intelligence operatives, they could discern royal orders through contract magic, even if someone else assumed a royal's form. She continued, asserting that there was no logical reason for the first prince to kill the king, as he was next in line for succession. It would make more sense, she argued, if the second prince or someone further down the line were responsible. She then reminded Kakyu of his promise to help her atone for her sins, asking why he would go to such lengths. He responded that his pursuit of power was part of that very promise, and she could not ignore the king's peril. Kakyu knelt before Urza, taking her hands in his, and declared that he always thoroughly fulfilled his promises. Meanwhile, in a separate moment of youthful exuberance, Ars, wielding a stick like a mighty weapon, loudly proclaimed himself Ars, the strongest hero, ready to deliver justice to evil demons. Still immersed in his heroic fantasy, he charged at Boris, calling out the dragon's name. Boris, in turn, let out a spirited roar, ready for their mock battle. He swung his makeshift sword, striking Boris, who recoiled from the impact, momentarily stunned. The force of the blow sent Boris tumbling backward, while he himself lost balance and fell to the ground. As Boris recovered, he, now on the ground, began to glow with his healing magic, proclaiming that he had successfully performed his heroic feat. The healing magic erupted from him in a powerful, restorative burst, enveloping Boris in its light. Kakyu, observing the energetic play, called out to Ars, reminding him to play without kicking up too much dust, as he was busy washing clothes. Ars cheerfully agreed, acknowledging the request. He then turned to Urza, who was hanging laundry, remarking that boys would be boys. Kakyu informed her he was busy preparing for an undisclosed event and asked if she was going out, cautioning her to be careful. Urza, meanwhile, noted that Ars was completely absorbed in his hero game. Urza bid Kakyu farewell as he departed. Moments later, Ars, still in his hero persona, excitedly approached Boris, holding up a book and urging him to read this with wide, eager eyes. The book depicted a hero named Ars who saved the world, returned to his hometown, married his fiancée, and lived happily ever after. It also stated that his name had a long historical lineage. Boris, looking at the book, exclaimed that the hero shared his name. Ars, still engrossed in the story, turned to Urza and innocently asked if she had ever had a wedding, causing her to react with a startled expression. Still engaged in his imaginative play with Boris, Ars innocently asked Urza if she had never married. Urza, sitting by the fence, responded that marriage was a pursuit for nobles, and she was far too busy for such things. He then excitedly called out to Boris, urging him to come along and play. Boris looked at him, while Urza remained in the background. Meanwhile, Urza, startled by his sudden dash, cried out for him not to leave her sight. Her thoughts then drifted to Kakyu, recalling a conversation where he explained his long-term plan to become a noble, a process that would take years and often keep him away from home. She dismissed her own lingering thoughts, slapping her cheeks to regain composure. She resolved to compose herself, knowing she needed to maintain her focus. As the day progressed, she observed Ars and Boris playing in the garden, then diligently swept the path outside the house. Later, she lovingly fed Ars, tending to his needs. Later, she watched them from a window as Ars and Boris continued their games, eventually seeing Boris take flight with Ars riding on his back. The sky stretched wide, with birds soaring peacefully, marking the gentle passage of time. As dusk began to settle, Urza called out to him, reminding him that it was getting dark and he should head inside. But he, instead of complying, burst into tears, his face contorted in distress as he looked up at her, asking what was wrong. He wailed uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face as he sat amidst a small, makeshift camp. His mother, Urza, rushed to his side, her expression filled with concern, asking what had happened and if he was hurt. He continued to wail, unable to articulate his distress. Urza, seeing the small dragon Boris nearby, wondered if he was the cause of her son's tears, asking if Boris had done something to him. Boris, however, looked just as bewildered. As he continued to cry, he managed to convey that Boris was not to blame. Kakyu, observing the scene, approached with a questioning gaze, wondering what truly caused such profound sadness. He urged the child to stop crying, his own confusion evident. He reacted with a jolt of surprise as the full scope of the situation became clear. Ars and Boris, still visibly upset, continued to express their distress, their small voices echoing the sentiment of a grand, yet failed, endeavor. His efforts were for his mother. Ars had wanted to arrange a wedding ceremony for her, but it had not gone well. Urza, upon understanding his heartfelt intention, covered her mouth, deeply touched and overwhelmed by the child's innocent desire. Kakyu acknowledged Arza's hard work, expressing gratitude to Urza for her understanding, but then clarified that they were not actually going to have a wedding. He covered his mouth, a sheepish expression on his face, as Urza and Ars looked on, confused by his sudden statement. The scene revealed the simple, heartfelt preparations Ars had made. A heart meticulously crafted from flowers, a rustic wooden arch, and carefully arranged stone seats for the imagined guests, all set within a clearing. Kakyu praised Ars for his incredible effort and acknowledged Boris's help, patting the child's head. Ars beamed with pride at the recognition. Inspired by their dedication, Kakyu declared that he, too, would now put in extra effort. The surrounding environment, a mix of wild foliage and distant, imposing structures, hinted at the secluded yet grand setting where Ars had attempted his ceremony. Stacked stones, perhaps intended as additional seating or decoration, dotted the landscape. The flower heart, now a little disheveled but still recognizable, lay nestled among the wild blossoms and trees, a poignant symbol of a child's pure intentions and the simple beauty of his efforts. He had prepared a grand surprise, and as the moment arrived, Urza and Ars looked on, a mix of shock and wonder on their faces, while Boris, the small dragon, seemed equally taken aback by the unfolding spectacle. With a flourish, he presented the meticulously arranged wedding venue, complete with an ornate arch and a heart-shaped altar, declaring that his preparations were complete and asking Ars for his opinion. Ars, overwhelmed with joy, exclaimed to his mother that the sight was absolutely amazing, a sentiment Urza quietly echoed, her own expression softening with awe. Urza, still processing the grand gesture, voiced her concern about him using so much flashy magic, but he reassured her it would be fine for just one night. Then, with a sudden realization, he reached out, taking her hand and presenting her with a ring, a gesture that left her momentarily stunned. As if by magic, Urza appeared in a resplendent wedding gown, floating gracefully above the ground. He then confessed that while Ars had beaten him to the idea, he had been secretly preparing this wedding since the day he first proposed to her, asking her what she thought of it all. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched a bouquet, declaring herself blissfully happy and affirming her acceptance. Nearby, Ars and Boris watched, their faces alight with joy, sharing in her profound happiness. As the ceremony began, Ars and Boris, filled with excitement, peered from behind a pillar, watching him and Urza walk down the aisle towards their future. He extended his hand towards her, a gesture of invitation and commitment, and she gracefully stepped forward, her foot poised to meet his, symbolizing their union. With a burst of vibrant light, fireworks erupted across the night sky, illuminating the joyous faces of Ars, Urza, and Bors, celebrating the culmination of their heartfelt ceremony. Standing together under the arch, he looked at Urza, reaffirming his commitment and expressing his anticipation for their shared future. Urza, still clutching her bouquet, was overcome with emotion, tears streaming down her face. She tried to speak, her voice catching as she began to utter Kaku's name. He gently cupped her face, their eyes locking in a tender gaze, a silent promise passing between them amidst the soft glow of the celebration. Meanwhile, nearby, Ars watched the couple with wide, innocent eyes, while Bors, the small dragon, peered cautiously from behind Ars's wing, seemingly startled by the intensity of the moment. Far from the joyous festivities, a sinister figure with horns, identified as a mysterious observer, peered through a spyglass. "I found it," he declared, his gaze fixed on the distant fireworks illuminating the night sky, his suspicious eyes betraying a dark intent behind the night of blessings. The elven forces prepared for battle, their archers drawing bows and arrows, ready to fire upon the enemy once they were in range. The commander urged them to eliminate the foe, emphasizing that the honor of the Elverant Magic Knights was at stake. Suddenly, a warning cry echoed through their ranks. Movement had been detected across the river. Incoming fire rained down, forcing the soldiers to raise their shields against a volley of flaming arrows. Despite the chaos, the commander remained calm, assuring his subordinates that they had plenty of water to douse the signal fires and should let the enemy exhaust their magical resources. He acknowledged that their arrows could not reach the enemy due to the headwind, while the enemy could shower them with fire from the forest, having the advantage of a tailwind. A soldier reported in, detailing a new strategy. While the main elven force engaged the enemy, another unit would land upstream, tearing into their flank and creating an opening. If this main force could land there, they would gain a significant advantage. However, the commander's expression turned grim as he received devastating news. The other unit, the one meant to land upstream and flank the enemy, had been annihilated. The wreckage of a ship lay scattered, a testament to the brutal ambush. According to the survivors, they had been attacked by hidden demon beasts the moment they landed. Several powerful creatures were sighted, including an S-class demon ape and other beasts ranging from C to A-class. The commander, processing the grim report, confirmed that the enemy leader was initially designated as an A-class threat. Given the overwhelming force they had just faced, he immediately ordered the threat level to be increased to S-class, recognizing that their organization's overall threat was undoubtedly a special S-class. With the devastating loss and the upgraded threat assessment, the commander made a difficult decision. He declared that they would retreat and that he would personally report the dire situation to His Majesty, acknowledging that the enemy posed a great threat capable of destroying the entire kingdom. Meanwhile, the victorious forces of the Dark Guild, led by the Lion King Vridra, reveled in their triumph. Beastmen and masked figures celebrated raucously, mocking the retreating elven magic knights for having achieved nothing. One masked figure, bearing a spade symbol, quietly asserted that the victory truly belonged to the tamer, a statement that seemed to hold deeper meaning. Vridra, the Lion King, roared his ambition to his followers. He declared that one day he would build his own kingdom and become its king, promising them all the land, women, and glory they desired when that day arrived. He challenged them to prove their worth. His declaration was met with a thunderous ovation. The crowd of beastmen and masked figures cheered wildly, chanting "Long live Vridra" and "Long live the Lion King's resurgence." Their fervent cries echoed through the chamber, solidifying their loyalty to their ambitious leader. The Lion King Vridra stood amidst his subordinates as one. A beastman with spiky hair reported their success. The one they had been searching for was finally found. Vridra, asserting his dominance, demanded to be called boss, to which his elf-like subordinate, Anui, nervously complied. His subordinate, Anui, then offered a sardonic compliment, calling Vridra his foolish brother, a remark the Lion King acknowledged with a knowing smirk, his sharp fangs glinting. Meanwhile, within a nearby prison cell, the dark elf woman, Urza, sat bound. Anui approached her cage, holding the young Ars, and taunted her, declaring that they had found her friend. The dark elf woman merely laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. She then addressed Ars, who was now tied up in the cell, remarking on the futility of his efforts to escape and the trouble he had gone through, all for nothing. Elsewhere, the Lion King Vridra raised his arms in a triumphant gesture, declaring that with that thing now in his position would become unshakable, bringing him one step closer to becoming a true king. As he reveled in his triumph, the imprisoned dark elf woman, Urza, reflected on the large egg she had worked so hard to acquire and hatch, vowing not to let it escape again. Vridra and Anui observed the egg, its fate now seemingly intertwined with their ambitions. Far above the unfolding chaos, an elf commander with long, light hair observed a distant city under attack through a spyglass. He barked orders to his subordinates, demanding they hurry and bring something to him. Below, the fire dragon and Ars, both looking distressed, realized the gravity of the situation. The fire dragon understood that the commander's target was Ars's friend, while Ars, in turn, recognized the fire dragon as his own. About half a year had passed since their wedding in the forest, and the journey continued. Inside a traveling carriage, he reflected on their current purpose. Urza and he were heading to Sebastian to cancel their slave contract. The journey brought them to the gates of a grand city, which was Urza's former home, the main branch of the Sebasta company. As they entered, the Lurent's magic kingdom unfolded before them, a vibrant city where flying carpets, sword, and street magic performers entertained. He gasped in awe, exclaiming that it felt like a scene from an Arabian Nights story. She, however, seemed slightly embarrassed by his overt excitement, asking him to try not to get too carried away. Her disguise, a testament to her past as a top spy, remained impeccable, a stark contrast to her true appearance before her exile from the royal family. Continuing through the bustling market, he remarked on the city's age, noting its 5,000-year history. She confirmed its ancient origins, acknowledging its impressive scale, unlike anything in Pomola. Further into the city, they arrived at Conduit Plaza, where he marveled at the colossal statues. She explained that the one on the left depicted Oldemir, the magic god who first granted magic to humans, while the statue on the right honored Regazian, the dragon god, founder of the Dragonkin, and the first hero. The banners displayed throughout the city further illustrated Lurent's unique religious landscape. Unlike the Kalamira Church Nation, which strictly focused its worship on the goddess of creation, Lurent showed a wide range of tolerance, equally revering the magic god, the dragon god, and the goddess of creation. As they walked, he commented that her respect for strict nations like Kalamira was evident. She affirmed that Kalamira's strictness stemmed from its leadership by a pope who exclusively received divine messages, and that the church nation had produced the most heroes in history. He mused that this strictness might be precisely why it appeared so formidable to people in distant lands. He and Urza, both in elaborate disguises, were greeted warmly by Louis Sebasta, who exclaimed his admiration for Kaku's convincing appearance as a madam. Kaku humbly dismissed the compliment, acknowledging it was merely a disguise. Sebasta then led them further into the opulent interior, revealing that all preparations were complete and admitting that without Kaku's advance letter, he would never have seen through the elaborate ruse. As they proceeded, Sebasta inquired about young Master Ars. Kaku explained that his son was staying home for the day, believing it best that he remain unaware of his parents' slave status. Urza, however, voiced her concern about Ars being left alone. He quickly reassured her, detailing how he had set up a magical barrier to keep the boy within the premises and had cleared away anything potentially dangerous. He added that Ars was a clever child, and with his own ability to teleport back instantly if needed, the boy would be fine for a short while. Louis Sebasta then explained the specifics of their situation, stating that because their contract was a special mutual agreement, its cancellation would be swift, taking only about 4 to 5 hours. Kaku confirmed this, addressing Sebasta directly. As the hours passed, Kaku's thoughts drifted back to his son, a faint worry lingering in his mind about Ars. Meanwhile, at Kaku's base, the 2-year and 4-month-old Ars, with his distinctive pendant, looked around with wide, curious eyes, seemingly restless. His restlessness quickly turned to frustration as he repeatedly bumped against an invisible barrier, unable to leave the premises. He cried out, demanding to go outside and questioning what was obstructing his path. He then turned his attention to Boris, the small dragon, who was stationed outside on guard duty. Ars complained loudly, finding it unfair that Boris was allowed to be outside while he was confined indoors, explaining that Boris was simply too large to fit inside the house. Undeterred by the dragon's size or his own confinement, Ars, with a mischievous glint in his eye, challenged Boris to a staring contest, declaring its immediate start. As the staring contest began, Ars made a comical face, puffing out his cheeks and contorting his features in an attempt to make Boris break eye contact, while the dragon remained stoic, merely blinking slowly. Ars, still bored, tried to engage Boris in a game, pulling at his own mouth to mimic the dragon's roar. Boris, however, remained unimpressed. The dragon recoiled in shock at the child's antics, but Ars merely sighed, declaring Boris no fun at all. Feeling dejected, Boris retreated to the doorway, watching as Ars, undeterred, decided to play with blocks instead. Meanwhile, Kaku and Urza continued their journey, with Boris's adult form offering a piece of wisdom about a plant that only grew near strong magic. Kaku, however, dismissed it as another one of Victor's sayings, while Urza simply noted it as a good landmark. As they walked through a bustling town, Boris remarked on how much the area had grown, observing the many people moving about. The dragon growled softly as Louis Sebasta, walking beside them, casually mentioned that it had been a year since their last encounter. Back at the base, Ars suddenly looked up, startled, realizing that Boris was no longer in the doorway. Elsewhere, Louis Sebasta engaged Boris in combat, acknowledging the dragon's youthful state, but emphasizing that he had brought no one who could be easily defeated. Louis Sebasta swiftly seized Boris's legs, ordering his subordinate to tie the dragon up, who quickly moved to obey. With a furious roar, Boris unleashed a torrent of fire, catching Louis Sebasta and his subordinate completely by surprise, as neither had anticipated the young dragon's ability to breathe flames. His fiery breath continued to engulf the area, forcing Louis Sebasta and his subordinate, Vryamus, to consider more drastic measures. Vriemus suggested they would have to resort to using a specific, unnamed item to deal with the rampaging dragon. The dragon, Bors, had unleashed his full power, shattering the magical barrier that once protected the villa. He stood amidst the ruins, a formidable presence, while Ars remained trapped within a smaller, hexagonal energy field, gazing up at his friend. Louis Sebasta and his subordinates were taken aback, not only by Bors's raw power, but also by the unexpected presence of Ars. They attempted to restrain the dragon, but the remaining barrier, though damaged, proved remarkably resilient, deflecting their attacks without a scratch. Louis Sebasta mused on the situation, realizing the villa's owners must be incredibly wealthy or noble to afford such a powerful magician capable of maintaining a barrier in this demon-infested forest and keeping a dragon as a pet. He then sternly reminded Vriemus to focus on their objective and, more importantly, to ensure no harm came to the child, as that would undoubtedly lead to severe complications. Ars, still trapped within the hexagonal barrier, frantically pounded on its surface, calling out for Bors. Louis Sebasta, having made his decision, commanded his subordinates to advance, preparing to move on with their captured prize. He continued to struggle against the invisible force, his small hands pressing against the barrier, his cries growing louder as he desperately pleaded to be let through, calling out Bors's name with increasing urgency. Ars's anguish intensified, tears streaming down his face as he let out a heart-wrenching wail, his desperate plea echoing, to be let out. Trapped and helpless, Ars watched in horror as Bors was forcibly taken away by Louis Sebasta and his subordinate. The child's internal thoughts screamed his hatred for the situation, the injustice of his friend being dragged off. With a guttural cry, Ars's eyes flared with an intense, fiery glow, reflecting his absolute refusal and profound distress. He would not accept this outcome. Moments later, Louis Sebasta and Vriemus heard a faint sound, but dismissed it as mere imagination. Unbeknownst to them, Ars, now free from the barrier, stood nearby, his expression grim as he looked out into the forest, having somehow escaped his confinement. He pushed himself forward, his small body trembling with exhaustion and pain. Blood streamed from a wound on his head, but the young Ars continued to crawl away from the breached barrier, gasping for breath. Still bleeding and unsteady on his feet, he stumbled onward, his resolve unwavering despite his weakened state. He knew he had to keep moving, driven by an urgent, unspoken need. As he gained some distance, he glanced back at the villa, a desperate plea escaping his lips for Bors, his companion who remained trapped within. Meanwhile, the world outside continued its rhythm. Far away, hidden within the forest, lay the ancient city of Ifer, a place of bustling activity where merchants and workers went about their daily lives, oblivious to the recent turmoil. Within Ifer, a man wearing a turban barked orders at a group of onlookers, urging them to cease their gawking and return to their tasks as a massive beast of burden was led through the crowded streets. Back at the villa, Louis Sebasta, observing Bors confined within a cage, chuckled with satisfaction. He praised a subordinate named Victor for his excellent work, promising generous rewards for him and his men. Louis Sebasta held the subdued Ars in his arms, while the Lion King Vridra, surrounded by his beastmen, declared a night of celebration, encouraging them to drink as much as they desired. Nearby, Urza watched Bors, who lay chained and injured within his cage. Urza, her expression etched with concern, turned to Anui, asking him to use a healing item to tend to the dragon's wounds. Anui flinched, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face. As they walked past other cages, where even small cat-like children were imprisoned, Anui offered a quiet apology to Urza, his voice tinged with regret, perhaps for his hesitation or for their shared predicament. Urza then turned her attention back to Bors, addressing him directly and revealing a deeper understanding of his nature by calling him the brat with the ancestors' trait. Still injured, she faced Vridra, who mocked her for her ability to communicate with dragons. He warned her not to attempt freeing Bors again, stating that if it weren't for that unique trait, he would have killed her already. Despite Vridra's harsh words, she knelt beside the chained dragon, Bors, apologizing for the trouble she had caused him during their escape attempt. Bors responded by gently licking her injured arm, and she smiled, reassuring him that the wound was not his fault. From a nearby cell, Anui and another beastman observed the interaction, noting that she was speaking. Anui then asked Bors if that was truly his name, given to him by her friend's father. Urza, now looking distressed, thought to herself that Ars didn't even know where they were. It would be reckless for him to come. She then asked Bors if his friend was coming to rescue him. She then asserted with a determined, almost desperate expression that Ars would definitely come for them. A flashback image of a young Ars rescuing Bors on a rainy day flashed in her mind, reinforcing her conviction that he would indeed come. She then told Bors that he truly had a wonderful friend. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed that she didn't want such a good kid to die, while Vridra, from his cell, watched her with a complex, unreadable expression. Urza sat quietly beside the chained Bors, her expression somber, as the dragon rested his head near her. Anui, the beastman, and two small cat children continued to observe the pair in their cell, the cat children sniffing curiously at the scene. She gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief and alarm. A sudden burst of light and sound erupted in the prison, as a young boy, surrounded by crackling energy, appeared amidst the startled guards. One guard immediately questioned his presence, demanding to know who the brat was, while another shouted for the other guards to act. Urza, witnessing the chaos, recognized the boy and gasped in disbelief. The other prisoners and guards reacted with a mix of fear and confusion, some shouting about being under attack, others identifying the incoming force as lightning magic. Amidst the chaos, the young boy, Ars, cried out with all his might, calling for Boris. His desperate cry reached Boris, who, despite his chains, looked up with a glimmer of hope. Urza, still caged, watched with a mixture of terror and awe as the situation unfolded. Ars stood firm, his small figure radiating immense power as he faced down the numerous guards, his voice echoing through the hall with a powerful roar, calling out Boris's name once more. Urza, overwhelmed, could only stare in shock, murmuring in disbelief at Ars's impossible arrival. Meanwhile, Ars, his face beaming with joy, finally saw Boris and exclaimed his delight at finding him. From a vantage point, Louis Sebasta observed the unfolding chaos with a stern expression, remarking that it seemed someone had slipped past their defenses. Vridra, beside him, smirked, casually stating that Victor had made a mistake. The guards, recovering from their initial shock, quickly moved to capture Ars, dismissing him as just a kid. However, Ars unleashed a powerful burst of lightning, striking them down with overwhelming force. The three guards lay smoking and incapacitated, their bodies still crackling with residual energy from Ars's devastating lightning attack. He stood amidst crackling lightning, a fierce grin on his face, extending his hand as he declared to Urza that he had come to pick her up, urging Boris to come home, all for the sake of his friend. Urza, witnessing his powerful display, covered her mouth in stunned disbelief. Meanwhile, Vridra, the Lion King, let out a booming, mocking laugh, while Louis Sebasta, caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, could only utter a bewildered wah. A large, metallic egg rests in a wooden crate filled with straw. A horn girl, Urza, questions its origin, while a man, Set, confirms it is indeed a fertile fire dragon's egg. Urza, a dragonkin with an ancestral trait, expresses her desire to become the dragon's parent. Set, a researcher, is incredibly excited by the rare specimen before him. Admitting his enthusiasm got the better of him. Set then introduces himself as a magical creature specialist, hired by Vridra for his expertise, and assures Urza he will assist her. She reacts with wide-eyed surprise at the idea of becoming a parent. Moments later, the metallic egg hatches, revealing a small, winged dragon. Urza exclaims in wonder, while Set ponders the metallic shell and the lack of records on artificial dragon hatching, realizing they need to estimate the fire dragon's body temperature due to its thermal conductivity. As the newly hatched dragon looks around, Urza wonders aloud what they should feed it, noting that existing records only contain information regarding adult dragons. Set, surrounded by books and research materials, appears deep in thought. The small dragon then complains about their smell, prompting Set to laugh and admit they haven't bathed in a week, while Urza covers her nose in disgust. Set, surprised by the dragon's communication, notes in his journal that dragonkin with ancestral traits can indeed communicate with dragons. Set praises Urza, acknowledging her talent for noticing even the smallest details and her great memory, stating she has been a significant help. Urza, flustered, tells him he praises her too much. He responds that if they weren't in their current situation, he would officially make her his assistant. Urza, with a thoughtful expression, asks Set what he means by this situation. He explains that he had heard the guild's activities were to protect refugees and homeless people, provide them with work, and offer placement services. He adds that most guild members are indeed people like that, and he couldn't resist the chance to research dragons. He explained that the guild monopolized certain trade routes, using the profits to gather thugs. In reality, he clarified, the guild's core members were more like bandits. They kidnapped refugees, forcing men with skills to make weapons or work the land, while selling the women as slaves. Their ultimate goal was to build a large army. Listening intently, she asked if her mother was being held hostage. She confirmed her mother was indeed somewhere else. He then revealed that Vridra treasured her because her mother had told her to be grateful to him. He recounted how Vridra-san had saved their hometown from magic beasts during their escape when it was attacked by demons. However, his true intention was for her to form a contract with the fire dragon and turn it into a killing machine. He further elaborated that Vridra's ultimate goal was to conquer a nation, and he desired the dragon to become an ultimate weapon, on par with an entire military. The young girl, clutching the small dragon, looked utterly shocked. Clutching the baby dragon protectively, she asked if there was any chance at least the dragon could escape. He looked at her, surprised, then questioned if she was prioritizing the dragon over herself. With a determined expression, he declared his approval of her idea and stated they should help it escape, extending a hand towards the small creature. He reassured her not to worry, promising to secure the dragon's cooperation. He then revealed that he had heard all this information from Vridra's brother, whom he trusted because he had taken a significant risk in sharing. She looked at him with wide, surprised eyes as he urged her to simply rest assured and wait. Meanwhile, in a stark contrast, Vridra observed a man, likely his own brother, publicly crucified and left to the circling crows. Urza's brother watched the brutal scene from the side, his face etched with distress. He scoffed at the scholar's supposed emotional attachment, deeming it hypocritical that Set would allow the dragon to escape. His brother, though still clinging to life, was clearly nearing his end, a brutal display of Vridra's power. Meanwhile, Eliud Lawrence, standing beside a distraught Urza, declared it a shame for a talented individual to perish, but insisted that crimes must be met with punishment. He then announced his intention to assign his younger brother as the new caretaker. Vridra then turned his menacing gaze to Urza, explaining that they would retrieve the escaped dragon using her ancestral trait. He warned her that if she attempted any trickery, he would treat her poorly, but if she became his loyal weapon, she would be spared such harshness. Urza, her mind racing, could only think of her brother and mother, clinging to the belief that Set could be trusted. His hand then moved to hold Set's broken glasses, a stark reminder as he delivered a chilling warning. Urza's mother would be next if she failed to comply. Elsewhere, Set, witnessing the unfolding tragedy and the threats against Urza's family, felt his resolve crumble. He realized he had no choice but to surrender, understanding that if he did not, the people he cared for would vanish, and he would be forced to become a weapon. She could only weep, tears streaming down her face as she choked back sobs, the weight of her forced decision crushing her spirit. Her resolve, though broken, was now set. She had to give up. Meanwhile, the chained brother, still masked and suffering, suddenly reacted to a distant sound, grunting in surprise as if recognizing something familiar. Suddenly, a burst of light heralded the arrival of Ars, glowing with nascent magical energy. He extended a hand to the distraught Urza, his young face alight with determination, declaring he had come to pick her up. From a distance, Vridra observed the scene, a wide, predatory grin spreading across his face. He mused that if the boy were sold, he would fetch a high price, but if raised, he would become a formidable weapon. He laughed, finding Ars's ability to use magic at such a young age incredibly interesting. Vridra, observing the chaos, commanded his subordinates to capture the young Ars alive, emphasizing the need to secure him. His forces, a mix of humanoids and beastmen, swarmed the area, attempting to corner the agile child. He continued to evade their grasp, unleashing bursts of lightning magic that sent several attackers recoiling. One of Vridra's men, a large, muscular figure, attempted to grapple him, but Ars swiftly countered, his small form surprisingly resilient against the larger opponent. Vridra, witnessing the unexpected resistance, barked new orders, instructing his men to target Ars's tendons and force him into a corner, believing that beyond his lightning attacks, the child's other magic was unremarkable. Yet, as Ars conjured both water and fire, a subordinate exclaimed in disbelief, questioning how many attributes the boy could possibly wield. Ars, undeterred by the renewed assault, manifested a powerful defensive barrier, its hexagonal segments glowing as it absorbed the incoming attacks from Vridra's frustrated forces. Despite his efforts, the sheer number of attackers began to overwhelm him, pushing him back. One of Vridra's men, a large, bald figure, grunted with effort, trying to break through the barrier, while another expressed confusion, wondering why their combined strength wasn't working. Vridra, observing from a distance, simply ordered them to push harder. The pressure intensified, and Ars cried out as the barrier began to crack under the relentless assault. His small form was momentarily engulfed by the force, but he quickly recovered, his eyes sharp with determination. He then unleashed a new tactic, swinging a heavy chain with surprising force and speed, sending several of Vriddra's men flying. His movements were fluid and precise, a stark contrast to his small stature, as he darted through the melee. With a powerful kick, he sent one of the larger beastmen sprawling, the impact shattering the ground beneath them. Ars continued his relentless assault, his small body a whirlwind of motion, leaving a trail of stunned and defeated opponents in his way. A triumphant grin spread across his face as he declared his own amazing prowess. Vridra, however, watched with growing frustration, cursing the brat for darting around like an animal, clearly annoyed by Ars's unexpected agility and combat skill. Meanwhile, Urza, observing the battle from a distance with Bors, gasped in astonishment. She wondered aloud if Ars had truly grown so strong just from playing with Bors every day, a realization that left her utterly surprised by his rapid development. He gathered immense magical energy, declaring his ultimate move to take out all the adversaries. Vridra and his assembled forces watched, a mix of surprise and concern etched on their faces as the young boy prepared his attack. With a resounding roar, Ars unleashed his power, a devastating thunder cannon that erupted with explosive force, tearing through the very ground beneath him. The thunderous blast obliterated a section of the castle wall, sending debris and soldiers flying. Vridra, however, remained unfazed, a slight smirk playing on his lips as he watched the chaos unfold. Observing the gaping hole in his defenses and the scattered bodies of his troops, Vridra acknowledged the child's unexpected power. He turned to Eliud, ordering his idiot brother to deal with the situation, dismissing him as a coward when he hesitated. Eliud, though visibly distressed, affirmed his compliance. Vridra then commanded Victor, a former magic knight, to clean up his own mess, implying Victor's responsibility for the current predicament. Victor descended into the crater where Ars stood, the ground still smoking from the recent attack. He calmly addressed the child, asking his name. Introducing himself as Victor, a former magic knight of Lawrence, he acknowledged Ars's name, remarking that it was a strong one. Ars, defiant, shouted his own name in response. Victor expressed his reluctance to fight, suggesting Ars simply surrender. However, Ars vehemently refused, his small face contorted in a fierce expression of defiance. Victor was momentarily surprised when Ars appeared to fall easily into a pool of mud, unable to move. Yet, Ars, with a knowing look, revealed that he had already caught Victor. Victor threatened to sever Ars's tendons and encase him completely in mud, warning him to stay still. But with another powerful boom, Ars unleashed a hexagonal barrier, declaring that he had already witnessed Victor's technique. He struggled, submerged in Victor's mud magic, gasping for air. From her cage, Urza watched, her face etched with concern, whispering his name. Victor, observing the struggle, simply uttered Stratus. Her mind raced back to Set's earlier advice. Always use water. Don't forget. A fierce determination hardened her expression as she recalled the crucial instruction. Victor's gaze remained sharp, focused on the unfolding battle. Victor grumbled, annoyed by the timing of Urza's mental intervention. Suddenly, the mud around Ars erupted as he unleashed a powerful burst of water magic, shattering the earthen trap and sending splashes everywhere. Now free, he looked up, his eyes wide with gratitude, offering a heartfelt thank you to Urza, who nodded in acknowledgement from her confinement. With the mud dispersed, both combatants moved with incredible speed, their movements blurring as they exchanged blows. Ars continued to wield his water magic, creating splashes with every rapid motion. Victor swung a powerful strike, his weapon a blur, but Ars, with astonishing agility, twisted and leaped over him, narrowly avoiding the blow. Victor watched him, a flicker of surprise in his eyes at the boy's quickness. He then charged forward, his body crackling with energy as he prepared to unleash a technique he called Gon Chidaru. Victor braced himself, ready to meet the incoming assault. Victor met his attack with a powerful counter, sending Ars flying high into the air. Without hesitation, Victor then conjured a barrage of rock bullets, launching them at the airborne boy. As the rock bullets closed in, Ars, still suspended in the air, unleashed a burst of wind magic, creating a powerful vortex that shattered the projectiles and allowed him to break through the assault. Victor watched, stunned by this unexpected display of wind manipulation. Despite his incredible efforts, Ars crashed heavily onto the stone ground, exhausted and gasping for breath, defeated. Victor stood over him, his expression unreadable, the battle seemingly concluded. He had charged headfirst into a barrage of attacks, a reckless act that left his fellow prisoners in disbelief. One man, his head bandaged, questioned if the boy was insane, while another, with short, light hair, exclaimed that his actions were unbelievable. Despite the prisoner's astonishment, the young Ars lay battered and bruised, his small body covered in dirt and blood. Urza, witnessing his struggle, could only watch, her expression a mix of awe and despair, murmuring about his amazing resilience. Moments later, the formidable Vridra delivered a crushing blow to the ground beside the defeated Ars, sending debris scattering. The sheer force of his attack underscored the boy's utter helplessness. Urza watched, wide-eyed and horrified, as the chained eye of Boris reflected Ars's agonizing scream. The boy's chest was visibly injured, a testament to the brutal power he had faced. With his resistance broken, Ars was unceremoniously dragged across the stone floor, leaving a trail of dust and despair. As Ars was taken away, Urza, still imprisoned, was addressed by Vridra, who mockingly asked if the boy had sparked hope in her. He then declared the show entertaining, but that he was now bored, dismissing the Dragonkin's efforts. Meanwhile, Vridra's subordinates, including Anui and a female beastman, observed Ars's defeated form. Anui expressed amazement at Victor's victory and a desire to have fought Ars himself, while others agreed they were not bored yet. Urza, her face etched with sorrow, was reminded by an unseen voice not to forget Yurikuin. Another observer, a woman with dark hair, mused that at this rate, Ars would end up like Sensei, concluding that he should not have come. In a separate cell, Set knelt before Urza, offering words of comfort. He urged her to keep holding on to her dream, no matter what happened. Urza, teary-eyed, questioned the meaning of a dream. Set, with a gentle smile, explained that a dream was something one wanted to become or achieve in the future, emphasizing that dreams gave hope, no matter how dark things seemed. She understood now that true strength, the courage to seize a small opportunity and change a harsh reality, comes from the hope and dreams one holds on to. She had thought there was no hope, that Sensei's words were a lie, forcing her to abandon her dreams and everything else. Yet, Vridra's menacing presence reminded her of the grim reality, and she realized perhaps the destruction and the emergence of Ars were the very hopes Sensei had spoken of. She knew she could not leave everything to someone else. It would not be fair to them, especially not to Ars, who now appeared as a small, winged figure in her mind. Her thoughts drifted to a desperate plea, a memory or a vision where she begged for Ars's life, knowing that this child would surely help many people in the future. In the present, her voice cracked with raw emotion, a desperate cry for Ars to find strength, to fight back against the torment. Nearby, Vridra watched with a sneer, while Set, his face contorted in anguish, desperately urged Ars to wake up and run, knowing the child was in grave danger. He continued to mock Ars, reminding him that he would eventually perish, a cruel taunt that echoed in the confined space, while Set's pleas grew more frantic. Despite the torment, a deeper struggle unfolded within Ars. He knew that no matter how great the evil once was, the trigger for its downfall always came from within. Then, amidst the darkness, a small spark of courage ignited within him, causing his eyes to glow with a fierce, golden light, a silent promise of defiance. He endured a brutal blow from Vridra, a powerful strike that sent shockwaves through his small frame. Yet he remained standing. Defying all expectations, he retaliated with a fierce counterattack, shattering one of Vridra's formidable fangs. From their confinement, Urza and Bors watched in stunned disbelief, while Vridra and his subordinates, including the masked figure, expressed their shock at the boy's unexpected strength, questioning how he could have broken the demon ape's fangs. Enraged by the defiance, Vridra's voice boomed across the chamber, issuing a chilling command to his forces to kill him. Despite his injuries, Ars stood firm, his voice resolute as he declared his unwavering intention to save his friend. Urza and Bors watched, their hearts stirring with a renewed sense of hope as Ars, battered but unbroken, charged forward, proclaiming that he would never give up, just like the strong and kind heroes from his picture books. The masked figure acknowledged his resolve. He continued his relentless assault, engaging Vridra and his subordinates in a desperate struggle, his small form a whirlwind of defiance amidst the chaos. Urza, still chained, worried aloud about the lecture Ars would receive upon their return home, while Vridra, still reeling from the boy's unexpected power, questioned the masked figure about how they could have lost track of him after returning home. Just as Vridra prepared to strike again, Vryamus, the alien-like subordinate, intervened, his presence halting the Lion King's fury. Vryamus then gently placed a hand on Ars's head, commending him for his valiant efforts and acknowledging that he had truly worked hard for the sake of his friend. As the dust settled from the previous confrontation, two new figures emerged onto the ravaged stone path. A man with a confident, almost predatory grin, wearing a turban and a flowing cloak, declared that it was now judgment time. Beside him, a woman with long, light hair, holding a wide-brimmed hat, echoed his sentiment, asserting that they would handle the rest. In the distance, amidst the debris, the small figure of Ars stood, seemingly the focus of their arrival. A few hours prior, a grand structure stood under a clear sky. Moments later, two figures stood before a formidable barrier, now shattered. One exclaimed that it had been broken, while the other simply identified it as the barrier. The young man, Ars, held a glowing shard, his expression thoughtful. Nearby, the dark elf woman, Urza, knelt in distress, lamenting that she could not believe someone capable of breaking their barrier had been inside. Vryamus, sitting calmly, added that the magic power was immense, and Ars had been the only one inside. As they spoke, Ars was enveloped in a colossal, fiery magical aura, so vast it dwarfed him. The sheer scale of it made Urza question if this truly was Ars's magic, noting there was far too much of it. Urza then reported finding 26 footprints and a single large demon footprint, along with traces of a battle where magic had been cast. She wondered if a scale she found belonged to Bors. Ars, meanwhile, discovered his own magic was being slightly neutralized, a concerning development. He speculated that Bors might have been taken away and Ars had chased after them. Urza confirmed Ars's footprints were present, but none from Bors, supporting his theory. With a determined look, Ars agreed to pursue. Urza, her face etched with urgency, insisted they needed to hurry if that was truly the case. They knew they had to act swiftly before the magical traces completely vanished. Elsewhere, a powerful figure with the head of a lion, the Lion King Vridra, declared himself the descendant of the beast folk king of this once prosperous land. He vowed to lead his people to a truly equal and free country, and to take revenge on the wretched elves who had stolen their nation, called the barbarians, and cast them out. Figures resembling elves fled in the background, under attack. A large, gloved hand observed a small dragon, Bors, trapped within a cage. The unseen speaker declared that they themselves had hatched the creature from an egg, intending to use it as a weapon to build their foundation. Back in the present, the Lion King Vridra roared, his fury directed at Louis Sebasta and Urza. He vehemently refused to hand over anything to the likes of them, his fangs bared in a snarl. Vridra paused, a flicker of surprise crossing his face as Louis Sebasta, holding the infant Ars, calmly stated his intention to deal with Vridra, the leader. He then instructed Urza to handle the others, acknowledging the Lion King's formidable strength. Louis Sebasta, with a slight smile, internally reasoned that he would not be able to protect Ars if he were to fight the entire group. By process of elimination, confronting Vridra directly was the only viable option. Urza, her eyes welling with tears but her expression resolute, agreed to the plan. She pleaded to be allowed to handle the other combatants, determined to prevent any harm from coming to Ars. The Lion King, annoyed by the interruption to his speech, finally accepted Louis Sebasta's challenge, declaring he would take him on. With a fierce grin, Vridra lunged forward, taunting Louis Sebasta that he would only deal with him if he could even reach him. Meanwhile, Urza prepared to face the other beastmen and humanoids, her gaze sharp and focused. She immediately engaged, unleashing a flurry of powerful attacks. Her Strama aura armor flared as she executed a wind claw slash and a leaping chaotic slash, striking at her opponents with incredible speed and force. As Urza continued to decimate the surrounding foes with a powerful wind-based attack, Vridra observed her, recognizing her as a rare dark elf and noting her exceptional skill. He questioned if she belonged to that infamous clan, the Harenoido, a cursed lineage of traitors and outcasts, even among the vile elves. Urza, holding a glowing orb, responded with a defiant, almost mocking laugh, confirming his suspicions. She then turned her attention to Vridra, remarking that for a filthy beast, he talked far too much, further enraging the Lion King as he prepared to retaliate. Enraged, the Lion King Vridra prepares to strike, but Urza taunts him, declaring his stench unbearable and demanding his silence. She then launches a volley of sharp projectiles towards him. He unleashes his signature attack, the Lion King's Fong, roaring for her to die as he lunges forward with immense power. She, however, observes his wide, sweeping attack, realizing her current offensive is too weak to be effective. She spots an opening in his aggressive posture. She then declares her intent to first take away his vision. Initiating an attack, she calls Dusk Dash as she moves with blinding speed towards his face. His surprise turns to pain as Urza's attack, Refaya, strikes him, temporarily blinding him and forcing him to recoil, clutching his face. The force of the impact creates a powerful shockwave, shattering the ground and sending debris flying in all directions. Amidst the settling dust, she stands, her clothes tattered, acknowledging that Vridra is indeed an intelligent beast, not merely one of empty threats. He, still reeling, admits she skillfully drew him in and reflected his own magic back upon him. Her face bruised, she acknowledges that she, too, must sharpen her dulled senses, a determined glint in her eyes. Meanwhile, the battle's destructive power continues to reshape the environment, with ancient pillars crumbling under the strain. Observing the unfolding chaos, Louis Sebasta expresses disbelief at Urza's power, while Vridra, still recovering from the blinding attack, curses her, questioning her very nature. His subordinate, Vryamus, watches with a look of surprise. She stood amidst the fallen, a hexagonal barrier shimmering around her, a testament to her overwhelming power. One of the defeated, barely conscious, could only utter a single thought. She was too strong. With a dismissive click of her tongue, she turned to the masked figure and the groaning Lion King Vridra, casually inquiring about the structure, numbers, and positions of their organization. Vridra, still reeling from her attack, could only manage a pained grunt as she addressed him as Tamer. In response, Vridra, now surrounded by multiple summoned demon beasts, boasted that these monsters were their ultimate weapon, capable of repelling even the elven army. He declared her defeat imminent, but she merely observed, recognizing the simultaneous summoning and demon beast manipulation. Without hesitation, she unleashed a torrent of concentrated magical energy, a blinding wave that tore through the summoned demon beasts, scattering them with explosive force. A chilling smile spread across her face as Vridra and his remaining forces, utterly terrified, screamed that she was a monster and fled for their lives. The masked figure watched them retreat, while below, the castle walls crumbled under the impact of the fleeing horde. The masked figure, observing the chaos, reflected on Urza's power, recalling a memory of her as a child, admired by her younger brother and mother. He acknowledged that letting Vridra escape was worrying, but for now, the immediate threat was contained. Outside the castle, Urza, with a grim expression, issued a command to her forces. A large enemy contingent awaited them, and no one was to be allowed to escape. She considered the implications of her immense power. If too many people learned of it, things might spiral out of control. She could forcibly erase the memories of those she had captured, but a deeper hesitation held her back. With a click, she unlocked a cage, revealing Bors, who appeared unharmed. Meanwhile, Vridra, now a prisoner, desperately surrendered, pleading with her to spare the children. She simply instructed him to open the cage. Urza pointed decisively, declaring that she would let someone else handle the situation outside for a bit. Shurin, distressed, immediately pleaded for her to wait a moment. She was entrusted with the care of the dragon, Bors, and possessed Heaven's blessing, allowing her to communicate with dragons. The young woman introduced herself as Yura, then inquired about her companion's identity. The young woman, now identified as Yura, profusely thanked her, promising to repay her kindness someday. She then excitedly explained that Urza had given her crucial advice and saved her when she was on the verge of defeat, much to Urza's surprise. She then expressed concern, noting the presence of many slaves and craftsmen being forced to work within the castle. Urza acknowledged the situation, stating that she could not allow Bors to rampage on his own, implying a need for controlled action. With a determined expression, she resolved to take matters into her own hands, declaring that she would no longer leave things to others. Turning to Yura, she instructed her to go with Bors and give him commands, entrusting the task to her. The young woman eagerly accepted the command, her face beaming with renewed determination, while Urza offered a gentle, knowing smile. Meanwhile, outside the castle walls, the Sword Saint Zeed Kruger engaged the formidable Lion King Vridra in a brutal confrontation, the ground beneath them shattering with each powerful impact. He roared, invoking the name Refaya, while Zeed Kruger, his face already marred by injuries, countered with an invocation of dust. Their clash created a powerful shockwave, a testament to the immense forces at play as the two warriors exchanged blows with incredible speed and ferocity. The Lion King delivered a devastating blow, sending Zeed Kruger hurtling backward, crashing through the sturdy stone wall of the castle with immense force. He crashed through the stone wall, the impact sending debris scattering across the chamber. The Lion King, Vridra, stood amidst the destruction, his powerful form radiating dominance. Nearby, the small dragon Bors watched the unfolding chaos. Vridra surveyed the wreckage, a question forming in his mind. Had his attack truly struck its target? Meanwhile, Zed Kruger, though battered, began to stir amidst the rubble, slowly pushing himself up. The Lion King's senses confirmed his suspicion. She was still present. He muttered that she was remarkably adept at blending into the darkness, making it impossible to pinpoint her exact location. From the deep shadows, Urza watched him, her form barely discernible. Frustrated by her elusiveness, Vridra decided on a drastic measure. He roared, declaring that if he simply blew everything away, her stealth would no longer matter. With a surge of power, he unleashed a devastating attack, naming it Rudzamstroy. The Lion King then unleashed the full force of his spell, a colossal vortex of destructive energy he called Tyrant Hurricane. It tore through the surroundings, obliterating everything in its path. The devastating tornado reduced the entire area to rubble. Vridra surveyed the scene, a smirk on his face, believing his opponent had been shredded by the overwhelming force. He lamented the destruction, but was confident in his victory. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced Vridra's side. He gasped, his confident expression replaced by shock and confusion as a blade, wielded by a faintly shimmering, almost invisible Urza, plunged into him. Vridra roared in disbelief, demanding to know what had just happened. Zed Kruger, witnessing the impossible, realized Urza had turned invisible without any visible chanting. She had closed in at high speed, silently, completely erasing her presence to avoid the spell's range. Zed Kruger's mind raced, connecting the pieces. He understood that Urza's seemingly meaningless chanting and her palpable killing intent in the dark had all been part of a calculated deception. He concluded that by hiding in a confined space, she had deliberately lured Vridra into unleashing his large-scale spell, only to strike him down the moment he believed her defeated. It was a masterful display of tactical prowess. She reflected on the moment, a calculated strike delivered precisely when her opponent, assured of his victory, had let his guard down. Vridra cried out in agony as the realization dawned on him. The entire confrontation had been a deception. The poison coursing through his veins was designed to paralyze his semicircular canals and heighten his five senses, making every sensation a source of torment. The effects were profound. Light, sound, and even smell became sources of excruciating pain. Though the poison would not kill him, it would eventually collapse the boundary between dream and reality, leaving him unable to discern truth from illusion. Urza, her expression weary, explained that her husband disliked unnecessary killing. She then shifted the conversation, asking if he remembered the children they had rescued in Pomola 2 years prior. An investigation report from the Holy City had identified the organization responsible for selling them. The elderly merchant, present in the flashback, continued his explanation, detailing how the merchant guild had amassed wealth by selling weapons made from fire dragon materials and engaging in illegal slave trading. They had used the fire dragon incident as an opportunity to seize control of Pomola, calling it the Lion King's resurgence. He further revealed that while they publicly presented themselves as merchants, in reality, they were a dark organization whose true leader was Vridra. Back in the present, Urza held Vridra by his hair, demanding answers. He struggled, gasping in pain, unable to resist her interrogation. Meanwhile, a colossal foot crushed a city wall, and a dragon soared overhead, raining destruction upon the fleeing populace. Villagers cried out in terror, realizing they could not possibly win against such a monstrous foe. Amidst the chaos, a group of armed individuals, led by a Holy Knight commander, confronted a gathering of villagers, warning them that resistance would lead to their demise. He contemptuously referred to them as damn slaves. The concerned man, who had been present in the earlier flashback, looked on in surprise. The Holy Knight commander, however, declared with conviction that they were no longer slaves, urging them to observe their surroundings. The Holy Knight commander stood atop the wall, observing the scene below. Beside him, the dark elf woman, Urza, stood over the defeated Lion King, Vridra, who lay unconscious. Both seemed surprised by the turn of events. She, the dark elf woman, had previously been seen riding a massive fire dragon, which now stood behind her, a formidable presence. Meanwhile, a group of enslaved people, their faces etched with fear and desperation, raised their hands in surrender. From their vantage point on the wall, the Holy Knight commander and the dark elf woman observed the vast crowd of former slaves below. He remarked that he had heard the organization had branches across the region, and she added that based on her assessment, there were around 180 combatants and 500 slave laborers, bringing the total to nearly 2,000 people. The Holy Knight commander, exasperated, exclaimed that this was precisely the problem. He worried that if word spread of 2 individuals wiping out their headquarters, it would be a disaster. The dark elf woman, standing near the now-chained Lion King, casually suggested they simply kill everyone, dismissing them as trash. The Holy Knight commander, however, reminded her that they couldn't leave the situation unreported, especially with so many wanted criminals present. He then realized she was merely joking. Both the Holy Knight commander and the dark elf woman stood in silence, arms crossed, deep in thought, contemplating their next move. Their contemplation was interrupted when one of the tied-up enslaved individuals, a young man with pointed ears, pleaded with them to calm down, reminding them that they were already bound. The Holy Knight commander, enraged by the interruption, harshly told the pleading man to be silent, declaring that he would never forgive him for selling his wife and child into slavery. He questioned if the man's family mattered now, given that he was about to be executed anyway. As the Holy Knight commander raised his weapon, poised to strike the terrified enslaved man, the dark elf woman swiftly intervened, blocking his attack and declaring that the fight was over. She watched as the young boy, Ars, his face still adorned with bandages, bounded forward with an infectious grin. He enthusiastically declared, "Let's make up." Below him, Urza and Set exchanged a look of bewildered surprise. Meanwhile, the Holy Knight commander, seated apart, scoffed at the notion, muttering that matters were not so simple. Urza remained standing, her gaze fixed on him. Suddenly, a man with a turban and a wide, unsettling grin, his sharp teeth glinting, announced with a flourish that he had just conceived a brilliant idea. Both Urza and Set reacted with visible shock. She narrowed her eyes, her thoughts immediately turning to suspicion, wondering what schemes lay hidden behind that man's nasty grin. The branch, an old fortress repurposed as a communication post, also served as a lookout against external threats and a holding facility for hostages. Among those held was the dark elf woman, who questioned if she was indeed a hostage. The dark-haired man with glasses, observing her, confirmed that the relatives of the workers were held there specifically to prevent those workers from attempting to escape. Meanwhile, Kakyu, with a sinister grin, held a spyglass and declared it was time to be quick about their next move. In the bustling trade city Pomola, the central hub overseeing all commercial dealings, the Lurance merchants Ryurin and Shurin observed the activity. Elsewhere, the dark elf woman and the dark-haired man with glasses were seen whispering, while a merchant and a female merchant attended to their stalls. The dark elf woman confirmed to the Demon Emperor that the underground headquarters of the intelligence unit gathered information on royalty and nobility, using slush funds and other means to exert influence over them. She confidently stated that this task was well within her expertise. Elsewhere, the Sword Saint, Z. Kruger, called for attention, addressing a group of individuals including Guard 1, Guard 2, and Guard 3, preparing to make an important announcement. Hakyu, flanked by Holy Knight and another Holy Knight, held up a drawing of a captured beastman, declaring that the guild was now disbanded. The armored figures beside him reacted with surprise, questioning if their boss had truly been captured. The dark elf woman then informed the dark-haired man with glasses, who was leaning over a desk in shock, that all of them would be working under her command from that moment forward. She continued, explaining that while their work would remain the same, they would need to follow new policies. Kakyu added that there was no need to worry. However, the dark-haired man with glasses, the merchant, the female merchant, and the concerned man, enraged by the takeover, drew their weapons and shouted for them to be killed, refusing to listen. With unwavering resolve, the dark elf woman and Kakyu met their defiance with a stern warning. If they resisted, there would be consequences. He stood amidst the chaos, his gaze firm as the dark elf woman, her expression sharp, issued a stern warning to the defeated guild members sprawled on the ground. They would be dealt with accordingly, and they should tread carefully. A few days earlier, the conversation had taken a surprising turn. Louis Sebasta, the man with the turban, questioned Kakyu's audacious plan to use the Dark Guild to acquire a noble title. Kakyu confirmed his intent, explaining that they would offer Vridra and his subordinates as tribute to the king in exchange for the title. Louis, taken aback, accused him of contradicting himself, recalling Kakyu's previous troubles with such a scheme. The dark-haired man with glasses had laid out the intricate details of their strategy, explaining that the real problem was the rumor of two people taking down an entire guild by themselves. As long as they managed that part, they would be fine. He reminded Kakyu of the multi-step plan. First, use rumors of personal mercenaries to attract clients. Second, build credibility through financial and military strength. Third, use profits to establish an actual mercenary group. And finally, rise to the status of a privileged merchant and obtain a noble title. Kakyu, however, scoffed, pointing out that the plan would take 5 years, including recruiting the mercenaries, and questioned how they expected to use mercenaries that didn't even exist yet. Back in the present, Louis Sebasta, now seemingly aligned with their cause, rallied a vast assembly, confidently declaring that they possessed an army, with countless individuals ready to join them. His words were met with a mix of awe and disbelief, as one armored guild member voiced his astonishment, questioning if they truly intended to transform the Dark Guild members into their own forces. The strategy, however, accounted for the complex motivations of such individuals. It was understood that not everyone joined the Dark Guild by choice, and if they were established as heroes who took down the villains, many would gladly join, drawn by the promise of massive prestige, wealth, women, pleasure, and food. Indeed, the criminal organization possessed significant assets, 2,000 personnel, substantial funding, intelligence networks, and developing territories. Although it was a criminal enterprise, it would be foolish not to utilize such resources. The achievements of capturing an S-class criminal and freeing illegal slaves, combined with a powerful army, financial assets, and de facto control over the land, were like a sweeping board reversal, flipping most of the black pieces to white. As the pieces of their grand strategy began to fall into place, Kakyu and the Dark Elf woman continued their discussion with Louis Sebasta. He affirmed that their plan was indeed about turning a crisis into an opportunity, suggesting that at that point, rather than making an enemy out of such a formidable force, the king would much rather grant them a title and draw them to his side. She, however, saw a deeper, perhaps kinder, motivation in his actions, but he quickly corrected her. He was not being kind. He was simply using whatever was useful, even if it meant helping criminals on top of refugees. Standing amidst the recovering individuals, Kakyu reiterated his core philosophy to the Dark Elf woman and their new allies. It was far more efficient to increase the number of their allies rather than merely reducing the number of their enemies. He observed the makeshift infirmary where the captured Dark Guild members were being treated. A masked figure, Boris, expressed initial concern about the scarcity of healers, but noted that the treatment was progressing remarkably well. Boris continued, describing Ars's healing technique as far from refined, yet acknowledging that the young boy was brute-forcing the healing process through sheer magical power. Ars, with a determined expression, actively healed a large, muscular man. As he continued to heal, the armored man, still bearing the marks of their past conflict, questioned Ars's intentions, reminding him of the harm he had inflicted. Kakyu, the Dark Elf woman, and Anui watched, with Anui expressing disbelief at Ars's seemingly endless mana reserves. Set and the small dragon also observed the scene. With a bright smile, Ars acknowledged his past actions and declared his intention to alleviate their pain as part of making amends, even offering to let them touch his horn. The former guild members, initially surprised, burst into laughter, impressed by his sincerity and innocent demeanor. The Dark Elf woman then intervened, telling Ars it was time to rest, as he had done enough. Ars, still eager, then asked why everyone looked so different. She gently explained that it was because they were different races, and that they were all Mother's beloved treasures. She elaborated, explaining that the merciful goddess of creation had made this world and all its inhabitants, and that treasures were beautiful precisely because they came in different colors and shapes. Ars listened intently, absorbing her words. Despite her explanation, Ars appeared utterly confused, his small face filled with question marks as he struggled to grasp the complex concept. Gently, she advised him that these were questions he would one day answer for himself by experiencing the world firsthand, encouraging his own journey of discovery. As they walked through a temporary shelter for children, the Dark Elf woman added that making friends was also an essential part of learning. Children played energetically in the background, while other villagers and injured individuals rested or worked nearby. Kakyu, observing the scene, remarked to the Dark Elf woman that Ars had become more open about expressing his thoughts. She then turned to Kakyu, asking how he would have answered Ars's earlier question. Meanwhile, Ars, now invigorated, declared he was going to play, running off towards the other children with a joyful shout. While Ars found joy in play, a more serious discussion unfolded elsewhere. Kakyu pondered the harsh reality of survival of the fittest, a notion Yura found utterly unreasonable. Another voice, perhaps an innocent thought, deemed it not the most inspiring answer. Yet, for now, such complex thoughts were far from the minds of the children. They continued their spirited play, their laughter echoing as one called out, inviting others to join. He watched them, a small smile on his face, but his thoughts drifted to Kakyu. He had heard tales of Kakyu's prowess, how he had taken down one of the executives. It was amazing, yet also a little frightening. Was Kakyu truly so important, being the son of Kakusama? As he continued to observe, a sudden discomfort seized him. A sharp pain in his stomach made him cry out, declaring he needed to help his father. Around him, other children also clutched their bellies, echoing his sudden distress. The sudden cries of the children drew attention, and soon, Yura found herself shielding them. She insisted they had done nothing wrong, but Kakyu, his expression stern, demanded to know why she would defend them. He pressed her, his voice rising in anger, questioning if the recent discussions about ancestral traits and the idea of being pampered had swayed her into becoming an ally to Vritter's offspring. He refused to believe they were innocent. She stood her ground, refusing to yield. She retorted that he had no understanding of the hardships they had endured, dismissing his accusations with a firm no. Enraged by her defiance, he lashed out, calling her a monster woman. With a furious cry, he hurled a rock, which struck the ground with a sharp impact, dangerously close to Yura and the cowering children. As the rock bounced away, he stood firm, his anger unwavering. He declared that he would not forgive her actions. But then, a sudden, raw power erupted. The small boy, Ars, his eyes wide with fury, screamed that he would not forgive those who bullied his friends. A crackling, zapping energy burst forth from him, shocking Yura and the other children who watched in stunned terror. He was held close by Yura, who, despite her own distress, pleaded for forgiveness on his behalf. He looked around, his innocent eyes wide, declaring that there were no bad people present. His innocent expression quickly turned to shock as Kakyu, with a cruel attack, sent Yura and the other children sprawling. Yura cried out, her body twisting as she fell, while he watched in horror. A short time later, the scene shifted to a desolate, broken wall, hinting at the passage of time and the aftermath of the recent chaos. She stirred, slowly regaining consciousness, her body aching from the attack. Boris, the large dragon, remained nearby as Yura cried out in pain, realizing she had woken up. He had cast healing magic on the other children, asking if their pain had subsided. He then apologized for the unexpected zappy zap that had accompanied his protective outburst. Now, the children, including Ars, played happily, having become friends. Yura and Boris watched them from a distance, Yura musing about Ars and the other children. They laughed with pure joy, their newfound camaraderie evident. Yura, seeing their happiness, smiled, understanding the simple delight of their play. He sat atop a crumbling wall, his clothes tattered from the earlier magical outburst. The children looked up at him, while Yura, noticing his torn attire, wondered about the cause. He then noticed the unique features on Yura's back, exclaiming with delight that she had cool wings growing there. Yura, surprised by his observation, acknowledged that he had indeed seen them. He eagerly questioned if she would be able to fly when they grew larger, and if he could grow wings too. Yura, however, explained that her wings were too small for flight and that humans, unlike her, could not grow them. He, the young Ars, excitedly asked Yura if she could communicate with Bors, the small dragon. He then wondered aloud if this meant he too might be a dragonkin, before quickly dismissing the thought as impossible. Still pondering the nature of fear and the unknown, Ars then innocently questioned Yura, asking if things she didn't understand were inherently scary. She firmly denied it, curious as to why he would ask. Yura, with a look of surprise, then declared that she found joy in learning about what she did not understand, a sentiment that seemed to resonate deeply within her. An elderly scholar, observing Ars's profound curiosity, praised him for his amazing insight, noting that despite his small stature, he thought like a true master. Yura, overhearing this, expressed her envy, wishing she had been born more normally, hinting at a deeper struggle with her unique physiology. She recalled the whispers, the cruel words calling her a half-demon, a monster, despite her lineage as a descendant blessed by the dragon god. The sight of her wings and scales often brought surprise, but also judgment. The scholar, walking beside Yura as they carried barrels, explained that humans, by their very nature, feared what they did not know, whether it be magical beasts, demons, or even other humans. He continued, stating that to avoid conflict, one must first strive to understand whatever they are communicating with. This fundamental principle, he revealed, was one of the primary reasons he had dedicated his life to becoming a scholar of magical creatures. Yura listened intently, a barrel balanced on her head. The scholar then concluded his lesson, asserting that if there were no differences between people, no one would ever feel the need to understand another. It was precisely because of these differences that they were driven to learn about each other. Yura, now smiling, agreed with his profound insight. Yura reflected on her own journey, realizing that while she had initially chosen her path to avoid conflict, her true motivation had been far simpler. She understood that it was simply fun to learn about people's differences, and a wistful expression crossed her face as she wondered if everyone felt that way. Perhaps then all their troubles would be solved. She looked on in astonishment as Ars, with a sudden burst of understanding, declared that he finally grasped what she had been trying to convey. He then explained, with a joyful smile, that differences existed precisely so that people could learn about one another and engage in enjoyable conversations. A realization dawned on her. Ars's simple truth also applied to her own many differences. Ars, still brimming with enthusiasm, leaned in and told her that her unique traits were there so everyone could learn about her and ultimately get along. He expressed a hopeful wish that his pure-hearted perspective was indeed the reality, while she watched him, deeply touched by his innocent wisdom. Overwhelmed by his sincerity, she softly uttered his name and offered her heartfelt thanks. Moments later, their journey continued, their footsteps echoing softly as they walked along the path. As they walked, she shared her aspiration to become a scholar, to study and disseminate knowledge across the world. He then eagerly declared his own ambition, to become a hero. He clarified his goal, stating with fierce determination that he wished to become much stronger, not merely like his parents, but beyond. She reassured him that he would not only gain immense power, but also the strength of heart necessary to save others, confidently affirming that he was sure to become such a hero. The Ars embraced Zeed Kruger with a joyful cry of "Uncle," while Yura stood nearby, observing the reunion. Other figures, including an elderly scholar and several children, were also present, some whispering amongst themselves. A woman with dark hair and horns, accompanied by two cat-eared children and another horned child, stood slightly apart, watching the scene unfold. The woman with dark hair and horns watched, her expression shifting to surprise, as Zeed Kruger offered a warm smile. Simultaneously, the three children, two with cat-like ears and one with horns, rushed forward with unbridled excitement. The horned child cried out, "Mom!" with desperate urgency, startling the woman with dark hair and horns, who looked on in shock. Yura, too, appeared taken aback by the sudden, emotional outburst. Zeed Kruger remained standing, a silent observer, as Yura, her face etched with determination, ran towards the woman and the children. Ars watched with a bright, innocent smile as Yura enveloped the woman with dark hair and horns in a tight embrace. The woman, now weeping openly, was clearly overwhelmed by the unexpected and heartfelt reunion. His father held both Kakyu and Alma close, explaining that his actions were merely a way of passing on a debt he had been unable to repay in the past. Kakyu's mother stood nearby, listening. The aristocrat, with a knowing look, clarified the sentiment, stating that such kindness was, in fact, a debt owed to a precious family. The dark elf woman listened intently, her expression thoughtful. On the 10th day of December, according to the holy calendar, the Elverant Federal Kingdom's Astanafa, holy city, bustled with life, its grand architecture spanning the river. High above, within Astakino Castle atop the ancient holy dragon tree, a report reached the monarch. A man claiming to be a mid-tier merchant named Kakyu had requested an imperial petition at the Magic Knight's garrison. The monarch's attendant confirmed the petition had been received, noting that its outlandish contents had initially seemed too unbelievable to be true. Moments later, Kakyu stood before the monarch, presenting his captives, the S-rank bounty Vridra, known as the Lion King, along with 35 members of the Dark Guild and 12 other wanted criminals. All were bound, their expressions a mix of defiance and despair. He then revealed his audacious request, stating that as his reward, he humbly sought the honor of a noble title and a small parcel of land. The monarch, a woman with pointed ears and an ornate headdress, regarded him with a smirk. A mere merchant, she mused, had taken down an S-rank bounty and now boldly sought a noble title in return. It was, she found, quite amusing. A command echoed through the halls. Bring him in. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, Vridra struggled against the holy knights restraining him, shouting that it hurt and demanding to be released, insisting he would not run. The holy knight commander, observing the commotion, ordered his men to not lower their guard, to use binding magic tools, and to proceed with extreme caution. Vridra merely scoffed, a guttural sound escaping his throat. As the knights tightened their grip, Vridra glared at one of them, his fangs bared, and spat a single, venomous word. Traitor. Inside, as Kakyu was led through the castle, whispers followed him. People murmured about him being the merchant who had been gaining attention among traveling merchants lately. A holy knight, overhearing the name Kakyu, reacted with a visible start, his helmeted face betraying a flicker of surprise and concern. The whispers continued, painting a picture of Kakyu's growing legend. They spoke of how he took down magic beasts that gave hunters and adventurers trouble, ensuring safe travels for others. Even bards, like the one playing a stringed instrument on a distant cliffside, sang about him. Yet, despite his fame, no one had ever seen his face, identifying him only as the employer of the mysterious Windsong mercenaries. He reflected on how taking on various requests and allowing rumors to spread had ultimately worked in his favor. Yet, a lingering thought persisted. He still couldn't quite believe the individual he encountered was real. Moments later, a royal attendant, an elf-like figure, approached him, instructing him to follow as Her Majesty had granted him an audience. He, the mid-tier merchant Kakyu, reacted with a visible jolt of surprise at the unexpected summons. He was then presented before Yuga Jorm Astanito, the second queen of the Elverant Federal Kingdom, who, from her ornate throne, acknowledged his presence and commended him for a great deed. Kneeling respectfully, he humbly dismissed her praise, stating that her words were too kind. The queen, with a slight smile, urged him not to be so stiff, explaining that she was merely a symbolic figure, a ruler in name only, whose true purpose was to unite the Federation. The real power, she clarified, lay with the provincial lords, a fact she assumed he was already aware of. He internally cursed, finding the situation crazy, as he had only asked for a petition, not a direct audience. He wondered why such matters weren't handled by generals or ministers. Despite his surprise, he resolved to remain calm, recognizing that the Elven Knight's display of force indicated a significant advantage on his side, making this a favorable negotiation. He then formally expressed his deep honor that Her Majesty had granted him the opportunity to present his petition today. He had already thoroughly researched the old landowners and the applicable laws, confident that if he could negotiate directly with the ruler and quickly secure a title and land, everything would proceed smoothly. The queen listened intently, then declared that she had heard his request and would recognize his achievements, granting him a noble title along with a reward. He looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and disbelief. She observed his reaction, a slight smirk playing on her lips, and playfully questioned if he was dissatisfied, calling him quite the greedy man. He could only utter a bewildered, drawn-out. He was utterly dumbfounded, his mind racing with disbelief. Seriously? She had granted it just like that? He had expected extensive background checks and lengthy discussions first. With a wide, ecstatic grin, he exclaimed, "And no, that is more than enough." Still processing the queen's decision, he acknowledged her words, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. Queen Yuruga, seated regally, informed him that the awards ceremony for his new title and reward would be held in a month, with details provided via official notice. She further explained that a governor would be dispatched to manage the land, whose authority he was to follow, while the refugees were his to handle as he saw fit. Across the vast, open plains, 2 covered wagons made their way, raising the question in his mind. A governor? Back in the city, Yura reminded him that he should be grateful for their assistance in securing his noble status, subtly suggesting he could return the favor with tax reductions. He seemed somewhat flustered by her directness. Meanwhile, the bustling port town Pomola Chamber of Commerce, the former guild base of the Lion King's resurgence, continued its operations, a surprising development in itself. Inside a grand office, the Vauclé regional governor, Mariza Balsafar, asserted his authority, stating that all requests should be directed to him. He reviewed a proposal for the redevelopment of the old Vauclé highway, noting its potential to generate significant tax revenue, though the budget would be slightly reduced and the income temporarily managed by him. Ryurin, observing the proceedings, questioned the meaning of a landless noble, learning that such a title was merely honorary, without territory or authoritative power. Overhearing this, Kakyu expressed his profound disappointment, realizing his new title was a significant letdown. Later, Kakyu fumed, realizing he had been thoroughly outmaneuvered. He cursed the elf queen, calling her a schemer and a mere figurehead who had completely taken advantage of him. He lamented that becoming a land-owning noble was supposed to be the quickest path to gaining influence with the Lawrence royal family. The narrative shifted to reveal Queen Yuruga's true nature. She was a high elf, daughter of the hero king Astanito, rumored to have lived for nearly 1,500 years. A millennium ago, she played a pivotal role in defeating the demon lord who once ruled the land, utilizing her potent spirit magic. Kakyu, sipping his tea, mused that he never expected to encounter someone with such vast life experience. He then directly asked Yuruga if she had not negotiated for the land, to which she confidently replied that she had, of course, negotiated. He continued his argument, asserting that since he had defeated Vridra, who had managed the land, and it was cultivated by refugees, its ownership should logically belong to them. However, the queen interjected with a firm, unequivocal nay. The queen then explained that the land had been abandoned 500 years prior due to an elemental dragon incursion. It had originally been part of the Vauclay Duke's territory and was never officially relinquished. Furthermore, the Duke's lineage had long since been absorbed by other families, leaving no heirs to bear the name. She continued, clarifying that there were merely no records of the land being managed for the past 120 years. Therefore, she asserted, it now belonged to her. She then challenged him, asking if he saw any problem with that. Queen Yuruga concluded her discourse, stating her distrust for those who lacked ambition. She suggested that Kakyu either sought noble status merely as a means to an end, or perhaps he had yet to fully realize his true ambitions, which would inevitably necessitate acquiring land. He stood before Queen Yuruga, who, with a knowing smile, challenged him. Show me your ambition, Merchant Kakyu. You have 1 month until the award ceremony. She then added, should you do so, I shall reconsider it. Kakyu could only utter a confused, ambition. He reflected on the queen's words, realizing she had likely never intended to grant him land from the start. Still, he mused, he could build influence over the royal family, much like Sebasta, though it would take time. He needed to devise another plan. Moments later, the queen addressed him again, her tone gentle yet probing. Dear, she began, it may be presumptuous of me to say this, but she continued, observing him with a keen eye. You looked truly alive when I saw you giving orders to the refugees and mercenaries, tending to their needs. It was as if you had returned home after a long time. The queen concluded her observation, stating that she felt he unconsciously desired something more than just land to accomplish his plans. But now, she added, her voice softening, you seem lonely. He looked down at his reflection in his tea, a thoughtful, almost melancholic expression on his face. Just as Kakyu was deep in thought, a loud, boisterous voice cut through the air. So this is where you were. It's been a while, Kakyu. Congratulations. Silga, the Elverant shipping merchant, burst through the doors, proclaiming he had brought a good match and would introduce him. Kakyu, startled, noted Silga's voice was as loud as ever. Then, Liana Sebasta, Louis Sebasta's wife, stepped forward, explaining she was opening a branch in Pandola and had come to pay her respects. Urza and Yura, also present, discussed how boosting the economy came first, even if the leader of the new trading company was human, acknowledging the competition from Silga's shipping. Silga, with a confident, almost mischievous grin, then declared, 100 years from now, the ones laughing on the seas will be us. Kakyu, taken aback by the sheer scale of the ambition, conceded internally that he would no longer be surprised by the elves' unique sense of time. Silga then turned his attention back to Kakyu, asking him what he was talking about, and provocatively suggested that if he were in Kakyu's place, the queen would probably have taken a liking to him. Kakyu looked utterly bewildered by the sudden shift in conversation. Kakyu, still processing, wondered if his desire to become a noble wasn't the same as ambition, admitting he didn't quite understand. Silga, observing him, simply called his proposal quite peculiar. Silga continued, noting Kakyu's lingering attachment to land. He then offered a different perspective, suggesting that managing a territory was a hassle anyway, and asked if Kakyu's ultimate goal could only be achieved by becoming a land-owning noble. Kakyu, looking frustrated, conceded that it would be the fastest route. He remained deep in thought, reflecting on Silga's earlier words. The queen, Silga had suggested, likely perceived Kakyu's deep desire for land, yet also sensed that he hadn't fully grasped the underlying reason for it, implying a lack of true, defined ambition. As Kakyu pondered, Silga and Liana observed him from a distance. Then, Silga turned to Kakyu, directly challenging him by asking about the origin of his own ambition. Kakyu, momentarily distracted, expressed surprise at the mention of Silga having so many children, attempting to change the subject. Silga, however, quickly dismissed the diversion, insisting he was not changing the subject. Silga pressed on, explaining that Kakyu's question about the source of ambition had actually struck at the core of the issue. He then asked Kakyu what was truly irreplaceable to him, and what he fundamentally believed in, asserting that true ambition stemmed from such profound convictions. Kakyu, looking at Silga and a small child, declared with certainty that his family was his irreplaceable motivation. A brief, poignant memory of his family flashed through his mind, reinforcing his conviction. Silga, having heard Kaku's answer, granted him a month to further contemplate his ambition, stating that the rest was now up to him. With that, he and Liana departed, leaving Kaku to watch them go, his expression thoughtful. He began to reflect on the deeper reasons behind his desire for land, his thoughts drifting to past struggles. He recalled a time when he rode a great fire dragon, fighting alongside other humanoids and beastmen in a dense forest, a vivid memory of conflict and survival. His introspection continued as he considered what truly obtaining a territory would mean for him and his family. Images of past efforts and challenges flashed through his mind, carrying heavy loads, working diligently at a desk, and even tilling the earth, all underscoring the profound significance of land. Moments later, Kaku was engaged in a lively game of soccer with several children. He called out to them, telling them to leave the play to him, demonstrating his protective and involved nature. He then sternly admonished Ars, who had used magic during their game, reminding him of the rules. Urza and other children watched, some with wide-eyed wonder at Ars's magical display, others simply observing the playful reprimand. Kaku, consumed by a mental block, clutched his head in frustration. He felt agonizingly close to a breakthrough, needing just one more push to grasp it, yet it remained just out of reach. The thought of his father echoed in his mind. Meanwhile, Ars, the young child, approached him with concern, offering a special dumpling to make him feel better. Urza-san and other children watched, their expressions a mix of curiosity and worry. A loud crash suddenly echoed, originating from the training grounds. Kaku, now eating the dumpling, found its taste peculiar like earth but admitted it helped. The children reacted with surprise to the unexpected noise. The source of the commotion was Vridra, the Lion King, who was being forcibly restrained by two other beastmen. He struggled violently, his face contorted in fury, demanding to be released. He vehemently rejected Anui as the next chieftain, declaring his intent to prove himself the better choice. Anui, in turn, refused to accept someone as cowardly as Vridra leading the mercenary band. Anui challenged Vridra to take on the Trial of the Fangs, a dangerous tradition that had been banned decades ago. Still struggling against his restraints, Vridra was told by Anui that he would not receive special treatment, being merely the chieftain's younger brother. Anui further asserted that even if Vridra attempted the trial, there was no guarantee Kakusama would accept it. As Vridra was led away, still fuming, Anui dismissed him with a cutting remark, calling him a wimp. Other villagers observed the tense scene. Kaku, Ars, Urza-san, and the other children observed the broken wall, which Anui explained was a symbol of personal challenges. He stated that everyone has their own walls to face, and the way to break through them is in the snowy expanse of the village. Kaku and Arno diligently shoveled snow. Kaku remarked that he was accustomed to such harsh winters. Arno, surprised, asked if his memory had returned, to which Kaku confirmed it had, at least partially. A brief memory surfaced of his parents, his father stern and his mother smiling. Arno continued their conversation, pressing Kaku on his past. He questioned what Kaku would do if he were, in fact, a murderer or some other kind of criminal, implying a shared understanding of their potentially dark histories. Meanwhile, a memory from Urza's mother surfaced, recounting her own past. She explained that during the last war, she had been a soldier, killing many and even stealing from the battlefield, including from her own side. Though they might have called her a hero if they had won, a peace treaty resulted in her being branded a murderer and an outcast by the townsfolk. Her young daughter, Alma, stood beside her, oblivious to the weight of her mother's words. Arno then elaborated, stating that most people living in their settlement had pasts that forced them to leave their old homes. He observed that they were now trying their best to live honestly, rather than clinging to their dark histories, and it was clear Kaku was doing the same. They both agreed that when they founded the village, they had made one crucial agreement. This village would not cast out people based on their pasts. It would become their true homeland. Later, Kaku was seen fishing by a gnarled tree, his line cast into the water. From behind the dense foliage, Urza-san watched him intently. He explained to her that the reason he had made someone like her the captain of the mercenaries was quite simple. He didn't know any of them. A flashback revealed Kaku addressing a diverse crowd, offering them a chance to serve under him without fear of being turned over to the authorities. Most of the assembled individuals hesitated, worried about the reactions of Vridra and his lieutenants. However, Urza's brother was the only one who raised his hand without a moment's hesitation, a determined look on his face. Still fishing, Kaku mused that he trusted someone willing to take on such a role. He then turned the question back to Urza-san, asking why she had raised her hand back then, as the person who steps up first often draws resentment, especially when it involves betrayal. Urza-san, her expression somber, confessed that she had always been afraid of her brother. Her words hung heavy in the air, revealing a deep-seated fear. A chilling flashback then showed Urza's brother, a mere 10 years old at the time, standing amidst the bodies of slaughtered elf adventurers. Urza-san, who was only 1 year old then, remembered that when asked why he had committed such an act, his answer was simply that he had done it. He stood amidst the carnage, his face smeared with blood, sharp teeth bared in a feral grin. He muttered they were there because his father, the chieftain, had imprisoned him, fearing the escalating tensions with the Elven King. However, he escaped when he was 13, leaving his cell empty. He harbored a fierce hatred for elves, considering them eternal enemies due to centuries of conflict, a sentiment Urza-san never truly understood. Then, he killed all their male siblings and their father, seizing the title of chieftain for himself. One day, he had a child of his own, and Urza-san was entrusted with their care. It was then that she began to understand his ideals, to unite their people and create a country where their clan's children could have hope for the future, free from discrimination or persecution. But Kakyu, listening intently, knew his methods were deeply flawed. She realized she had to stop him, but fear held her captive, forcing her to continue living as the dirty criminal he had called her. Had he continued, those children would have inevitably followed his dark path of domination. Then, the inevitable happened. The scene shifted back to the present, where the elderly scholar, his eyes wide with alarm, questioned Urza-san, asking if she was insane for wanting to let the fire dragon escape, while simultaneously shushing her to keep her voice down. He then explained that he knew she had the children and simply wanted her to release the dragon. Urza-san, confused, asked why he was telling her this, implying she was not in a position to comply. The elderly scholar let out a small laugh, while Urza-san, visibly shocked, questioned if he was planning to die, insisting that the situation was far from amusing. He calmly asserted that this was something worth risking his life for, as too many people would suffer otherwise, echoing her own earlier words. Urza-san then asked who else it should be if not him, but he firmly told her she didn't have to throw away her life. Urza-san's eyes widened in shock as the elderly scholar revealed the depth of his tragedy. His homeland had been attacked by magic beasts, and many of his friends, even his own daughter, had been devoured. Still reeling from the scholar's tragic revelation, Urza-san dismissed his grand ambition to build a world free of conflict through mutual understanding as mere idealistic foolishness. Unfazed, the elderly scholar explained the root of his personal tragedy. A violent magic beast cub was mistaken for another species, leading to its parents' incensed retaliation and subsequent hunting. He continued, acknowledging his own lack of strength, yet declared his willingness to risk his life for this foolish idea. The scholar then elaborated that in the brief time remaining to him, he had diligently passed on as much knowledge and resolve as he could, intending to entrust it all to the next generation, for he was simply too old now. Urza-san, her expression still troubled, pressed him, asking if he, as a parent, truly understood her feelings. He responded with a somber gaze, admitting that when he looked at the child, it reminded him of his own daughter, and if his life could secure that child's future, it was a price he would gladly pay. Elsewhere, Kakyu pondered something so powerful he would be willing to bet his life on it. Beside him, Alma looked up with wide eyes, while Yura, tears streaming down her face, reflected on a profound sense of being entrusted with something significant. Kakyu then turned to Vryamus, acknowledging that both his brothers and the professor's ideals held truth in their own ways, yet also contained inherent flaws. As Kakyu's hand was shown, recalling his past actions, Alma, her face etched with distress, confessed her own perceived foolishness, admitting she was too dumb to discern what was truly right. Yet, she affirmed that once she grasped the truth, she felt an undeniable responsibility to act upon it. Vryamus, still holding a fish he had caught, offered a self-deprecating apology for his rambling, lamenting that he was simply not cut out to be a captain, and that despite all his grand pronouncements, he had ultimately changed nothing. Still struggling with the fish, Vryamus then asked Kakyu about his earlier question, requesting help to remove the hook. Kakyu, a subtle smile gracing his lips, replied that he might finally have an answer to his own question. Suddenly, the Lion King, his face contorted in a furious snarl, roared that it's coming and vowed to kill. His massive, clawed paw was shown, followed by a close-up of his menacing, growling maw, signaling an imminent and dangerous confrontation. He stood before his people, his face etched with a mix of determination and despair. He spoke of a trial of the fangs, an ancient tradition of the lion tribe, which left many in disbelief and confusion. Kakyu, Urza-san, Vryamus, Alma, Yura, and the other villagers listened with concern, wondering what this trial entailed. He continued, explaining that this tradition was the method by which the strongest and bravest were chosen to become the next chieftain. His gaze swept over the assembled faces, conveying the gravity of his words. The trial itself was brutal. One had to steal a cub from a chimera's den and emerge alive. As he spoke, a flashback or vision showed him. The Lion King, in the midst of this very trial, grappling with a monstrous chimera, its multiple heads snarling, as he desperately tried to protect a small cub. Kakyu, witnessing the intensity of the Lion King's resolve, felt a surge of frustration. He knew the governor's eyes were upon them, and he could not afford any reckless actions that might jeopardize their fragile peace. The Lion King, in the memory or vision, fought fiercely, his powerful claws tearing at the chimera's hide, while the beast retaliated with savage force, its serpentine tail lashing out. Despite his strength, the chimera's attack was relentless. One of its heads snapped at his arm, inflicting a painful wound, yet he clung to the cub. His comrade, a beast man with spiky hair, urged him to return the cub, pleading for him to hurry before the chimera could reclaim its offspring. As the chimera continued its furious assault, Kakyu, Urza-san, Vryamus, Alma, and Yura rushed forward, intervening in the desperate struggle. Kakyu, addressing the enraged chimera, apologized for startling it and promised to return its child, urging it to calm itself and retreat. He then declared that he would take responsibility for his comrade's mistake, while the Lion King, still clutching the cub, muttered an apology to Kakyu-sama. Kakyu, his expression firm, told his comrade that he would not allow him to repeat such a reckless act. The comrade, a beast man with spiky hair, listened intently, his face showing remorse. He then turned to the Lion King, stating that as chieftain and captain of the mercenaries, he swore he would get his people under control. The Lion King, still on the ground, looked up at him, acknowledging his words. Kakyu, with a slight smile, told the Lion King he would count on him. The Lion King, in turn, responded that he now understood that this was something only he could do, accepting his role and responsibility. Kakyu, with a confident smirk, instructs Ryamus to join him as his attendant for the upcoming award ceremony. He promises to show him something, urging him to watch closely. Meanwhile, Queen Yuruga, seated regally amidst towering bookshelves, acknowledges Kakyu's arrival. She declares that she will now reveal something only she can do. As Kakyu walks down the long, carpeted aisle of a grand hall, past numerous kneeling figures, Queen Yuruga challenges him from her elevated throne, demanding he show her his ambition. He internally reflects on his ideal, which is to secure a homeland, a goal he is willing to pursue even at the cost of his own life. He understands that Her Majesty's talk of ambition signifies a strong will to realize one's ideals. Queen Yuruga, with a subtle smile, remarks that Kakyu speaks with considerable boldness for an outsider. He promptly retorts that the same could be said of Her Majesty. Her words ignite outrage among the assembled nobles, who accuse Kakyu of being the true outsider. However, Queen Yuruga silences them, asserting that in Voclay, everyone is an outsider. The only distinction lies in whether they possess a home to which they can return. She then instructs Kakyu to continue his explanation. Kakyu clarifies that he intends no disrespect to his predecessors, but for lords already established in their own lands, the development of a remote region like Voclay holds little value. He explains that Voclay has been nearly uninhabited for 5 centuries, its magic beasts made extremely violent by the dragon's magic power, making managing and developing such a vast region tremendously costly and risky. He continues, arguing that for those without land, the relative benefit of developing Voclay is far greater, and by actively pursuing its development, they too will see significant gains. Queen Yuruga, her expression unchanged, reminds Kakyu that she had asked him to demonstrate ambition, not merely discuss reason and profit, as such matters do not interest her. He then reveals his personal history, stating that he was once one of those outcasts who had lost their homelands. The village that took him in was a place where such individuals gathered, and he became the man he is today thanks to them. He concludes by stating that he and his son come from a newly settled village. He continued his impassioned plea, explaining that his people had poured everything into establishing their homeland because they had nowhere else to go. He recounted how that very village, his ideal, had been tragically burned down by raiders, leaving nothing but ashes. His eyes burning with fierce determination, he declared that this time he would build his own territory, a place he could protect himself. He vowed to defend it with everything he possessed, ensuring it would never become a burden to the kingdom. His motivation was clear: to provide a home for his son, Ars, who had never known one, and for his wife, who had been exiled and had nowhere to return. Kneeling before Queen Yuruga, he implored her to allow them to make Voclay their homeland, a place where Ars could grow up as the happiest child in the world. He emphasized that they sought not an ideal world, but simply a place to belong, much like the Jolan village, where only those who had lost their homes had gathered. Queen Yuruga, observing his fervent plea, chuckled softly, remarking that while she had asked him to show his ambition, she had not expected such a heavy reliance on emotion. Yet, she found intriguing. She then reflected on her own ancestors, who 1,000 years ago had founded their nation and often spoke in much the same way as Kakyu, gathering the elven clans. A gentle smile gracing her lips, she declared her favor for Kakyu, stating that from this moment on, he would bear the name of Voclay. Kakyu, looking up with a mix of surprise and profound relief, heard her grant him the right to hold land, along with his reward and title. He quietly acknowledged her decision. Later, as he rode through the streets in a carriage, Kakyu waved to the cheering crowds, offering his heartfelt thanks to Her Majesty for her decision. Filled with an overwhelming sense of joy, Kakyu looked upon the bustling, happy faces around him. He exclaimed that his father and all the others were truly incredible, marveling at the sheer happiness radiating from everyone in their new homeland. He continued to exclaim his amazement at the incredible sight, reiterating how happy everyone appeared. Nearby, Yura and Urza-san, equally pleased, acknowledged the profound gratitude everyone felt towards Kakyu for making this new beginning possible. Still amidst the joyous crowd, Kakyu declared his personal resolve, stating that he, too, wished to be more helpful to his father and the others, eager to contribute further to their shared future. Meanwhile, a grand ship sailed across the open sea. On its deck, Louis Sebasta observed the horizon, noting that the scent on the wind had changed. The president confirmed their imminent arrival at Elvret. Kakyu, standing with his companions, pondered the kind of man he was becoming and what challenges awaited him in the new homeland, expressing his eager anticipation for the journey ahead. High above the clouds, The young boy Ars, bundled in a fur-lined jacket and hat, cheered with unbridled joy. He clung to the back of the great red dragon, Bors, exclaiming how wonderful the sensation was and urging his companion onward. His exuberance, however, was met with alarm. Yura, clinging to Ars, desperately called out to him to stop, warning that his reckless behavior was dangerous. Bors, meanwhile, let out a mighty roar, his massive jaws agape. Despite Yura's pleas for him to stay still, Ars remained resolute, declaring that he would do his very first errand with all his might. The trio, Bors carrying Ars and Yura, soared over the bustling port city of Pomola in the Vauclé territory of the Elvent Federal Kingdom. It had been 3 years and 7 months since Kakyu began raising Ars, a period marked by significant changes. A few days prior, within the confines of Kakyu's estate in the Vauclé territory, Bors mused aloud to himself, wondering if fate truly worked in such strange and unpredictable ways. Yura, diligently sweeping the floor, echoed Bors's sentiment, reflecting on their current circumstances. She remarked on the irony of working as a servant in the household of a noble and a viscount, especially considering that just a year ago, they were treated as mere weapons by criminals. Bors, perched nearby, simply responded with a questioning sound, acknowledging her words. She continued, expressing profound gratitude for Kakyu, who not only saved them, but also provided her and her mother with work, proving himself to be truly kind. Yura also recalled how happy Urza had been when she expressed her desire to become a scholar, and how Urza had even taken it upon herself to teach her. Yura then admonished Bors not to speak ill of Urza, reminding him that Urza could be seriously frightening when angered. Bors, however, seemed unfazed, muttering that everything Kakyu did was likely part of some grand scheme. His words caught Yura by surprise, her eyes widening as she turned to look at him, a silent question in her gaze. Moments later, Yura finished her chores, expressing a slight disappointment that there was nothing left to do. Just then, Ars burst into the room, his face alight with enthusiasm, offering his help and asking if there was anything he could do. Yura, understanding his eagerness, explained that Kakyu and the others were always handling the difficult tasks, and besides, taking care of Bors was her job. Ars, however, pouted, insisting that he wanted to be useful too, clearly frustrated by his inability to contribute. He pondered the tasks ahead, hoping to find something useful to do if he observed his father's work. Yura, meanwhile, considered the possibility of a task simple enough even for a child. His eyes widened with excitement, asking if such a thing were truly possible. Yura, with a sly smile, presented him with a small, ornate key, suggesting they simply sneak a peek at what lay beyond. The key, it seemed, was for Kakyu-sama and his wife's residence, a grand building they rarely occupied during the day. Their duties often took them to Eifer, the town where their subjects lived and where the lord's castle stood. Yura explained that Eifer was hours away on foot, but if she used the master key Kakyu-sama had given all his servants, they could bypass the arduous journey. With a soft click, the key turned in the lock. Moments later, they found themselves atop the walls of the ancient city of Eifer, located in the Vauclé territory. Ars, accompanied by Bors, exclaimed in awe at their instantaneous arrival, marveling at the magic key's incredible power. From their vantage point, the formidable castle of Eifer dominated the landscape, its sturdy walls and towers a testament to its enduring strength. As they arrived, Kakyu was already engaged in a serious discussion with Vryamus, his subordinate. Vryamus reported that the Pomola intelligence unit had uncovered the trade routes Vridra and his group were utilizing. Kakyu, surprised by the extent of the findings, learned that there had apparently been a military clash with demons in the kingdom of Ural, and that they were exporting goods all the way to Gazaria. He admitted he had not known about the conflict in Ural. He then turned to Yura, confirming that the Ural kingdom was indeed her homeland, recalling a past conversation with Arnaud about the region. Vryamus continued his report, revealing that the Sebasta company was also conducting market research and had even found records tracking rival businesses. Kakyu reacted with a sharp intake of breath, realizing the implications of such extensive corporate espionage. He meticulously reviewed the intelligence reports, his expression serious as he sifted through stacks of documents. Yura, observing him, inquired if the current report was the latest, noting it should have been from 10 days prior, not 4 years back as the pile suggested. He continued to examine the outdated information. As he processed the information, a sinister grin spread across his face. He muttered to himself, acknowledging a particularly nasty idea attributed to Sebastian, hinting at a deeper, perhaps unsettling, understanding of the Sebasta company's machinations. Moments later, the mood shifted dramatically. Yura, her eyes sparkling, declared this would be a big shopping trip. He merely smiled, while Urza and Ars, standing nearby, looked utterly bewildered, wondering what grand excursion was being planned. Suddenly, Ars, brimming with enthusiasm, stepped forward and loudly offered to handle the shopping himself. His unexpected eagerness surprised Yura and Kakyu, and this moment marked the beginning of their current predicament. Now, high above a sprawling town, Yura and Bors descended, preparing to land. She explained to Bors that they were bringing Ars to the destination of his errand. Below, Ars, full of youthful energy, bounded away, while Yura called out a warning for him to be careful and not follow strangers. Kakyu and Urza watched his departure, Kakyu with a thoughtful expression, Urza with a slight frown. Urza, still wearing her furry hat, turned to Kakyu and asked him to step away from his mini Kakyu for a moment. He acknowledged her request, then activated a small device, confirming that ours had indeed departed, a subtle beep indicating the successful transmission of data. With a dramatic flourish, Kakyu declared that the tailing operation to observe his beloved son's first assignment would now commence. He pointed forward, rallying his impromptu Ars defense squad to move out. Yura and Urza, however, looked less than thrilled, with Yura openly calling his theatrics a nuisance, and Bors mirroring their exasperation. Meanwhile, Ars arrived at the imposing Pomola port town castle gate. A stern guard, armed with a spear, stood watch, his presence a formidable barrier to the bustling town beyond. With a bright, confident smile, Ars addressed the guard, explaining that he was there on an errand for Viscount Vauclay. The guard, in turn, greeted the young master and inquired about the purpose of his visit. Ars cheerfully confirmed his understanding and waved goodbye to the guard, who returned the gesture, bidding him farewell as the young boy ventured deeper into the bustling port town. He, disguised in a hooded cloak, received final instructions from Kakyu, who thanked him for adhering to the plan. Yura, Urza, and Bors, similarly cloaked, observed from nearby. Kakyu, however, playfully chided the young boy, suggesting his disguise lacked conviction and made their covert operation appear more like a shady deal. Moments later, having successfully entered Pomola port town, the young boy, accompanied by Bors, excitedly pointed towards the bustling market. He declared the first mission, entry into town, complete, and eagerly anticipated the next task, buying goods at the market. His charm was immediately evident as he approached a merchant. The merchant, amused by the child's earnestness, not only provided the requested 3 haza potatoes, 10 gappa leaves, and 1 sack of elbit wheat flour, but also offered a little extra, impressed by the boy's responsibility and his ability to provide exact change. His endearing nature continued to win over the townsfolk. Another merchant, a woman, exclaimed at his cuteness, insisting he take more items without payment. A concerned man echoed her sentiment, urging him to simply take whatever he needed. He soon found himself laden with a massive basket of goods, far more than he had intended to purchase, all thanks to the generous bonuses. Kakyu, observing from a distance with Urza, Yura, and Bors, expressed his astonishment, noting that in the past, he had often been charged triple the original price for goods. Urza, equally surprised, remarked on the incredible bonuses the young boy received. He proudly declared that with the elite education he had provided, Ars was easily smarter than children 10 years his senior, making such success only natural. Urza and Yura, smiling, agreed that they were indeed doting parents. As the young boy continued his errand, Kakyu and his squad discussed the next phase. The problem, Kakyu stated, was Mission 03, buying a slave from the Sebasta company. She, with a surprised expression, asked Kakyu if this was the big purchase he had mentioned earlier. He confirmed her theory with a confident yeah. He reflected on the various clues that had led him to this conclusion. The ongoing war between the Ural Kingdom and the demons, the suspicious activity records of the Sebasta company, and a particular rumor. All these pieces of information, when combined, brought a certain possibility to light. The man he sought, a certain big name, who fit his criteria, was possibly residing in Pomola as a slave. Kakyu's father vehemently argued that the mission was an adult's responsibility, far too difficult for Ars. Kakyu, however, insisted that Ars's task was merely to confirm the individual's existence and, if possible, recruit them. He continued to assert that Ars was not ready, recalling a heated argument from days prior where Kakyu had been accused of spoiling the boy. Kakyu, with a stern expression, maintained that Ars was capable. Kakyu's father then reflected on the profound differences in values between their world and Ars's original world, a thought that often gave him pause. He explained that as the heir to a noble family, Ars needed to grasp his societal standing from a young age. Furthermore, with Ars's inherent power, concerns about security were largely irrelevant, a point illustrated by a memory of Ars effortlessly navigating a bustling market, charming merchants into giving him extra goods. Kakyu's father concluded by stating his desire to respect Ars's genuine wishes, a sentiment Kakyu echoed. He then clarified that they were secretly following Ars and would only intervene if the situation became truly dangerous. Moments later, Ars arrived at the Sebasta Company's Pomola branch, a prominent building on the bustling street. Still clutching his market purchases, he cheerfully announced his purpose, to buy a slave. The staff, including an elderly man and a woman, exchanged surprised glances, questioning if such a young child had come alone for such a serious transaction. From within, Liana Sebasta, the Pomola branch manager, emerged with a warm smile, greeting Ars and remarking on how much he had grown over the past year. Ars, in turn, inquired about Sebastian's presence and reiterated his mission to acquire a strong slave. Liana, maintaining her composure, asked what brought him to their establishment today. He expressed his surprise, having been told by his father that Sebastian would be there. Liana, with a gentle smile, explained that her husband was currently at the main store in Lawrence. He stood before Liana Sebasta as she declared that a powerful individual named Gaia-san was expected to be present. A male employee of the Sebasta company listened intently. With a slight smile, she then instructed the employee to immediately bring both her husband and him, referring to Gaius, to her. Meanwhile, Kakyu, observing from a hidden vantage point, recognized the name Gaius, recalling him as a renowned former S-rank adventurer from the Dragon Kingdom. He realized his target was indeed here. The imposing figure of Gaius, the strongest warrior among humans and the war hero known as the Giant Slayer, was revealed. He stood blindfolded, a debt slave, despite his past as an S-rank adventurer. Ars, wide-eyed, exclaimed that he had never seen a human so massive and muscular. Liana, amused, remarked that Gaius was meant to be a secret, the highlight of their new branch, and acknowledged Kaku's impressive insight. Gaius, hearing the child's voice, subtly reacted. She then clarified for Ars that adventurer ranks were not solely about raw power, but rather indicated an adventurer's general ability to handle missions appropriate for their rank with ease. Ars, still processing, inquired if an S rank was truly that extraordinary. Kaku, in his mind, elaborated that an S rank like Gaius possessed the sheer strength to effortlessly overpower even an S-ranked threat such as Vridra, the formidable Lion King. He concluded that Gaius possessed precisely the talent they required, a combination of immense strength and unparalleled experience as an adventurer. Ars, still pondering, questioned why such a powerful individual would end up as a slave. Kaku, with a knowing glance at Gaius's blindfolded face, suggested it was likely due to his eyes. Gaius confirmed Kaku's unspoken observation, stating that his eyes were cursed by demons, rendering him completely blind. He offered an apology to Ars. Despite his blindness, Gaius, the legendary giant slayer, questioned Ars if he was still interested in him, claiming he was worthless as a warrior. Ars, however, beamed with a confident smile, affirming that he could indeed see and was very much interested. He then challenged Ars, asking if he was calling him a liar. Ars, struggling to articulate his unique perception, tried to explain that it was not that Gaius couldn't see, but rather that he possessed a different kind of sight. Ars, eager to demonstrate, boldly challenged Gaius to a fight to prove his point, launching a kick that Gaius effortlessly blocked. Kaku, observing with Urza, remarked on Ars's audacity and suggested they take their sparring outside. Following Kaku's suggestion, Gaius and Ars moved outside, with Ars charging forward, ready to continue their impromptu sparring session with unbridled enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Kaku, Urza, and Yura watched from a distance. Urza, her face etched with concern, wondered aloud if they were truly starting a fight, but Kaku calmly assured her that he would intervene if necessary. Ars, still brimming with excitement, pleaded with Gaius to let him practice, his joy evident. Gaius, amused by the young talent, laughed heartily and affectionately called Ars a little rough diamond, inviting him to continue their exchange. Without hesitation, Ars unleashed a powerful lightning-based attack, sending bolts of crackling energy hurtling towards Gaius, who braced himself to meet the formidable assault. Gaius, with a focused and determined expression, prepared to counter the lightning attack. He clenched his fists, revealing a formidable bare fist technique that he proudly declared was self-taught. With a powerful leap, Gaius executed his signature move, the Sky Splitter, soaring through the air and seemingly cleaving the very lightning attack with his bare hands, a testament to his immense strength. Urza and Yura watched in stunned disbelief, their faces contorted in shock as they questioned how Gaius could have possibly cut through the lightning itself, utterly astonished by the display of power. He stood firm, having effortlessly cut through Ars's lightning attack. The onlookers were astonished, questioning if the display was magic, but Kaku, observing intently, sensed no magical power. He realized the lightning had changed course before reaching Gaius's hand, naturally flowing toward areas of thinner air that Gaius had created, a technique he called the path of the true sky. He acknowledged Ars's impressive power, but clarified that his own technique involved tearing through the air with sheer speed and strength, guiding the lightning along the path of the true sky. Urza, watching intently, still struggled to comprehend, noting that while impressive, it wasn't sophisticated enough to be called a true magic spell. Suddenly, Gaius lunged forward with incredible speed, causing Ars to exclaim in surprise as the ground beneath them shattered from the force of his movement. He closed the distance instantly, delivering a powerful, open-handed strike that sent Ars flying backward. The force of the blow propelled Ars through the air with a cry, while Urza and Yura watched in horror, shouting his name. Gaius, however, remained calm, assuring them there was no need to worry. Moments later, Gaius stood over a dazed Ars, who was now sitting on the ground. He apologized, explaining that it was his first fight while holding back, and he had trouble controlling his strength. He then asked Ars if he was all right. From the sidelines, Kaku watched with a satisfied smirk, declaring it the best show of talent he had ever witnessed. Ars, despite his defeat, mirrored Kaku's enthusiasm, proclaiming it the best fight he had ever experienced and confirming he was perfectly fine. Kaku then turned his attention to Ars, explaining that he needed someone who could serve as both a martial and swordsmanship instructor for his mercenaries, and also as a private tutor to ensure Ars didn't resort to reckless combat again. He concluded that even with his blindness, Gaius was the perfect candidate, though a man of his caliber would not come cheap and reserve the right to reject any buyer he deemed unworthy. Kaku then challenged Ars to negotiate. Following Kaku's instruction, Ars approached Gaius, who was now sitting, and with wide, earnest eyes, asked him to be his friend. Gaius, initially surprised, let out a booming laugh, finding the request for friendship delightful. He then asked Ars for his name, to which the boy proudly responded, Ars. Kaku, Urza, and Yura observed the exchange with Kaku thinking, I knew it, and Urza and Yura looking relieved and amused. He mused on the peculiar turn of events, noting that Ars bore the same name as a hero from ages past. He considered it a strange twist of fate, yet undeniably a good omen. Indeed, someone's seemingly inconsequential actions could ripple outwards, shaping the destinies of many. Much like a butterfly flapping its wings could stir a storm across the vast sea. Ars, for his part, was utterly convinced that this momentous twist of fate was unfolding before them. With a bright, determined expression, he declared their newfound friendship. He then extended his small hand towards Gaius, a wide, joyful smile gracing his face as he exclaimed, Let's get along well, Gaius. Gaius met his grasp, their hands firmly clasped, sealing the bond. This seemingly small decision, made in that very moment, held the potential to lead them both toward a great and unforeseen destiny.